This boy was sent by the association's own SS rank hunter to a D rank dungeon. That was enough to make even the party leader question who this scrawny kid really is, and while everyone was introducing themselves, a girl suddenly kissed the protagonist on the cheek, saying that's how she greets people. I thought that was kind of weird, and it seems the protagonist thought so too, since he wasn't happy about it. Later, in the same dungeon, he even saves the girl from a giant boss. Of course, that was enough to make the girl in the tiny shorts blush. She already fell for the young guy, especially after he cleared the dungeon all by himself. The next day, the girl was still thinking about him during the entrance exam. She was already going crazy over him, and when another higher-ranked hunter started hitting on her, guess who showed up to save the day once again? The young guy who dresses like a 90-year-old man, of course. He easily restrains the bully until the guards take him away. But when the boy touches her, she's actually happy about it, and she thinks this boy carries himself with incredible maturity for his age. In fact, he doesn't care about relationships at all, not even when another hot woman starts flirting with him. I'm starting to think this guy is gay, but I can't prove it. The truth is, in this boy's mind, all these women are just babies to him, and what I'm about to tell you also explains why he dresses like a 120-year-old man. That's because he is an old man, literally. This is the hunter Guak Pilsong, the legendary hunter who has cleared more than 10,000 dungeons, and he is only 200 years old, at least judging by the decayed state he's somehow still alive in. But how did he become young again like that, and why do all the hot girls want him now? There's no reincarnation, no random powers pulled out of nowhere, or anything like that. After years of experience and grinding countless dungeons, he simply became young again. I'll tell the story from the beginning so you can understand.
Why are you gay?
One day, everything changed as monsters arrived to our world from mysterious gates. At the same time, some individuals transcended humanity by gaining supernatural powers. They became known as hunters as they began to put their life on the line to repel the incoming monsters. The crowd began to grow worried as the gate of the dungeon said to be challenging for the best was still not closed, when suddenly a man pointed out someone exiting the gate, and so he came out. All began to cheer as the dungeon was getting closed. The hunter affirmed that he had successfully conquered the dungeon. This was none other than the legendary hunter Guak Pilson, who closed countless gates despite being over 60 years old. But suddenly, one day, this powerful hunter disappeared without leaving a trace, leaving only the tales of his prowess behind. A decade after the disappearance, the old man affirmed that he was the legendary hunter, yet seeing how the young man didn't believe him left him particularly annoyed. The man then began to complain to his colleague, stating that this old man thinks he is Guak Pilson, affirming that this must be nonsense as there was no way a legendary hunter would be stuck in this nursing home, yet the friend stated that it was possible as they had the same name and age. With that, the both of them assumed that this old man must have been a comedian in his youth. They then began to talk about how they wouldn't have taken this job if they were hunters, and that they should get a drink later. Just then, one of them noticed an exhausted man. He quickly rushed to check on him, but was then left baffled as a giant ant suddenly appeared in the room. As it gripped the man's neck, he began to beg for rescue, only for him to have his head chopped off by the giant insect. The nurse was terrified as he watched this atrocity in horror. The ant then decided to kill another man, but just then the armed one jumped into the air and stabbed the vile beast in its head, leaving the man utterly shocked. He was even more surprised when his savior turned out to be Guak Pilson, who asked him to quickly escape. The legendary hunter then asked the nurse to evacuate everyone as the ants were many, leaving him concerned for his safety as he was about to face the monsters alone. Guak Pilson reassured him by stating that he won't do anything past his limits. With that, the mocking nurse was certain that this was the true Guak Pilson and wondered about the reason behind his presence in a nursing home. As the sun began to set, the giant insects kept on emerging from the portal. Guak Pilson watched in silence, wondering how the specified association missed the appearance of this gate, when suddenly one of the monsters noticed him and let out a loud scream in order to alert the others. Having been discovered, the old one decided to take action, and so Guak Pilson charged at the ants from up above, stabbing the first one in its head. He then noticed another one trying to bite him from behind, and so he quickly dodged the jaws of death. This left Guak Pilson annoyed by the insects, and so our hero took down 4 ants with a single slash of his kitchen knife. With that, Guak Pilson stood alone between the giant beast's corpses. Seeing how exhausted he was after killing some ants made the man realize that he was truly getting old and made him wish to be younger. But as it wiggled, the old man noticed, as a giant praying mantis appeared right behind him. With that, the terrified leader asked the insect if it was the boss of the insects, but the senseless beast didn't respond, as it attacked the old man, slamming him into a giant rock. This seemed like a tough adversary. Seeing how Guak Pilson was unable to move, the mantis readied itself to dive its teeth deep in his flesh. But just as it was about to take the first bite, the old man opened his eyes and affirmed that the monster's mouth was revolting. With that, the hero stabbed the mantis' head. Now in pain, the insect tried to shake Guak Pilson from its head by slamming him into the nearby trees, and when it stopped moving, the hero assumed it was unable to fight any longer. And so Guak Pilson gathered his last strength in order to finish it off. Just like that, the giant praying mantis had been slain, finally collapsing to the ground. The hunter was happy to see that his skills weren't completely dulled as he began coughing. The exhausted old man then collapsed on the ground. Whack Pilsong realized that his body couldn't take it any longer. Thinking of how the bugs would have been easier to deal with 10 years ago, the hero found it amusing that he would die in agony like a true hunter. But just then, a notification caught him off guard as it congratulated him on conquering this dungeon, and he was then left intrigued as the system stated it would fulfill his wish for clearing it. Whack Pilsong received the god's blessing that would grant him eternal life. With that, his body began to change. As the gate began closing, a crowd of people who noticed him rushed to his aid. Later on, the old one woke up to a lady calling him. The confused Whack Pilsong asked about his whereabouts. The woman, who turned out to be a nurse, explained that he was transferred to this hospital in the capital after being found almost dead in front of the closing gate. After being asked to identify himself, the old one gave his name and year of birth. The year of birth shocked the lady. This annoyed our hero, who, despite his youthful looks, affirmed that he was 83 years old. After hearing this, the nurse was unable to believe that this young-looking man was an old man, which he confirmed annoyed once again. Whack Pilsong assumed that her reaction was due to him naturally looking like someone in his 70s, but in reality, he looked like someone in his 20s. But just then, he noticed. Whack Pilsong laid his eyes on his own reflection, before rushing to the mirror, shocked by his new appearance. His odd behavior made the nurse assume that the patient's injuries had caused him brain damage, and so she went to fetch a doctor as he was still under the shock. Just then, Whack Pilsong remembered what had happened before he lost consciousness, stating how this wasn't a hallucination. The old man recalled how some obtained new skills after clearing a dungeon, yet he had never heard of blessings. It was even more odd that this blessing restored his lost youth. After taking some time to think, Whack Pilsong decided to search for help instead of staying in the hospital. And when the nurse came back, the young one was nowhere to be seen. Whack Pilsong was now in front of a tall skyscraper. He recalled how he hadn't set foot in the association for 10 years. Upon entering the building, the legendary hunter noticed that the place was completely different. Whack Pilsong then asked someone for help as he had something to settle with the association. So the stranger pointed him to a strange kiosk and affirmed that he would have to grab a ticket in order to get a turn. But the 83-year-old man struggled to maneuver such machinery, leading to an annoyed line forming right behind him. Just then, a hand was placed on his shoulder. A tall man menacingly asked the hero to give him his turn as he had no time to waste. Some of the present hunters recognized this one as the C-rank troublemaker of Medusik. To everyone's surprise, the young-looking one began to scold the man, stating that he should wait in line like everyone else. With that, the annoyed man grabbed the protagonist by his shirt, when suddenly, a tall, imposing presence interrupted them, affirming that combat was forbidden inside the association. Some people were left amazed, having recognized him as an S-rank hunter named Park Seok-chien, and others were seeing their first S-rank ever. The tall man was annoyed with the association, seeing how it was using someone of his rank to keep order. The crowd then began to whisper about his impressive height and how he seemed the pinnacle of masculinity, and despite not wanting to be flattered, this one adored being called manly. Just then, Whack Pilsong affirmed that the S-rank hunter didn't seem like a stranger. After thinking for some time, the hero recognized the tall hunter as Park Dabin, leaving him shocked. Being called by that name shocked the terrified hunter. The present hunters began to gossip about the S-rank being called Park Dabin. Whack Pilsong then began to talk about how the two of them hadn't met in a long time and how old he looked now. The S-rank hunter began to shiver in frustration upon hearing the crowd gossiping about this name. In reality, after becoming an S-rank hunter 10 years ago, Dabin decided to adopt a more serious name, thus going by Park Seok-chien. The tall one was left annoyed after being called by his true name by this young man. And just as the hero was about to ask this acquaintance for a favor, he was suddenly grabbed by the collar, as Park Dabin ordered him to identify himself. But instead of obeying, Whack Pilsong pointed out how the hunter had lost his delicacy, before reminding him that they couldn't fight inside the building in front of the giant crowd. After apologizing for his sudden outburst, Park Dabin proposed to move on to a more suitable location, before warning our hero to not even think about escaping as rage filled his eyes, creeping out the protagonist. After entering a vast empty space, Whack Pilsong asked about this place, so the S-rank explained that this was a sparring area for hunters, before asking our hero to identify himself and reveal where he learned his real name from. So the young-looking one presented himself as the legendary hunter before claiming that a recent incident made him regain his youth. Yet the tall one wasn't convinced and assumed that this young man was mocking him. After affirming that he gave him a chance and concentrating mana into his own fist, Park Dabin decided to uncover the truth by beating it out of the protagonist, only for Whack Pilsong to dodge the punch and call him out for being a hothead at this age. This swiftness left the S-rank hunter utterly shocked. The old man explained to the younger one that one should let go of his temper as he gets old. Park Dabin then affirmed that simply looking at his opponent made him more eager to uncover his real name as he decided to get serious. With that, the S-rank hunter turned himself into a monster after activating the skill Beast that turned him into a werewolf. The monster affirmed that he was done holding back, before charging our hero and daring him to dodge his attacks once again. Whack Pilsong had no choice but to block the incoming strike. leaving him impressed by this new strength. He then suddenly felt alerted as the werewolf claimed that his next move would hurt. Park Dabin then slashed the air with his claws, hitting our hero in multiple spots, sending him flying into the air before slamming him into a wall. Seeing this, the satisfied S-rank hunter realized that he might have been carried away. But to his surprise, our smiling hero affirmed that this conflict couldn't be ended peacefully anymore. And so after firmly planting his foot into the ground, the legendary hunter charged at the monster, who was unable to believe that his S-rank strength couldn't even scratch the young-looking man. Whack Pilsum then claimed that his punch might pack a bit of a sting, before smacking the hunter in the jaw, knocking him into the air, before finally falling down. After some time passed, the werewolf still hadn't moved. This made our protagonist grow anxious, speculating that he might have killed him by mistake. While in his 20s, the young Park Dabin assumed that hunters were just overpowered barbarians deprived of beauty, as he recalled our old protagonist, checking on him while sitting on a pile of giant dead monsters. This left Dabin amazed, as meeting this one made the young one have a realization regarding his master's majestic power, describing it as something of splendid beauty. Just then, the unconscious man began to wake up. Upon opening his eyes, the S-rank hunter began to see the old one's true face. This startled him, only to find himself in front of the young-looking man who was glad to see him breathing. Whack Pilsum then began to scold the defeated hunter for attacking him like that, affirming that he had taught him better. With that, Park Dabin finally realized that the one in front of him was truly the legendary hunter, who was left irritated. Shortly after, our hero successfully finished summarizing the incident that led him to this state to the hunter, who seemed intrigued by the blessing. According to Dabin, blessings are abilities that stay active unlike skills. Whack Pilsum, who isn't familiar with blessings, pointed out how Tabin doesn't seem to have a deep knowledge of them either. This made the tall hunter apologize for not being able to assist the old man. Whack Pilsum had to ask Park Dabin to put a shirt on while watching him adore his own body and claim that he lost his clothes after transforming. The old man told the younger one not to give his situation much thought, as this gate-filled world had truly become odd and that the only thing that mattered was him regaining his youth. The overjoyed S-rank proposed to Guak Pilsung to return to the association, as many would be delighted by his return. But as the old one called him, the atmosphere suddenly changed. Park Dabin was surprised to learn that Guak Pilsung wanted to keep his return a secret. Before asking him if he was aware of the reason behind his sudden retirement, the S-rank was left shocked when the master asked if he recalled the names Taeyong, Byamsik, and Jiyoon. With a saddened expression, the tall one affirmed that he would forever remember them. Whack Pilsung recalled how they gave away their lives in order to let him survive numerous dungeons. Park Dabin firmly affirmed that he would have also done the same, seeing how precious the old man was to them, but was then shocked when the hero affirmed that this dedication was the main reason behind his retirement. The protagonist explained that he became too idolized by those around him at one point, feeling guilty as he saw young souls sacrifice themselves to save his old bones. Whack Pilsung feared reliving this pain upon making his return public, as he was unable to witness young sprouts wither for him once again. After hearing and understanding this philosophy, the S-rank hunter decided to keep the old man's return a secret, as he wished. When asked about his next step, the old man affirmed that he was still thinking about it. So Park Dabin revealed that he wanted to ask a favor from him. Later on, in a green forest, Whack Pilsung recalled how the color green indicated a D-rank hunter. This technique pleased him, as it made it easy to assert one's rank. With that, he began to recall how he was intrigued by Park Dabin, asking him to investigate while partaking in a D-rank raid. The S-rank hunter, who revealed that an ongoing investigation was making him worry, stated that the hunter's presence would greatly calm him despite not being able to reveal the details. Whack Pilsung accepted to help, as the tall one affirmed that he wanted to use his immense power in case things went south. But just as he began to wonder about the situation that might require his powers, a rude person bumped into him. The thug's friend was then triggered when the young-looking man affirmed that one should apologize in such cases, before flexing his friend's power, stating he was almost C-rank, and that the new D-ranks like our hero should fear him. The thug was no other than the former D-rank hunter Wang Scorpion, chief of the Scorpion Gang, who stated that our green-looking hero should run away while he still could. The three of them then continued on their way, laughing at the annoyed old man. Encountering these three insolent hunters made Guak Pilsung think of how there will always be those who judge people based on a first glance, when suddenly a calm-looking man asked him not to give the thugs any thought, as they were known for harassing newcomers. Our old protagonist was then left shocked when the man named Kim Cheolman asked him for his name, assuming him to be a student. Upon learning the young-looking one's name, the man pointed out how he must be named after the legendary hunter. Kim Cheolman then asked our hero for his age, so he revealed to be 80 years old. But after realizing his slip-up, Whack Pilsung claimed to be approaching 18 years old. This excited the man, as the protagonist had the same age as his son, and he assumed that raids must be quite profitable for young ones to partake in them. As Kim Cheolman began to talk about his son who spends his time playing video games, the old hero found it ironic that if he had a child back then, he would be as old as him. Just then, the both of them were approached by an extrovert and her introverted friend. The one with orange hair introduced herself as the 24-year-old hunter Park Ji-hun and her Shay friend as Lee Yoonji. She then approached our hero, picking up his curiosity, before kissing him on the cheek, and affirming to the startled, blushing old man that this was her way of greeting people. Just then, the middle-aged man called out to our hero, affirming that youth feels great, which our hero found ironic as he was old enough to be the girl's grandfather. When suddenly, another voice calling his name caught his attention. It turned out to be a smiling man in a suit armed with a katana, and when asked about his name, the man introduced himself as the one in charge of this raid, the C-rank hunter Kim Taejin. With that, the presentations were made. Kim Taejin then asked our hero if he was someone close to the S-rank hunter, as he doesn't usually recommend hunters. Wak Pilsong claimed to be a distant relative of Park Dabin. With that, the C-rank hunter ordered those under him to regroup, as he would be giving a summary before entering the dungeon. Kim Taejin presented himself to the men as the leader of this expedition, before stating that most of them were D-rank newcomers, and that he believed their class of hunters had great potential for growth. The C-rank hunter even revealed that he was aware that some of them would soon join him in his rank, and explained that despite not being lethal, D-rank dungeons were hard to foresee, which is why he affirmed that all must obey him in order to ensure a fruitful raid. One of the thugs stated that this was exaggeration as this was a mere D-rank dungeon, making the old man scold him by pointing out that preparation was the key to success, which angered the redhead, when suddenly someone stopped them. Wong Scorpion affirmed that they should go easy on our hero as he had no experience regarding dungeons, and that more experienced hunters should be able to assert the danger. This made the thug and his minion look like buffoons in the eyes of the legendary hunter. With that, the summary came to an end. It was now time for the party to cross the gate. The sun was shining brightly. The magical gate was the entrance of this D-rank dungeon, and upon entering it, our hero and his allies found themselves in what seemed like a desert, and while Hunter Park joked about regretting not bringing sunscreen, Wong Scorpion affirmed that he wanted to end this as fast as possible in order to enjoy a refreshing drink. Wak Pilsong began to take off his jacket upon entering the annoying desert. The party leader affirmed that they would commence once everyone was inside. Our hero noticed the Scorpion gang casually making plans for when the raid was over, making him scold them for their reckless behavior. This made him recall a scene from his past, where a young Park Dabin was exhausted. The young man affirmed that the raid was more challenging than expected, having anticipated an easy one due to the small size of the gate. So the old man affirmed that they should always be on their guard when raiding for this exact reason. Wak Pilsong, sitting on the slain boss, then affirmed to the young one that he should always obey him, which he promises to do. Back to the present, a hero recalled how everyone used to be anxious when it came to dungeons, as they only assessed their difficulty based on how big the entrance was. Yet now, as it was easy to assert the exact difficulty of the dungeon, the hunters seemed more laid back. Seeing how the world had turned out, the hero decided to ask the C-rank something which piqued his interest. Wak Pilsong asked about the difficulty of this class of dungeons, making the man assume that this was the first dungeon he had entered. The party leader explained that D-rank dungeons were perfect for D-rank hunters, before reassuring him that C-rank hunters like him are always present in case of problems. This made the legendary hero point out that they seemed to have everything planned out. The party leader was taken by surprise when the young-looking man asked him about a scenario where the dungeon was underestimated. Just then, Wong Scorpion addressed the two of them, and affirmed to our hero that no one would blame him for running away, seeing how scared he seemed. One of his thugs mockingly asked him not to put too much pressure on the newcomer. The C-rank hunter reassured our hero once again that they were perfectly safe, as the danger was already asserted with a specific meter by the association, what you structure is safe raid. Yet our hero was still not convinced, making the man add how the dungeon meter had been in use for half a decade now, and how it never falsely measured the true difficulty of any dungeon. Wak Pilsong asked if this was true, which the man confirmed, while the soon-to-be C-rank began to complain about how annoying beginners were. With that, the old man began to scold the Hafed. The angered Scorpion boss grabbed our hero by the shirt and dared him to talk back one more time. The protagonist advised him to always be discreet while raiding. With that, the man let out a loud laugh, before pointing out how newbies should be terrified in their first raid, assuming that this was the case of our hero. Wak Pilsong then asked him if he was aware of the reason behind his advice, when suddenly the party was spotted by a giant purple serpent. The monster's arrival startled the hunters. Scorpion was left terrified. With that, the monster prepared itself, before charging at him. But just then, and with a swift slash, the hero decapitated the monster with a single strike, quickly putting an end to its misery. This left the soon-to-be C-rank hunter baffled, as it all happened at an incredible speed. With that, Wak Pilsong affirmed to the man that he should take his advice, as loud hunters will always be the favored targets of the monsters. As the protagonist walked away, the man grew frustrated, unable to accept that he was getting corrected by a young man. The concerned hunter then turned to the party leader and asked him if this snake was truly a D-rank, seeing how she had never seen a monster this powerful. The man found it odd, as D-ranks were usually giant dogs or insects, and seeing how this purple worm was most definitely a C-rank, the leader began to grow worried. Meanwhile, in another location inside the desert dungeon, the young one asked Gilwoo about their next course of action. He reassured his friends, stating that patience was the only way to salvation. The girl proposed to ask the grown-ups for help, but after thinking about it, Gilwoo refused, seeing how lethal this dungeon was and how the adults weren't trustworthy. As the both of them kept on arguing, a purple presence heard them. The young hunters then heard a creepy scream, and were left startled as they were found by a giant snake. As the beast locked on its prey, both of them were filled with fear and horror, letting out a loud scream as they were now under a hungry monster's mercy. Meanwhile, our hero began to walk in the scorching desert. The party leader who was leading the way seemed anxious and deeply plunged into his own thoughts, as he recalled how the girl described the monster as something above D rank. Despite his best efforts, the man had a hard time relaxing as the serpent looked like a C-rank monster. Before turning to look at our hero, the man began to think of how the dungeon was surely not above D grade, as a young man on his first raid defeated it with one slash. Yet then again, there was still a possibility of the dungeon being wrongly labeled. But the man quickly denied the idea, as the meter had never been wrong before. Wang Scorpion, who was covered in sweat, began to grunt. He then burst out and complained to the leader that they walked for half an hour before asking how long until they take a break. Seeing how all seemed exhausted, the team leader decided to grant Wang Scorpion his wish. This left the old man disappointed, seeing how the younglings were exhausted by a mere 30-minute walk session. Just then, the Scorpion boss noticed some sort of fog rising, when suddenly the hunter noticed a giant purple snake standing above their heads. Seeing how this serpent seemed more powerful than the first one, the scared party leader asked the men to prepare for battle, speculating it to be the boss. The monster then began to approach the hunters. After taking a look at our hero, the soon-to-be C-rank unsheathed his axe as he recalled how the protagonist put him to shame earlier. To the leader's surprise, Wang Scorpion charged headfirst, affirming that he could kill this snake on his own. The C-rank tried to warn him about the danger, but Wang Scorpion told the others to admire him as he kills the boss. With that, he rushed to the monster, ready to take its life. But upon striking it, Wang Scorpion was baffled upon witnessing how insignificant his strike was against the serpent. Guak Pilsong found the idea of attacking a defending monster utterly pathetic, making him realize how pitiful these hunters' thinking process was. With that, the snake prepared itself to counterattack. Upon seeing this, the man assumed himself to have met his doom. But just as the monster launched its attack, Wang Scorpion found himself being saved by the party leader, who quickly checked up on him. The party leader was relieved to see his party member non-injured. With that, he asked his men to stand down, seeing how this powerful monster was his sole responsibility, considering that he was the only present C-rank. With that, the man in the suit charged at the beast, jumped into the air, and struck it with his katana, but was then left shocked to see that his sword was as ineffective as Wang Scorpion's axe, when suddenly someone screamed to him to target the serpent's head. This left the hunter intrigued, but upon locating the designated spot, the man used the monster's body as a trampoline in order to jump into the air and gain some altitude, as he was determined to slay it. With that, the party leader was finally able to decapitate the monster with a single slash. And just like that, the giant snake was defeated, leaving everyone relieved and overjoyed. Guak Pilsong then approached the victor in order to check up on him, so the man affirmed being unharmed. The party leader then gave credit to the young-looking one for this victory over the boss, as due to him he was able to survive the serpent and slay it with ease. Hunter Park then asked if this marked the end of the raid, which the party leader assumed it to be. But as worry filled her eyes, the girl pointed out how nothing unusual was happening. This made the party leader realize how odd it is, seeing how they should be getting a notification upon killing the boss. But just then, the man realized in panic, as two more purple atrocities appeared from behind the rocks, that against all sense of logic, as this was a D-rank dungeon, the monster that he, who was a C-rank, barely defeated wasn't even the boss. Just then, our hero affirmed that the explanation was obvious, pointing out how this dungeon was far above D-rank, while the party leader was still in denial about the association miscalculating the dungeon's lethality. As he and his men were getting ready for the upcoming battle, the C-rank hunter was left unable to comprehend the odd situation. The middle-aged man then informed the party leader that they had monsters on their six. With that, Kim finally accepted the fact that this dungeon was far above D-rank, and so he ordered the men to flee the scene, thinking of how many risk getting killed, which is why they should escape and get reinforcements. After looking at the man, a smile appeared on Guak Pilsong's face, seeing how responsible this young hunter was. Later on, as they kept on walking, Wang Scorpion found himself out of breath, and so he began to scream at the team leader and called him out for escaping a D-rank dungeon despite his rank. The suited man affirmed to the thug that this dungeon was far above D-rank. Yet the Scorpion boss couldn't believe it, seeing this dungeon had already been labeled D-rank and how our hero easily killed one of its monsters. This made Guak Pilsong scold the thug for being too loud once again, so the angry man affirmed that he wasn't scared of the snakes and that he had just been caught by surprise earlier. Just then, a creepy sound from a nearby cave startled him. All felt alerted, expecting a monster to come out of the darkness. only for the so-called monster to be a human asking for help. The girl, who looked in bad shape, was desperate for help. Hunter Park rushed to check on her. The girl then begged the hunters to rescue her friend, leaving the one holding her confused. This young one explained how she and her friend were ambushed by a giant serpent and that he got harmed while protecting her, while the team leader wondered about the reason behind a child's presence inside a dungeon, and so he demanded an explanation, seeing how she wasn't a hunter. The girl explained how someone offered them a lucrative part-time job where their main task would be to conceal their presence inside the dungeon. Just then, Scorpion Wang butted in, as he recognized the girl and her friend as infamous tomb raiders, leaving the female hunter confused. This term also intrigued our hero, so the C rank explained how it refers to individuals that illegally enter dungeons in order to snatch some of its rewards when conquered. Seeing how younglings were putting their lives on the line inside dungeons, the old protagonist was left baffled. With that, the thug accused the children of disturbing the dungeon, implying that it was their fault that such powerful monsters appeared in this D-ranked dungeon. The leader affirmed that these were two separate problems, yet the man insisted that they were the cause of the anomalies. When asked about the fate of the Tomb Raiders, a C-rank hunter affirmed that they should save them at any cost. This angered the Scorpion boss, as he affirmed that they shouldn't rescue the children when their own lives were at stake. But before the leader could respond, Whack Pilsong proposed to aid the Tomb Raiders, making the one in the suit affirm that the risks were too high. Yet seeing how they couldn't leave them behind, the hero proposed to go alone in order to appease the scared hunter. Wang Scorpion affirmed that he won't oppose his choice to freely walk to his end. With that, the young-looking one instructed the leader to evacuate the dungeon while he saved the children. Seeing how Whack Pilsong demonstrated advanced skills and even located the snake's weak point, the team leader decided to have faith in him. With that, the leader decided to follow the hero's will. Whack Pilsong then stated that he would carry the injured one. The girl then turned to him and asked with a worried expression if he would truly help. So with a reassuring smile, he affirmed that he would rescue both of them. And so the team leader ordered the men to hit the road. While leaving, the Scorpion gang began to mock our hero for throwing himself into danger. Yet the girl didn't seem to share this feeling, as she was in fact worried that he might get hurt. Despite considering it an idiotic game of chance, the team leader had no choice but to comply, seeing how their choices were tightly limited. Shortly after, inside the cave where the injured one was hiding, he began to think of his employers, who lied to them yet blamed himself for trusting the grown-ups. Back then, the man affirmed that his offer was too lucrative, as all they had to do was hide inside a low-risk dungeon and wait for it to be cleared in order to snatch the rewards, yet the young one was still not convinced. The man even affirmed that since they were mere students, no one would arrest them but instead give them a light warning. Upon hearing that this was his golden chance, the young man finally agreed. Back to the present, the injured one was worried about his friend Yun-Su, when suddenly, he noticed something approaching. The terrified boy quickly grabbed a branch, but as he expected the worst, the one arriving turned out to be human. Gil was finally reunited with Unsu. The boy was then intrigued when a mysterious individual entered the cave. The girl presented our hero as the hunter that came to aid them, but Gilwoo had a hard time believing it as he looked too young to be one. This triggered the old man, who slapped the boy on the head. Guak Pilsong affirmed to the insolent one that a child's place was at home studying, not inside a dangerous dungeon scavenging. Unsu revealed to him to flood her home, which is why she took this job, as she was desperate for money and shelter. The old man was angered by the actions of the employers, seeing how they risk mere children for an easy profit. With that, Guak Pilsong proposed to the Tomb Raiders to catch up with his group. But just then, a giant purple snake entered the cave and found them. This left the children terrified. The boy was certain that they were able to shake it off, and seeing how he was too injured to escape, he urged the two of them to flee without him, yet Unsu refused to leave him. So Guak Pilsong affirmed that he wouldn't be abandoning anyone. The boy urged our hero to escape with his friend, making the old man point out his boldness despite his young age. Guak Pilsong affirmed that it was the adult's responsibility to take care of the children, which is why he affirmed that he shall leave none behind as he charged at the giant monster while the children watched in astonishment. Meanwhile, back at the fleeing party, the thug began to complain about how they were trapped in a dungeon where they weren't even able to fight. The team leader reassured the man by informing them that the exit was right ahead. He then began to think of Guak Pilsong, who might struggle to save the children. This doubt made him question his own decision to trust our hero. Kim Chulman then began to search the area for the gate, when suddenly, he noticed something surprising. So he quickly called the team leader, as this matter had to do with the gate. The exit was disappearing from the dungeon, leaving the hunters utterly shocked. Upon seeing this, Wang Scorpion demanded a plan from the party leader. Kim Taejin began to think of how the dungeon's entrance appeared 3 days ago, and that its disappearance was a sign that the dungeon would soon malfunction. Yet seeing how it takes about 7 days for it to happen, the man assumed that they should be good for now. With that, the party leader began to think that the Tomb Raiders were truly the reason behind these odd events, when he was suddenly snapped back to reality by his party members asking him for a plan. So Kim Taejin reassured the men by explaining that the exit would reappear upon closing the dungeon, which the Scorpion boss found ridiculous, as there was no way for D-rank hunters to clear a dungeon that far surpasses their rank. With that, Kim Cheolman realized that failure meant being stuck forever in this dungeon. The party leader then explained that the gate would also open when the dungeon closed, which was a risky plan but possibly their only way to survive, before suggesting to cool off and calmly assess the situation. Just then, the thug noticed something. The hunters found themselves being surrounded by the giant serpents, which left them horrified. As the first one charged at them, the party leader ordered the men to ready themselves. Kim Taejin had counted 5 opponents, so he theorized that even D ranks could clear them with a solid plan while targeting the monsters' heads. With that, the party leader asked the team to help him, while Scorpion and Wayne began to fear the worst. With that, Kim Taejin charged at the giant beasts, and so he jumped at the first one and decapitated it with one swing of his blade, when suddenly he was attacked by the second snake, leaving him no choice but to try and block the attack. Just then, Hunter decided to aid him by throwing a fire spell at the monster that even he had to dodge. Yet this attack only angered the beast, who turned to the mage, so the swordsman affirmed to the creature that this fight was between them, before taking its head. With that, the second snake was defeated. Kim Taejin counted 3 remaining serpents, and despite how challenging this task seemed, he was certain that it was possible. Wang Scorpion felt relieved as these monsters weren't as strong as they appeared, but just then he noticed a giant 3-headed purple snake standing right behind him. The party was left horrified as they speculated that this was the final monster, while the team leader related its shocking arrival to the anomalies occurring. With that, the great beast attacked the hunters with its powerful tail. The scorpion boss found himself in front of the monster as his gang members begged him for help, but in the end the thug chose to run away and leave his friend behind. Just then, the betrayed one noticed the monster getting closer, but before it could devour him, it was mysteriously shot by a projectile, by none other than Hunter Park. With that, the girl found herself being the target of the dungeon's boss, but in fact, she deliberately played the bait to give the C-rank hunter an opening. Kim Taejin was able to score a clean hit, feeling optimistic that only 2 heads remained, but just then, something intriguing happened. The freshly inflicted wound on the monster quickly closed. To the man's surprise, a new head was just created. With that, the monster was back at full strength. This made Kim Taejin speculate that this one's weak spot wasn't its head. He was then caught off guard by the tri-headed snake's powerful tail, slamming him into the wall and making him cough blood. The Mark Swollen was shocked to see the C-rank hunter down, when fear suddenly filled her eyes as the boss monster began to target her, causing her to scream in panic. But just as she was about to be devoured, someone grabbed onto her and took her out of harm's way. The savior then began to run away while carrying Hunter Park. As he checked up on her, the young lady began to blush at the sight of her savior. After finally arriving to the scene, Guak Pilsong asked his hard-working allies to let him deal with the 3-headed atrocity. Hunter Park was left impressed by our hero, who asked her if she was harmed in any way, but the girl quickly denied. Just then, our hero was called by the beaten-up team leader, who asked him about the Tomb Raiders and the reason he wasn't with them. Guak Pilsong affirmed that the children were unharmed, before turning to the bigger issue, stating that the dungeon will go crazy, seeing how the boss left his usual spot and the gate had disappeared. Kim Jae-han apologized to the young-looking one, stating that the fault was his, but the protagonist reassured him that this wasn't the case, as this problem was bigger than a C-rank party leader. Guak Pilsong then praised the young one for his efforts and good work. With that, the hero and the monster stood face to face. The protagonist affirmed that it was now his turn to fight, and so Guak Pilsong charged at the beast. Rushing to the beast, the hero swiftly escaped the deadly jaws before cutting the head off. Just then, the C-rank hunter revealed to him the boss's ability to regrow its heads. The hero was shocked to see it firsthand. Guak Pilsong scolded the man for not telling him sooner about this irritating ability. This made the girl lose hope and succumb to despair. Even the team leader was beginning to think that they were going to die here. Guak Pilsong then asked them to have faith, recalling the saying that implies that giving up only applies when counting cabbages. This saying left the girl baffled by its mediocrity. The team leader agreed with the young-looking one, as they should all stay optimistic and keep on fighting to the end. Kim Jae-han declared that he would be helping our hero, who asked him to take it easy with his injuries. But the team leader claimed to be better than ever after having been healed by our hero. Yet the girl still had her doubts, but decided to lend a hand nonetheless. This pleased our hero, as he asked his allies to hold on to hope, seeing how continuous offense will eventually unveil the monster's weakness. With that, Guak Pilsong asked his allies to support him, and so round 2 began. The purple boss prepared itself to launch an attack, leaving the hunters alerted. Guak Pilsong found himself being attacked by a fire blast. All feared the worst upon witnessing the protagonist tanking this fire attack. But just as the head stopped spouting its fire, Guak Pilsong came out from the fire charging at the monster, affirming that such tricks don't work on him as he charged at it once again. And after multiple precise slashes, the monster was cut to pieces. Neither the middle-aged man nor the C-rank leader were able to believe that this individual was a D rank, seeing how such skills surpassed the D hunter. Just then, our hero noticed something odd, as the monster didn't seem quite finished yet. This regeneration annoyed our hero, who had no idea how to kill the boss. Just then, he noticed something. Guak Pilsong had an idea upon looking at the rocks. With that, the hero finally had a plan of action, and so he jumped his way up the cliff, and once high enough, Guak Pilsung gathered his strength in order to cut a massive boulder in half. The falling rock's target was the giant snake. With that, the dungeon boss was crushed for good. All looked in disbelief, when suddenly, the Hunter party received a message from the system, declaring that the dungeon had been conquered. Hunter Park was unable to believe it. All were overjoyed by this miraculous victory. The team leader felt relieved, as due to our hero's intervention, the team was spared an atrocious end. Just then, the gate of the dungeon reappeared. Guak Pilsung decided to ask his party if someone among them was injured. The C-rank hunter affirmed that they were all saved by his intervention, thinking of how the young-looking one was giving the same vibe as a professional veteran. As he began to admire the Prodigy, this one affirmed they should head home. Later that same day, in the Hunter Guild of Blue Sky, the report was being questioned, as it clearly stated that a mere D-rank beginner conquered a dungeon of his rank. This report was presented by the C-rank hunter Kim Taejin, who affirmed that everything he wrote down was no lie, and that they must enroll the young Prodigy into the ranks of Blue Sky, seeing how powerful he is. But as he kept on explaining, the one in the chair urged him to stop, stating that even if the dungeon turned out to be above C rank, there was no way for such a Prodigy to stay unnoticed up until now. Kim Taejin tried to defend his argument, but the man was having none of it, as he stated that he would act as if this report was never written. The C-rank hunter had no choice but to accept. After this small meeting, the man took a deep breath, before taking a deep breath again, and letting out a sigh of relief. The S-rank hunter then asked the one hiding to reveal himself. Guak Pilsung asked if the party leader had left, which Park Dabin affirmed, stating that his lies should have shaken him off. The S-rank hunter then affirmed that the fuss caused by the protagonist would surely attract attention. But Guak Pilsung affirmed that he had no choice, as he only rejoined to save the young lives that are always at stake. Revealing his bafflement, the S-rank hunter asked the old man if the report was accurate. Guak Pilsung confirmed, stating that the association must be aware of its ranking mistakes, using its silence on the matter as proof, before affirming that this wasn't the only issue at hand, intriguing the tall one. The S-rank hunter was shocked when the hero theorized that the association was the puppet master behind the individuals that used children as tomb raiders. Still unable to believe it, he asked the protagonist about his sources. So the old man revealed that he recently attacked the tomb raiders' base. This made Park Dabin grow frustrated, as the higher-ups will surely never admit their sins, seeing how their word and power are drawn from their strength and imposing presence. Guak Pilsung found this ego to be highly possible. The old man then asked the young one if he would keep silent on the association's crimes. So the S-rank hunter explained how they didn't possess the necessary evidence to act, affirming that its growth would surely surpass our hero's expectation, and that they shouldn't be reckless when fighting such a dangerous foe, while recalling how his master always taught him to be careful. With that, the protagonist proposed to review the archives of the dungeon raids, but was quickly left intrigued when the man stated that it wouldn't be possible. Park Dabin reminded the old man that he was labeled as D-rank, before reminding him that the records were only accessible by C-rank hunters or above. Guak Pilsung expressed how exhausting the secret identity is, yet the S-rank hunter found it to be the ideal opportunity as he handed our hero a piece of paper. Upon reading it, the young-looking man was shocked. The next day in the Hunter Association, a massive line was formed inside the building. The man instructed those taking on the promotion exam to quietly form a line. Between the contestants stood a nervous Park Ji-hoon, who was pretty anxious as this would be her first promotion exam while doubting her own ability to pass it, yet she was convinced that the experience would be worth it. The girl then began to wonder if our hero would also take the exam. She then began to fantasize about a fated meeting between the two of them. But she quickly shut down the idea as she found her own thoughts to be ridiculous. Suddenly someone appeared in front of her, stating how the hunters here were many. Park Jae-hoon screamed at the man for cutting ahead of her in line, and so the hunter turned to her, in order to showcase his color. This shocked the girl, as red meant that he was a B-rank hunter. The man then pointed out how she was still wearing a green bracelet. The annoyed markswoman affirmed that he didn't have the right to cut in line just because he was of a higher rank. So the B-rank hunter affirmed that in their working field, power determined everything. The man then stated that this was an unchangeable reality. Just then he noticed that Hunter Park was to his taste, which left her confused. As he grabbed her by the shoulder, the red asked the green if she was seeing anyone at the moment, when suddenly someone grabbed him by the wrist. The old man demanded to know the reason behind this mess in such a crowded place. The girl was shocked to meet our hero once again in these circumstances. This made the B-rank hunter assume that the both of them were already dating. And while Guak Pilsung was left confused, the markswoman denied this claim. Just then the man noticed that our hero was also wearing a green bracelet, and so he tried to assert dominance by asking the protagonist if he saw his red badge. Our hero affirmed that he was aware of the man's rank. This triggered the B-rank hunter, as despite the difference in ranks, the young-looking man dared to oppose him. The hunter tried to free himself, and was left utterly shocked upon seeing that Guak Pilsung was restraining him with just one hand. This made him doubt the fact that our hero was an actual D-rank. Just then someone asked Baek Sang-hyuk to stop this scene. This triggered the B-rank, who began to scream at the one calming him down, only for it to be the security guard. As the men forcefully escorted him outside, they asked back saying heck to not make a fuss. The B rank affirmed that he would never forget their faces, making him look like a buffoon in the eyes of the old man. Hunter Park thanked our hero, who asked her if she would try to pass the exam for rescuing her. The girl confirmed her participation as promotion exams were rare events that were worth a try, before pointing out how she might not have what it takes to pass the exam. Just then, the old man placed his hand on her shoulder. Whack Pilson reassured the markswoman by stating that she would do fine before asking her to only do what she could. The girl received the advice with a blushing face and a loud and fast heartbeat. Despite not being into those younger than her, Whack Pilson gave her the impression of a grown man. With that, the protagonist decided to give her a gift. To her surprise, it turned out to be yokan, an Asian dessert greatly liked by those of a certain age, which the hero had originally planned to eat but decided to offer to her instead. According to Whack Pilson, eating sweet food should help her appease her anxiety. With that, the protagonist went on his way while wishing her fortune on her exams. After looking at the unexpected gift, the girl pointed out the strange taste, stating that the hero's taste resembled that of an old man as she took a bite out of the yokan. At the same time, on the nearby balcony, the mysterious woman expressed her disappointment, seeing how spectacular a fight between the hero and the B rank would have been. In any case, she was certain that they would be meeting again. Meanwhile, the B rank hunter grew frustrated, seeing how inhuman the strength of the D rank was. The C rank hunter Kim Sung-jun introduced himself as the D rank promotion examinator. He informed the candidates that this session aimed to give them the necessary information on the exam process. With that, Kim Sung-jun began his explanation. The first part will consist of one-on-one duels between the D rank hunters. One wins by defeating their opponent or making them surrender, and in case of dangerous incidents, the examiner will intervene to keep the exam a safe environment. The C rank hunter then added that the winner would be evaluated by a supervisor assigned to the desired rank through a duel. This made the hunters realize that failing to pass the sparring match or defeat the supervisor would result in failing the exam. But the C rank hunter reassured them by explaining that they could still pass if the supervisor found their skills worthy of the desired rank, regardless of the results. With that, he wished them all good luck. Upon hearing this, a tall person in the crowd began to tremble with excitement. Wang Scorpion was thrilled to finally have the chance to enter the C rank. After his last raid, his magic power had mysteriously skyrocketed, which made him confident that he could rival most C rank hunters. This made the thug feel grateful toward our hero, as this power was a result of the hero's prowess during the last dungeon, seeing how it would finally grant him his long-awaited promotion. But just as he checked on his opponent, he was left baffled. It was none other than the Prodigy himself who cheerfully greeted him. Whack Pilson asked Scorpion to go easy on him, and the man immediately realized that victory was impossible. Later, when the markswoman began her sparring match, her opponent was already nearly exhausted, and upon noticing this, she prepared her bow and used the skill Wind Arrow. This terrified her opponent, who, despite his best efforts to block the arrow, was sent flying into the air. With that, the young man was quickly defeated, marking the victory of Park Ji-hyun, who was shocked by her own accomplishment. The markswoman began to wonder about her sudden power boost. When she was approached by Whack Pilson, Hunter Park asked him if he had already won, to which he confirmed. As the examiner asked his opponent to leave the sparring area, the girl took the opportunity to express how strange the situation felt, which intrigued our hero. According to her, her magic power had grown mysteriously and exponentially. So our hero explained that this sudden power boost was a result of the last raid, which had been above D rank, though she didn't quite understand. Whack Pilson explained to her that killing monsters inside dungeons allows hunters to absorb magic stones and magical power. This meant that the higher the dungeon's rank, the more magic power one gains and the purer the stones are. This made the girl's eyes sparkle with excitement, as it meant clearing harder dungeons would allow her to quickly rise through the ranks. Suddenly, our hero snapped her back to reality in anger. The irritated man angrily stated that lower ranks stood no chance in stronger dungeons and that it had been a miracle they survived the last raid without casualties. He scolded her, saying that recklessness is a hunter's greatest enemy. As our hero continued ranting, Hunter Park, who had assumed she was older than him, began to feel like she was talking to an old man. Suddenly, a feminine presence approached, asking about the loud noise, and quickly assumed it was a couple's quarrel. While Park Ji-hyun was delighted by the misunderstanding, our hero firmly stated that it was not a quarrel, but a scolding session for a foolish child. This made the markswoman sad, while the protagonist apologized for the trouble. The lady, who found him amusing, quickly recognized him as Whack Pilson, which shocked our hero. Just then, the crowd recognized the lady as Yu Sun-young, the S-rank hunter, and began to wonder why she was there. The lady then remembered to introduce herself to our hero, stating that she was the one responsible for organizing this exam. This made Whack Pilson quickly realize that she was from the association, and he asked if she needed something from him. Yu Sun-young stated that there was a rumor spreading about a D-rank beginner who had closed a dungeon on his own. This made the crowd start whispering and speculating about whether the rumor was about Whack Pilson and whether it was true or false. This annoyed our hero, as he didn't want to attract attention, so he asked the S-rank if she had come to see him. To his surprise, Yu Sun-young did something unexpected by offering him the chance to ascend to B rank. She said that if the rumors were true, then her offer should sound tempting. And while our indifferent hero quickly refused, the overexcited markswoman immediately accepted on his behalf. And so Hunter volunteered to be his opponent, remembering that candidates had to fight at B rank to become one themselves. Guak Pilson recognized the man as the one from the line earlier. The B-rank hunter Bak Sang-hyuk expressed how surprised he was to learn that our protagonist was the rumored Prodigy. After recognizing this hunter, the crowd began to whisper about how he was close to A rank and how his presence meant that they didn't want our hero to skip a rank. The S-rank hunter then thanked the man for his generous volunteering as our hero affirmed that he didn't want to reach B rank yet. But just then, he noticed the hunter going for an unexpected thrust, which he barely managed to dodge. After landing on the ground, Hunter Bake stated that the young-looking man might have what it takes to enter B rank, seeing how he managed to evade. This annoyed the old man, seeing how extreme the B rank was when testing his skills for a test he didn't want to take. Upon hearing this, the hunter expressed his disappointment in the candidate for giving up at the very start before affirming that skipping C rank wasn't as easy as he might think. The B rank hunter affirmed that he would do everything he could in order to keep the hero from his promotion, even if it meant injuring him beyond reason or even killing him. Yu Sun-young began to think about how this man was said to be close to A rank and how he would have been of great help if it weren't for his personality. This situation also made her wonder about the Prodigy's reaction. With that, Guak Pilsong wondered out loud if there was a way to make the B rank's personality match his skills, which Hunter Bake didn't quite understand. Bak Sang-hyuk was left even more confused and demanded an explanation as our hero kept thinking out loud, trying to come up with a plan since physical discipline didn't seem to work. Guak Pilsong vaguely declared to be reflecting, before firmly affirming that he was trying to come up with a way to discipline him, which left the hunter irritated. Upon hearing this, the B rank was determined to make the protagonist suffer, and so he charged at him with his skill, Mana Spear. Yet our unfazed hero didn't try to dodge, but instead grabbed the spear, to its wielder's bafflement. All were shocked upon witnessing this surprising feat. With that, the old man had finally made up his mind, as he decided to fix the B rank hunter's behavior after beating him up. Upon seeing this, all were left silent. Hunter Bake couldn't be more irritated by the one he found prideful, so our hero decided to show him whether he truly overestimated himself or not. Just then, it caught the B rank's attention. His opponent's presence alone was enormous and terrifying, so he instinctively tried to put some distance between the two of them, while being unable to fully comprehend what he had just felt. Seeing how facing this hunter felt like being at the mercy of a beast. Just then, he remembered that the S-rank hunter was present. Seeing how he was being humiliated by a beginner, the man decided to use the strengths he was saving for his promotion exam, thus applying to himself 3 physical buffs. Yu Sun-young was happy to finally see him fight at full strength, making her expect great things from him. Seeing how his buffs would end in 5 minutes, the B-rank hunter realized that he was racing against the clock. But just as he was about to fight at full strength, he realized that our hero had already closed the distance and was ready to flick his fingers. Guak Pilson then affirmed that only physical discipline was effective against impolite children, before knocking the young one with a mere flick on the forehead. Bak Sang-hyuk was left in a state of shock and pain, once again unable to comprehend the recent events. But just then, the hero affirmed that the punishment wasn't over yet, as he sent him flying once again with a gesture of his fingers, leaving him to fall once on the ground. Guak Pilsong then asked the young one to just surrender, but the prideful B-rank was determined to continue as he swung his spear, which the old man easily managed to dodge. This didn't surprise the protagonist, as he was expecting Hunter Bak to need a longer beatdown session. Just then, the fight was stopped by the S-rank, who affirmed to the B-rank that the outcome of the fight was obvious. But Hunter Bake wouldn't accept it, as he was still determined to fight. Yu Sun-young then sighed and stated how unattractive determined men were, before delivering a powerful kick to the B-rank's guts. The S-rank then asked the B-rank to leave with his dignity, seeing how he gave it his all, before turning to Guak Pilsong with a cheerful expression and declaring that she was certain of his victory. This unexpected trust intrigued our hero, so Yu Sun-young affirmed in a flirty way that she only chooses the best of men, while the markswoman watched in horror. The S-rank then proposed they continue their conversation privately inside her lab. Our hero casually agreed, and while the S-rank hunter was pleased by his response, the D-rank markswoman was left filled with rage. Shortly after, the lady asked her guests to excuse her messy workspace. Yu Sun-young then offered Guak Pilsong some refreshments from the mini fridge, stating that he might not like them as they were all chosen according to her personal taste. After taking a sip of his drink, the old man asked the young lady the reason behind this private conversation. The S-rank hunter decided to get straight to the point and invited the protagonist to join her in the association, leaving him utterly shocked. According to the scientist, their organization is always trying to recruit promising new members. Yet our hero is left confused as this prestigious offer was being made to someone who had just gone from D rank to B rank. Yu Sun-young affirmed that she had ulterior motives, and so she grabbed the veil placed on the table and lifted it, revealing a mysterious machine that left the old man confused. The S-rank hunter explained to our clueless hero that this was a dungeon rating meter. Our hero grew alert as she explained how this machine allowed the association to grow stronger. This meter enabled hunters to enter raids matching their ranks, unlike the past when a great number of men and resources were needed due to dungeons having unknown ranks. The scientist then pointed out to our hero how he must be aware that the device wasn't perfect, which confirmed to him that the association knew about its flaws. Yu Sun-young affirmed that the probability of misjudgment was small, but not impossible, before asking our hero to consider a scenario where hunters were aware of this small risk. Wak Pilsong affirmed that weak hunters would think twice before entering raids, knowing their lives were at stake. The scientist agreed that such a reaction was very likely and that it would lead to a significant decrease in the already small number of hunters, which would cause numerous negative consequences, all due to a very small chance of miscalculation. Yet Wak Pilsong argued that everyone needed to be aware of this small error, since it could lead hunters to fall prey to powerful monsters. But according to the scientist, the logical choice was to sacrifice a few lives for the good of the many. This response triggered our hero, who stated that hunters should only give their lives of their own free will, and that it would be wrong to let them die for an unknown cause. With that being said, the scientist realized that her guest had rejected her offer. Wak Pilsong asked her to pass his words to her superiors. He asked her to insult them on his behalf as he made his exit. Despite admiring the hunter's boldness, the lady was determined to show him that righteousness would surely lead to his downfall. Wak Pilsong exited the building with an exhausted expression, thinking about how his former student would be irritated upon hearing how his day had gone. Just then, a man noticed our hero, leaving him intrigued as he approached. Wak Pilsong recognized the man, who gave him a small smile. Meanwhile, a file was handed to the master, who praised the man for his good work. The boss then asked if this was the file of the Prodigy who handled an entire dungeon alone. The man confirmed it before adding that he had just entered B rank after defeating Bak Sang-hyuk. This file belonged to the one called Wak Pilsong, a name that pleased the master. The C-rank hunter had brought him to his superior. As the hunter introduced the Prodigy in his report to the man in charge and explained how he had skipped C-rank, the hero did his best not to look at the angry S-rank hunter. The hero felt intimidated by his student's anger as he mentioned how much popularity his master had gained. The S-rank hunter then asked to speak privately with the Prodigy. Hunter Kim happily left the room for the two of them. With that, the infuriated S-rank hunter asked the old man for some explanations. After hearing what had happened, the student pointed out that his master had been tricked by Yu Sun-young. This left our hero intrigued. According to Park De-bin, the woman in question was one of the newly recognized S-ranks and an important figure within the association. And he stated that the most rational explanation for her proposal was that she wanted to recruit someone who was aware of the meter's defect, implying that his B-rank promotion trial was just a way to make it seem professional, and that she would have surely silenced him if he were to lose, as this was her way of doing things. The S-rank hunter then stated that his refusal to join must have irritated her, seeing how it went against her plan. Wak Pilsong proudly took credit for this refusal. Yet Park De-bin affirmed that this lady was persistent, which made him anxious about her next move. With that being said, Park De-bin invited his old master to join his guild. Wak Pilsong quickly and immediately declined. This response had caught the man off guard, making him insist on how being alone would only put him in danger, and how Blue Sky was one of the finest 5 guilds in the country and could very well protect him. Yet our hero remained unfazed. Before deciding to give his response, Wak Pilsong affirmed that he was the legendary hunter who didn't need anyone's protection and who would never be tricked by the association. Upon hearing this, Park De-bin affirmed that he had already been tricked, making the old man claim that he wasn't taking it seriously. With that, the S-rank hunter let out a disappointed sigh as he decided to respect the old master's wish. Park De-bin asked the old man to be cautious, making the B-rank hunter ask him to have faith. After that, as he made his way to the exit, our hero was approached by a girl. This was none other than Park Ji-hoon, who tired herself while searching for him. The markswoman proudly presented her C-rank badge to our hero. She proudly affirmed to have successfully passed her promotion exam. Wak Pilsong then congratulated her, as she affirmed that he was the reason behind her success. The girl was then startled when asked if this was the only reason she wanted to see him. And so with a red face, she claimed that she only wanted to thank him for giving her the needed courage, and that she searched for a while upon hearing that he was with the C-ranks. The markswoman then tried to change the topic by asking our hero if he came here after being invited into the Blue Sky Guild. Wak Pilsong affirmed that this wasn't the case, as he planned on staying guildless, which shocked the girl. Just then, someone approached our hero. This individual was a shady hunter named Li Huan, who introduced himself as part of the human resources of the Northern Light Guild. The name intrigued our hero, so Li Huan explained how their guild, ranked as the 11th best, was interested in recruiting their talented hero. Upon seeing Wak Pilsong's reaction, the man affirmed that they truly were number 11, before pointing out how our hero, who stayed silent, still hadn't joined any guild and asked if he had anything in mind. But to his shock, the Prodigy affirmed that he would like to work on his own. With that, our hero decided to make his leave. In panic, Lee Wan stopped Guak Pilsung and asked him to at least attend the presentation session before refusing, which piqued Park Ji-hyun's interest. Lee Wan explained that Northern Light was making a presentation in order to make itself known by hunters, and that they would be gifting C-rank weapons to those who attended. The markswoman was left excited upon hearing the free weapons, before asking what the guild had to gain from such a generous act, making Lee Hwan claim that it aimed to persuade the hunters to join while improving the guild's reputation. This left Guak Pilsung baffled, while his friend affirmed that they should immediately check the event. After arriving, the overly excited girl pointed out how natural it was to see so many people inside the 11th best guild, while our tired hero complained about the fact that she had dragged him up with her. Park Ji-hyun affirmed that this would let them get a free weapon, which our hero didn't find worth the trouble. So the annoyed girl explained how she just wanted a free item after being promoted, as our hero pointed out how odd this giveaway was. Yet the markswoman affirmed that there was nothing suspicious, seeing how Northern Light was one of the best guilds. This made our baffled hero realize how simple the girl truly was and how odd this situation was. Shortly after, Hunter Park was intrigued by the room they were asked to wait in, as it was completely empty, when suddenly a presence began to laugh out of nowhere. This was none other than Lee Hwan welcoming them. And just as Guak Pilsung demanded an explanation, he found himself being surrounded by a bunch of armed men along with Hunter Park. The shady men then declared the start of the enrollment process. Now in this odd situation, our hero demanded an explanation, stating that they couldn't just force them to join the Northern Light. Yet Lee Hwan claimed that no one would be hurt if the guild application papers were signed. Guak Pilsung asked what would happen in case of refusal, so the shady man snapped his fingers and stated how bad things would get. As all the dudes prepared themselves to attack, Lee Hwan said he would now show him why he needed to agree. With that, Hunter Park began to panic, and to the man's surprise, our hero agreed. Guak Pilsung claimed he would sign the papers. Lee Hwan was pleased by this outcome. As he handed over the documents, he began thinking of how the powerful curse would be activated upon signing the contract, turning the Prodigy into the Northern Lights puppet. But to his surprise, Guak Pilsung demanded to meet the guildmaster before signing, stating that he should know the man for whom he'd be working. Lee Hwan agreed, convinced that our hero's unknown plan would never work. With that, the guildmaster was contacted, affirming that he would arrive shortly. The Ere Kobyong-hoon, leader of the Northern Light, was pleased with Lee Hwan's progress. The man then informed our heroes that the guildmaster would arrive soon. Upon seeing the goon's expression, the markswoman apologized to the protagonist for dragging him into this mess. But Guak Pilsung said the fault was his, since Lee Hwan had come to see him, meaning he was the real target. The frightened girl asked the Prodigy if he was truly going to sign the paper, so he reassured her, saying he would take care of the problem. But despite his words, Park Ji-hyun was still worried, when suddenly, a loud laugh erupted in the room. The guildmaster had just arrived and introduced himself to the protagonist, before welcoming him to the Northern Light as all its members bowed in respect. Lee Hwan was then shocked to see our hero casually ask Ko Young-hoon if he was really in charge, causing him to burst out in anger and demand respect for his master, only to be stopped. The A-rank hunter said he didn't mind the young-looking man's behavior and was actually fond of it, before placing his head on his shoulder and saying he had high hopes for our hero. Guak Pilsung asked him if he always lied to people like that, so the guildmaster explained that he only did so for the sake of his guild, which is ranked number 11 nationally. Humanonzer explained that they couldn't rise higher because they lacked an S-rank member, then pointed out how it was very possible that our hero possessed the potential to become one. That was why he used extreme methods to recruit great talents, stating that their guild would greatly benefit from the Prodigy. With that, the guildmaster welcomed the young man into his ranks and promised him rewards. Guak Pilsung then asked the man if those were his final words, leaving both him and his henchmen shocked. One of the men tried to approach the old man, only for him to grab his hand and strike his face with his elbow. Upon witnessing these reflexes, everyone was left stunned. Lee Hwan was especially triggered. The old man then pointed out how the Northern Light claimed to be one of the best national guilds and yet forced hunters to enlist. He pointed at their leader and declared that they were all just criminals disguised as hunters. This greatly irritated the shady man, who was enraged by Guak Pilsung's righteous attitude. With that, he decided to teach him some humility by attacking the protagonist with his skill, freezing grass. Upon seeing this attack, the hero felt alerted. Lee Hwan began to laugh, stating that freezing was exactly what Guak Pilsung deserved. With that being said, the hero used his magic power to shake off the icy skill, leaving its caster utterly baffled. After getting a firm stance on the ground, the hero launched himself at Lee Hwan, who, in panic, tried to raise his ice defense. Yet Guak Pilsung affirmed it was useless, before delivering a devastating punch to the man's face, leaving him to agonize in pain. Just like that, Lee Hwan was down. Even though he wasn't a combat type, the guildmaster was still shocked to see an A-rank hunter get knocked out with a single punch, meaning the target had been hiding his true power. After rolling his tongue in annoyance, the leader of the Northern Light ordered his men to charge the protagonist. Just then, one of the thugs tried to take him from behind, only for Guak Pilsung to easily dodge the blade. before hitting him from behind and using him as a stepping stone in order to kick Goon number 2 square in the face. Just like that, 2 hunters were taken down in an instant. But just then, the hero noticed the leader of the thugs ready to strike him down. And so, after dodging the fiery blade, Whack Pilsong decided to put some distance between him and his opponent. Now armed with the legendary tier weapon known as the Fang of the Fire Dragon, the man called out our hero for his behavior. The guildmaster then affirmed that he was sure to win now that he had unsheathed his Fang of the Fire Dragon. Whack Pilsong pointed out how great his weapon seemed. The thug explained that this weapon, which he obtained in an S-rank dungeon, allowed him S-rank-like power. This made the old man scold the young one, seeing how he relied on weapons to make up for his own weakness. Upon hearing this, the annoyed criminal charged at our hero, only for Whack Pilsong to dodge every swing. As the man grew irritated by his inability to strike his target, the old man explained that regardless of the power of his guild or equipment quality, the thug should now be able to see that he was outmatched. Now more annoyed than ever, the A-rank hunter forbade our hero from talking to him in such a manner. With that, Whack Pilsong unsheathed his own sword, and with it easily blocked the thug's Fang of the Fire Dragon, leaving him utterly baffled upon seeing him counter an S-rank weapon with an inferior blade. With that being said, Whack Pilsong decided to physically discipline the criminal. Ko Young-hoon felt alarmed as our hero delivered a devastating punch to his guts. In the past, Ko Young-hoon was shocked to see his member leave his guild. The young man, whom the guildmaster affirmed was their best hunter, stated that he had his own motives. In the past, the thug was animated with passion and hope, yet couldn't stop hunters from leaving his side, and hoped that his good behavior would be met by their return. Just then, a man arrived stating that the strong hunter was now part of their guild, and affirmed that his desire for more power was the reason behind his enlistment. To Ko Young-hoon's surprise, this made him realize that in order to be big, one needed to think big, and that his small dream was meaningless to all. From that day on, the man decided to adopt his shameless ways. Upon seeing talented hunters, he tried to scout them. And in case of rejection, Ko Young-hoon made sure to take his revenge on them, which resulted in the guild quickly becoming number 11 in the country, erasing his feelings of remorse. Back to the present, the guildmaster woke up in front of the tall hunter. Ko Young-hoon demanded to know his identity. To his shock, the one in front of him was the leader of the Blue Sky Guild. This made the man panic as this presence was unexpected. The thug was then surprised by the presence of Whack Pilsong, who had his men unable to move. This made him speculate the protagonist was part of the Blue Sky Guild. Upon hearing this, the annoyed hero smacked the young man on the head. Whack Pilsong affirmed that he wouldn't spare him if he spoke such senseless words again. The S-rank hunter then decided to clarify this situation to the thug by explaining that the hero wasn't one of his subordinates, which only made Ko Young-hoon even more confused. To his shock, Park Dabin revealed that he owed our hero, which is why he was there to aid him. Seeing how such a powerful guildmaster was in debt to our hero made him wonder about his true identity. Just then, the old man attracted the thug's attention and asked him if they were truly forced to commit such heinous crimes. Ko Young-hoon affirmed that he just wanted his guild to become number 1. The old man asked him if a deceiving and lying organization was truly fit to be called the best. Upon hearing this, the thug affirmed with all of his being that despite knowing how shameless his ways were, it was them that allowed his guild to rise through the ranks. Whack Pilsong asked the man if he had achieved his desired guild, making him grow frustrated. In the end, Ko Young-hoon affirmed that he had no choice, as the current association system favored the grand guilds, forcing him to turn to crime for power. Ko Young-hoon affirmed from the bottom of his heart that as a guild leader, he would do everything he could for his guild to prosper. Upon hearing those words, the men felt moved by their leader's determination. The guildmaster was left shocked when asked if he would change his ways if the association itself changed. Yet the man affirmed that this would never happen, seeing how the association kept gaining more and more importance as the big guilds continued to rise. According to the desperate man, this organization, which stood at the zenith of power, would always remain unchanged. But to his surprise, Whack Pilsong promised change. Ko Young-hoon couldn't believe what he had just heard. The S-rank hunter asked our hero if he had something in mind. With that, the legendary hunter revealed his intention to take down the organization by creating a team. Meanwhile, outside the room, Park Ji-hyun tried her best to eavesdrop on them. The markswoman grew curious about the young man who casually interacted with one of the leaders of the best guilds in the country. On a related note, the girl was shocked to see that the previous party leader was part of Blue Sky, before pointing out how he looked like someone with potential, which intrigued the hunter. Just then, our hero and the guildmaster came out of the room. The C-ranks rushed toward our hero, and while the girl asked him about his true identity, Hunter Kim questioned why he hadn't told him about his connection to his superior, much to the old man's surprise. As the two focused entirely on the protagonist, the tall one observed silently. A few minutes earlier, the student had asked his old master about the fate of the thugs, and to his surprise, Whack Pilsong pointed out that humans need a chance to show their true talent, which is why they should give Ko Young-hoon the opportunity to prove his worth, stating that perhaps he had never been given one before. According to the old man, the guildmaster of Northern Light should have learned a lesson from his scolding. This amused the S-rank hunters as their master hadn't changed even after a decade apart. That same night, someone was working out in a gym room. This someone was a huge man, exhausted from his workout. With that, he finally put his weights down. Just then, a hunter informed his guild master that someone from the association was here. This intrigued the muscle-bound man, who began to fear the worst. Just then, the man approached him and introduced himself as Yoondu Kyun, the leader of the violent crimes team within the association. To Seo Gwang-ho, who was the S-rank hunter and leader of the Grizzly Guild, one of the top 10 guilds in the country. Seo Gwang-ho asked the man to get straight to the point, saying he didn't recall being involved in any recent crimes. To his surprise, the man began to speak of Ko Young-hoon, the leader of Northern Light. Just then, the man grabbed his weight and threw it at the visitor, who remained completely unfazed. Seo Gwang-ho asked Yoondu Kyun to choose his words carefully before explaining why such a miserable guild master had been brought up, and to his shock, the leader of the violent crimes team revealed that he had been taken down by a hunter of lower rank. The Grizzly Guild master was left utterly baffled, as the man said he was now ready to let him explain everything, and as a small smile formed on his face, Seo Gwang-ho became eager to hear the full story. Hunter Kim now found himself in a tough spot, facing a two-headed cyclops. The C-rank charged at the beast and quickly struck it with his sword, making the monster roar in agony. After that, the hunter leaped onto the monster's head and tried to cut down its horn, but it had no effect. This left him irritated. Just then, our hero shouted at him to only target the soft spots. Hunter Kim quickly agreed, while our hero couldn't understand how they had ended up in this situation. Back then, the C-rank had begged the old man to become his master. This request intrigued our hero. Hunter Kim affirmed that, after deep reflection, he had decided to follow Gwak Pilsong in order to become a capable hunter like him, which is why he begged once more to be taken in. Yet our hero found it pointless, seeing how the boy already worked under a guild master. So the young one revealed that Park Seok-chuk was always too busy with work, and that he had given full approval for our hero to become his master, leading Gwak Pilsong to believe that this had been orchestrated by his former student. With that, the old man decided to take the hunter under his wing, making him burst with excitement and joy. Back to the present fight, the C-rank managed to defeat the twin-headed Cyclops. As his master pointed out his progress, the young one felt grateful. Hunter Kim was happy as the old man declared that at this pace, he would surely reach B rank soon. But as they were caught in their little conversation, the other hunters began to complain about the hero being arrogant and that they were the ones to do all of the work while he calmly observed. This came to our hero's attention as the hunters implied that only luck helped the protagonist skip C rank. But just as Hunter Kim was about to defend his master, the old man stopped him. Gwak Pilsong asked him not to mind the gossip of others before stating that they should exit the dungeon they had just conquered. At the same time, a mysterious figure watched them from afar. As the men were being dismissed, someone approached our hero. It was a shy-looking boy who asked our hero if he had truly skipped C rank. And when asked about his curiosity, the young one asked Gwak Pilsong to take him under his wing, saying he aspired to be as powerful as him. This left both our hero and his current apprentice confused. Gwak Pilsong was shocked and asked the boy if he truly wished to have him as a master despite not knowing him, yet he struggled to reply. Upon seeing this, the old man tried to chase the shy boy away, who didn't even try to resist. Seeing this made our hero question the boy's requests as he gave up so easily. With that, the boy stated that he wouldn't blame him if he refused someone like him as a student. This attitude annoyed our hero. Just then, Hunter Kim suggested accepting the boy's request, stating that he must have his reasons to overcome his anxiety and ask for a master, and that he would be overjoyed to have a sparring partner. But according to Gwak Pilsong, both student and teacher's effort mattered, which is why he couldn't teach someone who didn't even want to be his disciple. Yet the boy firmly affirmed that he truly did, only for his confidence to be quickly shut down by the old man's powerful aura. Hunter Kim then urged Gwak Pilsong to accept the boy under his wing. And when asked about his desire to help, the C-rank stood firm to our hero's surprise and stated that the guild spirit that Park Dabin taught him implied that they must give anyone who truly wants it a chance. After seeing the sparkle in his student's eyes, the old master had no choice but to let the young one raid with them in the next dungeon. Overwhelmed by thankfulness, the young one affirmed that he would spare no effort. Just then, our hero remembered to ask for his name, so the boy introduced himself as Lee Jong-hwan. After introducing himself, the old one stated that he was looking forward to working with him. Kim Ta-jun then introduced himself to the other disciple and stated that they should be familiar with each other, seeing how much time they will spend together. The overjoyed boy urged the C-rank hunter to treat him well, and as Hunter Kim asked to be called senior, our hero let out a sigh, having decided to grant Lee Jong-hwan his wish if he truly wants to learn. Some days later, inside a dungeon, Gwak Pilsong was left baffled by the young one's actions, as he urged him to get out of the way, before saving him from being crushed by the giant monster at the last second. Upon being thanked by the shy one, the protagonist began to grow frustrated, as his student was always distracted, seeing how often these types of incidents had occurred. The shy one asked for forgiveness, as the master burst out in anger, seeing how the young one was a C-rank yet never checked his surroundings before charging in, while Kim Ta-jun tried to calm him down. Lee Jong-hwan apologized once again, as Guak Pilsong wondered about his next course of action regarding the boy. This one was left feeling down and ashamed. As the sun began to set, Li Jiaohuan found himself facing a giant golem, and so he used magic to enhance his weapon in order to strike it down, yet it was of no use. But just as the monster was about to counterattack, our hero came in and sliced the creature's arm off. But he wasn't done just yet, as he destroyed its core next. The young one was once again thankful for the save. With that, the old man scolded him once again, seeing how he blindly attacked instead of locating weak spots first, making the young one feel ashamed. And so, after expressing his rage, our hero left the scene, leaving his disciple alone with his low self-esteem. His senior tried to cheer him up by stating that he would do better next raid. But the young man ignored him and stated that he needed some time alone, leaving Hunter Kim concerned about him. As he watched him walk away in silence. Later in that same dungeon, the wall was punched in frustration. Li Jiaohuan found himself filled with anger. The young man hated the way he was being treated, and just as he began to think about giving up, he quickly shook off the idea, as he only had to support it for a small while. The young one was determined to keep going on. Just then, Hunter Kim informed him that it was time to depart from the dungeon, and with that the boy rushed to rejoin them. After that, in the Blue Sky Guild, our hero began to complain about the huge amount of work to his annoyed past student. Park Dabin then asked the old man for the reason behind his use of Blue Sky as his resting place. Guak Pilsong explained that an old man like him, whose friends were either dying or had already passed away, had no one else to go to before blaming the S rank for giving him a pupil. Seeing how he spent most of his time there, the tall one asked his master to just join Blue Sky, yet our hero declined once again, stating that joining would severely limit his freedom. The guild master expressed his concern regarding the association's silence about the Northern Lights incidents and his worry about his loner of a master. Park Sian-chiuk then informed the old one about a rumor that implied he personally attended to his needs. But Guak Pilsong didn't find it disturbing, seeing how they were truly friends. So the tall one clarified by stating that they were rumored to be in a relationship. Upon hearing this, the old man burst out in anger, demanding to know who was behind such ridiculous gossip. According to the man, these rumors were created by his subordinates after seeing how much he cared about him, who was an outsider. With that being said, the student asked the master either join them or stop visiting for a while. The annoyed old man began to think that his age made him an outcast, yet Park Dabin affirmed that it had nothing to do with it. With that, Guak Pilsong made his choice, and declared that he would never set foot in Blue Sky ever again. Just then, the S rank informed him that the Grizzly Guild was rumored to be researching about his past. The name made the hero assume that this guild was similar to Ko Young-hoon and his men. The man confirmed the similarity between the 10th and the 11th, with the only difference being that their master, Seo Wang-ho, was an unpredictable S rank due to his bad reputation. Guak Pilsong affirmed to the Blue Sky leader that he would be alright as he was the legendary hunter. With that, the master made his exit, while the student began to fear the worst. Later that same day, the hero asked if anyone was missing. His two pupils were present. Kim assumed that their presence was due to a dangerous dungeon appearing, while Li Jiaohuan was left to his anxiety. The master affirmed that they weren't here to fight, but to bond as a team, which shocked both of them. Upon hearing this, the shy hunter felt relieved. The old man wanted to use this opportunity to learn more about his students after realizing that he barely knew them. His students shyly agreed with him as he affirmed that rest was also an important part of their training. Hunter Kim asked what they had planned for today. After thinking for a while, the old man asked his pupils what younglings did to pass time nowadays, leaving them intrigued. The C-rank hunter revealed that he usually goes on hikes or just plays Go. This pleased Guak Pilsong to see that this board game was still popular, seeing how confident he was in his own skills. But just as Li Jiaohuan expressed how boring Go seemed to him, the old one burst out in anger in order to defend his cherished game. Before asking his second disciple about his pastimes, the young one hesitated to respond. Shortly after, in a comic book store, our hero found himself peacefully reading. The old man assumed that comics were what younglings like nowadays, but the boy affirmed that this was just his hobby. The conversation was kept to a minimum, as the old man began to think. The boy felt stress as usual. The hero asked his student about the reason behind him entering the hunter world. After thinking for a while, Li Jiaohuan revealed how he liked comic books since he was a child, which is why the appearance of hunters made him happy, seeing how they resembled the heroes of his stories. And so he decided to become one himself in order to live like his beloved heroes. And when he implied that his dream was only that of a child, the old man disagreed and affirmed that there was no sin in such a fantasy. The student was shocked upon hearing the master call his aspirations beautiful. Just then, the protagonist was noticed by no other than Park Ji-hyun. Earlier, the girl grew frustrated while reading a comic book, seeing how this had no meaning at all. The hunter couldn't prevent herself from thinking about the mid-looking hero. His cool behavior while raiding doesn't excuse the fact that she was attracted to him. As for her, our hero felt different, seeing how he reminded her of her dear grandfather from her childhood. And while wondering what he might be doing now, a marksman excused herself in order to go refresh. Park Ji-hyun longed to see our hero. Just then, she saw him there. Guak Pilsong turned around and was pleased to suddenly meet the marksman in such a place. When asked about the reason behind his presence, the old one explained how he was doing some team bonding. This coincidence made the girl feel quite fortunate. Lee Jong-hwan asked our hero about his ties with a pretty lady. Hunter Park was surprised upon hearing him imply that the two of them were dating and quickly denied the claim with a smiling, blushing face. Kwak Pilsong affirmed that she was just a mere acquaintance. The shy boy then introduced himself to the girl with red cheeks, only for her to reply with an upset tone which he didn't quite understand. Just then, Dronzer came to check on her friend only to find that she had company. Kwak Pilsong quickly greeted the old party member, who proposed to her friend to go on their way. Seeing how she seemed in a hurry, the hero waved them goodbye. Yet Hunter Park didn't want to part ways like that, and with that, she invited the three of them to join them at the karaoke, claiming that the more the merrier. But just as Kwak Pilsong was about to decline in order to continue his reading session, the overexcited boy immediately agreed, seeing how this was an important part of youth according to him. Before asking his senior if he didn't mind, yet Hunter Kim didn't seem to have any objections. Shortly after at the karaoke, as the five of them made themselves comfortable, Hunter Park began to regret her invite. But just then, she decided to change her mindset and use this chance to build a deeper connection with her crush. Our hero was then invited to sing a duo with the girl, but the old one declined, stating that he had never heard these songs, making his student take the invite in his place. This made Park Ji-hyun grow frustrated, seeing how her plan had failed. She then tried the same scheme, only this time she would sing whatever he picked. Kwak Pilsong opted for a song named Return My Youth and enjoyed singing it quite a bit. The odd song left the girl baffled. Her friend then approached her, whispering. Park Ji-hyun was left alerted when asked if she was attracted to our hero. Her face became quite red upon seeing how clear her feelings seemed. With that, she apologized for inviting the three of them and claimed that Kwak Pilsong must not see her as a romantic partner. But to her surprise, the mage grabbed her hand, as she affirmed that she would be supporting and helping her, which greatly moved Hunter Park. Just then, the impressive score of 100 appeared. As Kim began to praise his master, the old one revealed that he was asked to become a singer in his youth, but upon realizing his own slip-up, quickly shook it off. The mage then caught his attention and asked him to go to the comic store with her friend in order to find her lost wallet. And just as Lee Jong-hwan tried to propose his services, to the girl's horror, he was suddenly kicked underneath the table by the mage, who cheerfully asked the old man once again, as the others watched in disbelief. After thinking for a small moment, Kwak Pilsong agreed, leaving Park Ji-hyun unhappy. And while the one with glasses was rooting for her, the boy could only watch in silence. After finding the wallet, the girl thanked the protagonist, who wanted to immediately rejoin the others for his help. But as the surprised girl quickly refused, Kwak Pilsong asked her if she needed help with another matter, making her struggle to reply. The hero then asked her about what was on her mind as she began to panic, seeing how she was losing the opening that her friend created for her. After gathering her courage, Hunter Park asked the protagonist if he was currently interested in someone. Kwak Pilsong affirmed that he previously did with a saddened expression, making the girl assume that he was talking about a failed relationship. But to her surprise, the lady in question turned out to have lost her life. This made the marksman panic and apologize for her question, but our hero affirmed that it didn't matter anymore. Hunter Park assumed that this loss was the result of a tragedy, which made her assume that she must have died during a raid. But in reality, the old man was talking about an elderly woman who passed away due to old age. Kwak Pilsong then related her weird question to his second disciple, which confused the girl. To her surprise, the master implied that his pupil had feelings for her and that they made a pretty good duo in karaoke. This made the blushing one affirm that she was interested in someone else, picking the hero's curiosity, who asked her if this crush was an acquaintance of his. But just as she was about to give her answer, the red-faced girl was overwhelmed and ran away to the bathroom. This behavior intrigued the old man, seeing how he just couldn't understand today's youth. Meanwhile, an uncomfortable silence installed itself in the karaoke room as only two hunters remained. The girl tried to make some small talk by stating how all were late. Hunter Kim pointed out that his junior was taking too long in the bathroom, which made him worry, but according to the mage, it must be nothing. She then wondered if her friend found any luck. Meanwhile, the said friend seemed surprised, as she found herself in front of his stiff Lee Jong-hwan. But just as she assumed that this was a declaration, and felt as if her heart was about to burst, excitement was replaced with fear as Jong-hwan apologized when an ominous presence suddenly appeared behind her. Upon turning around, the marksman felt horrified. With that, Park Ji-hyun began to scream as Lee Jong-hwan watched in silence. Upon seeing how much time she was taking, Kwak Pilsong grew curious, seeing how Hunter Park had left for the bathroom half an hour ago. But just then, his phone began to ring, and upon picking it up, the man was left shocked as the caller asked him about Hunter Park. Kwak Pilsong demanded to know who was talking to him. This amused the caller, as he introduced himself as the one responsible for his friend's safety to an old man who wasn't fond of his methods. The man then affirmed that Park Ji-hyun would remain unharmed as long as he complied. And with the hero having no choice but to agree, the kidnapper decided to send him the meeting point and affirm that he should come alone. After hanging up, a fire installed itself in our hero's eyes. Later that evening, in an isolated location, the thugs stood around their boss, who grew tired of waiting for our hero. The goon then asked his boss if their target would even bother to show up. Upon seeing how angered the man in charge was after hearing those words, the man began to panic. Suddenly, his face was savagely grabbed as he was lifted off the ground by the one who threw him away. The thug demanded to be called guildmaster instead of boss, as they weren't a mere gang anymore. The guildmaster used this situation to warn the others about calling him boss, as they were now a legal guild in the eyes of the association. With that, the boss of the guild asked his goons to escort the man away. Before regaining his seat, just then, another of his subordinates asked him about the words of the Northern Lights leader. With that, he began to recall. Earlier at the Northern Light Guild, Ko Young-hoon was intrigued as his men tried to stop someone from entering. The past gangster barged into the guild master's office. It had been a while since Siu Wang-ho met with Ko Young-hoon, who was unpleased by the presence of this uninvited guest. The grisly boss claimed to have stumbled upon an interesting rumor that stated that the boss of the Northern Light had been defeated by a B rank, to the guild master's surprise, who pointed out how Siu Wang-ho must have nothing to do, seeing how he came all this way just to make fun of him. So the gangster revealed that he was only here to know more about the B rank Prodigy. Ko Young-hoon advised the thug not to mess with the protagonist as a courtesy of their old friendship. Being called friend by the A rank intrigued the grisly guild master, who suddenly burst out laughing, and after letting out a big smile, he was determined to prove Ko Young-hoon that he was wrong, making him fear the worst. Back to the present, the past gangster was snapped back to reality by our hero's arrival. An emotionless-looking Gwak Pilsung made his entrance. Siu Wang-ho immediately welcomed him, pointing out the long wait he had to endure. The old man directly asked about the young girl's whereabouts. Seeing how eager he was to see her, the gangster reassured him by stating that she was unharmed. It seemed her not moving made the hero feel alerted, and so he demanded an explanation. Siu Wang-ho revealed that she just fell asleep after ingesting a drug they gave her. Gwak Pilsung then demanded to know the gang's name and their motives. This made the gangster realize that he hadn't presented himself yet, and so he introduced himself as the leader of the grisly guild, Siu Wang-ho. Just then, our hero recalled how Park Dabin once mentioned this group. Siu Wang-ho felt complimented upon being called crazy, just as rumored by our hero, for pointing out how certain of himself he must be to face them alone. Yet when the gangster mentioned how this was natural for the legendary hunter, the protagonist was left shocked, as it meant that the grisly guild was aware of his real identity. Siu Wang-ho affirmed that he wouldn't have done all of this to attract a nameless B rank. Having uncovered the old man, the gangster expressed his amazement upon seeing him looking like a young teenager. Gwak Pilsung was even more surprised when the gangster stated that the association was also aware of his return. Siu Wang-ho began to speculate how powerful the hero was in his prime, recalled how he was rumored to have the potential to lead the association, and assumed that this rumor was the reason behind the association's hatred toward him. The gangster then revealed how he was tasked by the association to eliminate the B-rank hunter, and after seeing how odd it seemed, he did some research which led him to discover the young-looking one's true identity. With that, Gwak Pilsung assumed that this kidnapping was in fact a plot to get him out of the picture. But to his surprise, the man offered his hand before proposing a partnership. Our shocked hero couldn't comprehend it. Siu Wang-ho explained that the association annoyed him, seeing how it always tried to intervene in his affairs, which is why he proposed they join forces to satisfy their common hatred. Gwak Pilsung affirmed that many things weren't worthy of his hate, and that a situation where he was the reason behind a loved one getting harmed was surely not one of them. The gangster apologized for using the marksman as bait and claimed that this was his way of declaring war on the association. Yet Gwak Pilsung was well aware that she was a necessary hostage, as his refusal was obvious. This made the guildmaster praise the old man for his quick thinking. With that, the hero pointed out that the gangster was as shameless as his past student implied, yet Siu Wang-ho affirmed that he truly wanted him as a partner. The gangster then claimed to have a surprise for the protagonist. As he approached, his master was left utterly baffled, as it was no other than Li Jianghwan. The grisly guild master revealed that the young one was in fact one of his men, before mockingly asking Gwak Pilsung his opinion about this little plot twist. With that, the man demanded the old one cooperate or risk having Park Ji-hyun harmed. Gwak Pilsung affirmed that he will forever hold a grudge. Now infuriated, the legendary hunter decided to physically discipline the guild master. And so Gwak Pilsung asked the thug to brace himself, as our hero started a fight once again against many foes. The leader of Grizzly was amused to see the old one trying to discipline him, pointing out how he was once the best hunter. Yet according to him, he became a weakling that was now a mere B rank, which meant that he fell off. The thug then advised the old man to prepare himself, as he was about to pay the price of his refusal. With that, the Grizzly master ordered his men to attack. Yet this didn't intimidate Gwak Pilsung, who easily dodged the first attack. He then noticed a thug targeting his back, and so he quickly evaded his blade, sneaked up behind him, before kicking him square in the face. Just like that, the gang member was defeated in one hit. Gwak Pilsung then turned his gaze and asked the Grizzly members if they were already done. With that, the legendary hunter finally unsheathed his sword, as it was now his chance to counterattack. And so our hero launched himself at the enemy, immediately going for the boss. Yet Siu Wang-ho remained unfazed. the thug managed to block the sword, to our hero's surprise. Su Wang-ho revealed to his target that he was more powerful than expected, implying that his past reputation truly paid him homage. As he pushed off the old man's blade, the thug affirmed that the past will always be the past, which is why the 80-year-old hunter should just accept his fate and give up. This made Guak Pilsong bite his tireless mouth. With that, the fight continued as both exchanged blows at an incredible speed, to the point where the thugs were unable to keep up. The fight was growing more fierce by the minute. Su Wang-ho, who confessed to having underestimated the old man, related his incredible strength to his miraculous rejuvenation. Guak Pilsong affirmed that his grudge only kept growing upon seeing these impeccable skills being used in such shameless ways. The gangster affirmed that he would now start fighting seriously as he unleashed his skilled fist of the Iron Will. Upon seeing it, his goons assured that victory was just around the corner. Yet our hero wasn't impressed, as he easily blocked the attack, to the grisly member's bafflement. Shortly after, the gangster noticed the old one charging at him from above. With that, Guak Pilsong finally managed to land a hit on the guild master, who screamed in pain in front of his opponent who didn't seem to have broken a sweat. Su Wang-ho even began to cough blood. Guak Pilsong called him out on his poor mastery over his own powers despite being labeled as S-rank, and advised him not to solely rely on skills when attacking. This made the young one recall how the old man once scolded him for the same reason. The gangster grew tired of these cocky lessons, as he screamed for his healers to attend to his injuries. The gang members immediately obeyed. After affirming to have underestimated our hero, the man had no choice but to admit that the legendary hunter was still a force to fear. Once fully healed, the guildmaster proposed to continue their fight, and so, after concentrating his magic power and reaching a certain power level, the S-rank launched himself at our hero, as he was certain that the old man wouldn't be able to parry him this time. Yet, as Guak Pilsong cloaked his sword in mana, the boss was left utterly baffled, seeing how he easily blocked his powerful charge, and how he even managed to knock him back. After seeing how he was overpowered, the thug demanded to know the nature of the skill that knocked him back. But to his surprise, the old man affirmed that he had only enhanced his sword with magic. Su Wang-ho was unable to believe that such a simple skill could produce such firepower, and only grew more frustrated when the protagonist stated that a skill's power solely depended on its user. With that, the gangster charged at him once again, only for our hero to point out the pitiful state of his blade. Seeing this made the S-rank realize that the legendary hunter had been targeting his weapon all along. After letting his blades go, the grizzly found himself cornered, and so he turned to Li Jianhuan in panic. The thug ordered the scared young man to end Park Ji-hyun's life if the old man tried anything else. The boy found himself unable to fight back as he had no choice but to obey. With that, the gangster asked his opponent about his next move, stating how the life of his friend was on the line. And just like that, both master and student had to think carefully about their next course of action. As the protagonist found himself in a tough situation, his opponent demanded that he let go of his sword first in order to save Hunter Park. Guak Pilsong began to give an odd look to his ashamed student, and so he dropped his blade, before asking the S-rank if this pleased him. The man affirmed that this was the level of obedience that he expected, and that despite not wanting to take his life, he would not allow the young-looking one to leave without a few broken bones as he charged at him. Upon seeing this, Guak Pilsong quickly smashed the thug's face with his knee, making him scream in pain. The hero then repositioned himself, before delivering a powerful kick to the man's guts, sending him flying through the wall. Just like that, Su Wang-ho had sustained quite some damage, making him affirm to the old one that his threats regarding the girl weren't empty. As Guak Pilsong affirmed how despicable it was for an S-rank to abduct someone, this one affirmed that he wasn't perfect, and so he ordered Li Jianhuan to amputate Hunter Park's arms in order to prove to the protagonist that their threats were no bluff. At first, the young man hesitated, and in the end, he was unable to do it. This angered the boss, who insisted on his order once again, which left the young one terrified. With that, the boy finally decided to give in to fear, when suddenly his master addressed him, having decided to remind him of the dream that led him to become a hunter, before asking him if a life of forced crime was truly what he desired. Hunter Lee began to hesitate as he recalled his desire to be like the heroes of his beloved comics. Stating this angered the boss, who urged him to cut off Hunter Park's arms, filling him once again with fear. But after gathering some courage, the boy decided to finally drop the knife. This betrayal greatly angered the S-rank. With that, Su Wang-ho launched himself at the young man, when suddenly he noticed the legendary hunter behind him. Guak Pilsong smashed the thug's head to the ground with a quick flying kick, leaving him to scream in pain. With that, the guildmaster in front of his subordinates was no longer able to fight, and so he had no other choice but to admit Guak Pilsong's victory, as he stated that he would give him what he wanted in exchange for his life. The thug affirmed that he never intended to take the hero's life, yet Guak Pilsong affirmed that the thug wouldn't stop his evil deeds just because he was asked to, seeing how he only responded to physical pain. This merciless sight made the Grizzly Guild grow scared, as their boss affirmed that it wouldn't be necessary seeing how he had already surrendered. As the protagonist grazed his words, Siu Wangho insisted on the fact that he was going to let him live. The man then began to beg for mercy, as he firmly affirmed that he would never bother the old man ever again. Fear filled his soul as the hero went for the stab, only for the blade to miss him by a hair and hit the ground. With that, Siu Wangho passed out from pure fear. Wak Pilsong then turned to his henchmen and asked them if they still had a problem with him. Yet none dared to reply. In the protagonist's eyes, all of them looked like mindless idiots. Wak Pilsong then ordered the men to get their boss out of his sight unless they wanted to keep on fighting. Li Jianhuan stood there in silence when he suddenly noticed the old man approaching him. The ashamed one, who didn't dare to call Wak Pilsong his master, apologized for tricking him. Yet the old man didn't reply and raised his fist. But as the boy expected the worst, Wak Pilsong let out a small smile and affirmed to his student as he patted him on the shoulder that he had to address him as master. The young man was shocked to see the old one forgive him after everything he had done. Wak Pilsong explained that none was free of sin, and that scolding was only for those who failed to admit or see their mistakes, before adding, how Li Jianhuan once mentioned his dream to become like the heroes of comics. The protagonist revealed that in the one he was reading, the main character gains power after overcoming his hardships, and that his student resembled this so-called hero quite a lot. These sincere words deeply moved Li Jianhuan. With that, the old man stated that they should take Hunter Park and leave. Hunter Lee was left to reflect on all that had just happened. Sometime later, an annoyed Ko Young-hoon asked about the reason behind this unexpected meeting. So the hero affirmed that he obviously wanted to talk to him before asking the man if he had any complaints about it. The man denied, and affirmed that he was just intrigued by Wak Pilsong using the Grizzly Guild's territory as their rendezvous point. After walking inside, Ko Young-hoon was left utterly shocked upon seeing the members of Grizzly greeting our hero as such. The past thug followed in silence. He was unable to comprehend the fact that the Grizzly Guild members were greeting our hero like that, which made him have some suspicions. And so he decided to ask Wak Pilsong if he enlisted in the Grizzly Guild. But the old man affirmed that he would never belong to such a group, before asking the leader of the Northern Light to follow in silence. Ko Young-hoon had a faint idea in mind regarding the next scene, as the young-looking one casually barged into the office, only to reveal someone hiding in fear behind the desk. This was no other than the S-rank hunter that leads this guild. Seeing this angered the old man, who asked the young one to stand firm. Ko Young-hoon was left baffled, as the imposing man apologized like a coward. The master of the 11th couldn't believe it, as despite being the weakest of the S-ranks, Siu Wangho was still an impressive hunter, yet our hero was casually scolding him for hiding like that despite his immense size. Ko Young-hoon demanded an explanation, so Wak Pilsong stated that he physically disciplined the gangster, that he was clueless as to why he was acting like that and how he was currently unable to lead his guild. Ko Young-hoon agreed. The old man then recalled how the man once stated that he wanted his guild to climb the ranks, which is why he had a deal to offer him. The leader of the Northern Lights was left baffled as he was asked to absorb the Grizzly Guild. According to our hero, the Northern Lights would gain great power from this despite the fact that Siu Wangho leads the Grizzly. Yet Ko Young-hoon didn't find it right for his guild to absorb one that outranks them, which the protagonist found ironic, seeing how he forced hunters to join not long ago, before turning to the current leader and asking if he had any objections. So the terrified S-rank affirmed that he had no problem regarding the absorption and would even quit the hunting world if necessary. Yet Wak Pilsong affirmed that he should stay, seeing how the guild needed S-rank members, and with that, he quickly agreed to stay. The gangster seemed pathetic in Ko Young-hoon's eyes. After receiving the agreement of the current master, the man was asked about his own decision. Ko Young-hoon was curious why he was chosen despite the previous bad blood between them. So our hero recalled how he was building a team to take down the association. Wak Pilsong revealed that he would make the 11th absorb the 10th as a start and turn them into the first. This shocked the man. The old one then recalled how his dream was to create the best guild. With that, Ko Young-hoon assumed that the protagonist was asking him to become his servant. Yet our hero explained that this wasn't the case, as he simply wished to help. Ko Young-hoon found this ridiculous offer rather tempting, and so he made his choice. The leader of the Northern Lights agreed to absorb the Grizzly Guild, which pleased the old man. Just then, a man barged into the room in order to report an urgent issue, as according to him, the emissary of the association had returned to see Siu Wangho. This intrigued our hero. Just then, the door was opened. After checking on the guildmaster, Yoon Do-kyun apologized for his sudden visit. After getting a hold of himself, Siu Wangho demanded to know the reason behind this unexpected drop-by, as he was left to think. Earlier, our hero explained that they would hide in the next room while the guildmaster met with the envoy of the association. The man was left terrified as an 80-year-old man warned him about acting suspicious. Back to the present, the tall one demanded to know the reason behind Yoon Do-kyun's presence. The man revealed he was here for the latest updates regarding the mission given to the Grizzly Guild, seeing how passionate his superiors were regarding the matter, but was then left quite intrigued upon seeing the guildmaster letting out a sigh of relief. Siu Wangho asked the leader of the violent crimes team about the reason behind the Hunter Association's obsession regarding this particular B rank. The man cracked a smile, before affirming that he had no reason to justify their actions to him. Yoon Do-kyun then stated that the man should blindly obey in order to conserve his guild's ranking, and while the guildmaster realized that he was being threatened, the man claimed that this was simply work. With his message clearly delivered, the leader of the violent crimes team decided to take his leave. But before exiting the room, he affirmed that he expected good results from the Grizzly Guild, leaving its leader utterly annoyed. But annoyance quickly turned into fear as Wak Pilsung suddenly popped up to check if the man had left. The old man then praised the S-rank hunter for his unexpected acting skills. Wak Pilsung then asked with a display of aura if Su Wango planned to betray them in the end. The S-rank hunter, who immediately took this joke as a threat, firmly denied having any intention of stabbing them in the back. Wak Pilsung then pointed out how the association had no honor, seeing how it only cared for the outcome regardless of the method, and that they took advantage of inter-hunter conflicts. This made him realize that the organization that once defended the hunters was now corrupt and ready to take out the innocent for its own sake. Upon seeing this, the guildmaster was left to think, wondering about the true identity of our hero, seeing how the association wanted to kill him at all cost. With that, the old one made up his mind. Wak Pilsung decided to take action, and finally counterattack. Later that day, inside a coffee shop, our hero was sitting face to face with Lee Jong-hwan. Wak Pilsung pointed out how his previous student left the hunting world. The boy affirmed that after reflecting, he realized that he wasn't cut out for the hunter life. Yet, when asked about his future plans, the boy struggled to reply. Later that same day, inside the building of a TV channel, the boy was quite nervous. Lee Jong-hwan was as anxious as usual, so the man reassured him by affirming that his identity would remain a secret, before asking him to relax and be natural once on air, and stating that the boy had to simply answer their questions. With that, the recording was about to commence. Lee Jong-hwan found himself in the news studio. The reporter explained to the viewers that according to recent intel, some of the guilds formed by many hunters had partaken in illegal activities, and that they had a special guest on today's episode. The masked Lee Jong-hwan greeted the audience. The journalist asked the young man if he was truly once a part of a popular guild, which he confirmed. And when asked about this guild's crimes, the boy confessed that their leader brutalized civilians and forced some individuals to sign slave contracts. But just as he was about to bring up his boss's latest crime, a sudden sound was heard. This intrigued the filming team, and so one of them decided to go check on it. The sound was coming from behind the door. As the man was about to open it, the door was suddenly forced open by the angry S-rank hunter. Su Guangho was greatly angered by the fact that this was being filmed in secret. The man demanded to know what was happening, but just as he tried to calm the hunter down by stating that they were on live TV, he was suddenly grabbed by the collar. The S-rank affirmed that he didn't care and asked the man if he was aware of who he was. He then threatened the man to bring him this one person or suffer his wrath. This left the civilian confused, so the thug clarified, stating that he was here for his previous gang member. Yet while he tried to act confused, the man's eyes looked at the door by mistake. This made the thug speculate that the young man was hiding behind it, and so he barged in, searching for Lee Jong-hwan. But to his surprise, all he was met with was emptiness. This made the S-rank grow irritated. Su Wango screamed at Lee Jong-hwan to come out of his hiding spot in great anger. But just then, someone tried to stop him. The man affirmed that he wasn't expecting to see the S-rank here. This was no other than Yoon Do-kyun. The gangster then found himself surrounded. The confused man assumed that they were looking for a fight. With that, Yoon reminded him that they are the team of violent crimes and that an anonymous source informed them of a troubling hunter. Yet he was still surprised to see that it was him. Su Guangho explained that he was here to deal with one of his previous men who tried to reveal his crimes on the air. The team leader affirmed that his exposed behavior was a problem, which is why they couldn't turn a blind eye to it. Yet to his shock, the guildmaster affirmed that Lee Jong-hwan was aware of the secret deal between them. Yoon Do-kyun called out the S-rank for his barbaric ways, which left him disappointed. Yet the angry hunter claimed that this was all due to the association constantly tasking him with its dirty work. With that, the hands of the team leader were tied, as he affirmed that the urgent matter was now to locate the young man. And when asked what should his fate be once found, he declared that they should terminate him in order to leave no proof behind. Just then, the men noticed that the guildmaster was no longer behind them. Yoon Do-kyun ordered his men to chase Su Wangho, whom he assumed was trying to escape. The thug affirmed that he would be the one to kill Lee Jong-hwan. The team leader urged his men to also track down the boy. This left him greatly angered. Meanwhile, the young man in question hid himself in the dark. Assuming himself off the radar, the past hunter began to wonder about Wak Pilsung's whereabouts. Lee Jong-hwan then recalled what had happened. As back at the coffee shop when asked by his master about his future plans, the boy explained that entering another work field was quite challenging for someone like him who dedicated himself to becoming a hunter. This made the youth feel that he was just dumping his failures on the old man. Lee Jong-hwan then asked Wak Pilsung about the reason behind their meeting. The hero explained that he was here to ask for a favor, piquing the boy's curiosity. Back to the present, Lee Jong-hwan wished for his master to arrive soon as he had no idea what to do next after executing the old one's plan. Just then, one of the association members tried to use his katana in order to strike him down, but just as he noticed, The sound of clashing steel echoed. Master had arrived just in time to protect student. The young one was overjoyed by the old one's arrival. After praising him for his good work, the hero affirmed to the boy that he had nothing to fear as he was here. The S-rank hunter began to scream for his target while searching for it. When asked if the young man had truly escaped this way, the hunter confirmed. The team leader grew frustrated and affirmed that he had no time to waste. So Su Wangmo stated that error is something human. With that, the annoyed one asked his men to exit the building, when suddenly a flying table missed him by a hair. The culprit was none other than the S-rank, who was determined to keep them inside. Back then, the confident hunter was terrified when he was asked to make the association waste its time. His fear of Guak Pilsung immediately led him to accept. Back to the present, the S-rank was irritated, seeing how he was regretting having ignored Ko Young-hoon's advice. Yoon Do-kyun then pointed out how this action would make him the enemy of the association. So the S-rank hunter revealed that there was an individual that he feared more than the hunter organization. With that being said, the leader of the violent crimes team decided to dispose of him earlier than scheduled. Su Wangho was left once again annoyed as recently no one had been taking him seriously. And so, after each of them confessed their hatred at first sight for the other, the gangster found himself surrounded by Yoon Do-kyun's forces, and so he launched the attack. Su Wangho affirmed that their numbers were far too little to handle him, as he used his powerful fist in order to create a defensive shockwave. Yet the team leader found this confidence prideful as the gangster found himself tangled in magic chains. The S-rank hunter was shocked to learn that he was truly trapped by this skill. Yoon Do-kyun then revealed that the reason behind his ascension to leader of the violent crimes team was the fact that he possessed a unique skill that could even restrain the strongest of hunters. According to the man, many S-ranks fall for his slow chains, seeing how they were too prideful to dodge them. And so he gave the signal to his men, tightening the chains on the one who screamed in pain. With that, the leader of the Grizzly Guild fell to his knees. The team leader affirmed that even the weak could defeat the strong if they managed to catch them by surprise. With that, the man took the katana of his subordinate in order to finish off Su Wangho. But just as he was about to go for the kill, he noticed a hero charging at him from behind. This was none other than Guak Pilsung, whom he managed to block at the last second. With that, Yoon Do-kyun tried to gain some distance. The man demanded to know the reason behind the legendary hunter's presence. Guak Pilsung claimed that there was no reason to justify his absence. This made the leader of the violent crimes team realize that the protagonist was the one who pushed Su Wangho to betray them. Guak Pilsung demanded to know who ordered his execution, yet Yoon Do-kyun refused to answer. And when asked for a plan by his subordinate, the man assumed that some hope was left for them, seeing how the S-rank hunter was restrained. And so he ordered the attack. The first henchman readied his flail and launched it at our hero. His team leader found himself in a tough situation. All men charged at the protagonist, yet Guak Pilsung remained unimpressed as he tore right through them. None of the men were able to even scratch the legendary hunter. Later on at the Hunter Association, the council decided to address the matter of Guak Pilsung, a video that the association was trying to delete, regarding a private conversation between him and Yoon Do-kyun, had been leaked online. Safe to say, team leader Yoon was going to be punished for his misconduct. The S-rank Yu Se-nyeon claimed that the team leader had caused her much trouble. The old man in front of her asked her if the young man in question was the real legendary hunter, as no 80-year-old should look this young. So the huntress explained that despite not knowing what happened, she confirmed that they were dealing with the one and only Guak Pilsung. Those of the association were left quite intrigued, as they weren't aware that there was a skill that allows one to regain his youth. Under her smile, the S-rank began to judge the rich old man in front of her. She was disgusted by the fact that despite everything they had, they now wanted to regain their youth. Only then was it announced that Seo Guangho had become an ally of the protagonist. The people of the association were pissed. One of them even started to wonder why the legendary hunter was operating from the shadows, hoping that he was not up to no good like in the old days. Yet, as it turns out, no one knew exactly why he returned. This made the old suits theorize that, after living quietly in retirement, Guak Pilsung got overexcited by his new youth. At that moment, the S-rank decided to check something. She pointed out that the legendary hunter might be aiming to become the association president. This made the entire table turn towards the current president in order to ask him his opinion. As for this one, who was the S-rank hunter Lim Taowen? He began exerting a rather dark aura. According to him, this matter should be handled carefully, as it was a hot topic. Thus, the first order of business would be to uncover the intentions of the protagonist before acting at once. The lady claimed that she would put all of their faith into the president regarding this matter. After all, he was once a trusted ally of our hero. The room went silent immediately after this statement was made. The president looked at the huntress, and while the lady had a smirk on her face, this one had a gloomy expression. Meanwhile, at the Changshin Guild, the guildmaster explained how the association would close this matter quickly, by putting all of the blame on Yoon Do-kyun. The hero claimed this to be quite shameless. He was then asked if it wouldn't be better to reveal the entire truth regarding him and the incident anytime soon. But the legend claimed that this would be useless, as no one would care about the resurfacing of an old man. Guak Pilsung explained that since the media was controlled by the association, revealing who he is would be quite pointless. Then again, he had expected this much from the association, and decided to wait for other chances. The big guy was then disappointed in himself, as he had no idea the association had such a dark side. So the old man decided to comfort him by pointing out how he was always thankful towards him for always staying by his side. Hearing his mentor say this touched the man's heart, leaving him flattered. Only then did someone interrupt their conversation. The two mischievous hunters wanted to know why they had been summoned to this office. A chill ran down their spines as the protagonist gave them a darker glare while stating that he simply wanted to talk to them. And with that, the two of them completely changed attitudes. The skinny one was well aware that the one in front of him wasn't the average young man, yet it would have never occurred to him that this was the legendary hunter. With that, he finally understood why Park So-kan showed him so much respect. Guak Pilseung then revealed his plan to create a force of his own, which intrigued the guildmaster. The old man then explained how he wanted to form a unit that can keep tabs on the association. One could even compare it to some sort of leash that would prevent the corrupt suits at the top from acting as they please. The big guy knew very well that such mad ideas could only occur to his old mentor. Keeping this force a secret from the association was a must, as it would do them no good to have it as their enemy. Pilseung then affirmed that he won't force the young one to join him. Yet, as it turns out, this one had already made up his mind. In fact, he was eager to follow the old man once again and help him with whatever he needs. Hearing this was quite relieving for our protagonist. At that moment, they were interrupted by someone. As it turns out, the guildmaster wasn't the only hunter in this office who was eager to help the old man. Seo Guangho, who wasn't favored by the association any longer, pointed out how he needed to act, as he became a target after the last incident. When asked about his plan of action, the old man seemed to have it all figured out. Suddenly, he pointed at the hunter in front of him, and out of the blue, he declared that he would be using him like a puppet for a while. Seo Guangho immediately felt the pressure on his shoulder. Meanwhile, in a rural area, a dungeon gate was left unchecked. Even if the portal had been located by people, the old man stared at it with intrigue. Someone then approached the chief and urged him to evacuate with the rest, fearing a dungeon break. The old man was intrigued by the fact that no hunter came to help them, despite the fact that it had been 7 days since this gate appeared. According to his friends, the lower-ranked dungeons that spawned in the Korean sticks didn't have much treasure to loot. Yet just as he was left annoyed by all of this, a visitor approached the old man in order to inform him about the arrival of hunters from the capital. This news was truly stunning. Meanwhile, the hunter in question couldn't be more irritated. The old young man behind him, bossing him around, reminded the hunter once again to keep on a pleasant face. The villagers were quite intrigued by this. Seo Guangho then braced himself to speak. And so as he presented himself to the villagers as a noble hero here to save them, he began crying on the inside, regretting his actions. After some time, rumors began to spread. Rumors regarding an S-rank hunter taking care of non-profitable dungeons, which was rather unbelievable. As for the identity of this mysterious benefactor, it came as a shock to everyone to learn that it was none other than Seo Guangho. In fact, not even the man himself found his current situation believable. Some brats from the village then gathered around the man, mocking him while claiming that no real S-rank would set foot here. Yet, as soon as the wild one was about to show his teeth, his master quickly smacked him on the head in order to remind him to always smile. The old man then affirmed to the volunteer that today's dungeon would be B-rank. Yet, as the hero asked the party if they were ready, a member seemed to have some doubts. The C-rank hunter wondered if he should truly venture into a B-rank dungeon. Earlier on, our protagonist personally asked the young man from his guildmaster, Pilsong wanted to borrow Kim Tae-jun for the upcoming raids. In his eyes, the C-rank had a lot of talent, which is why he wanted to take him under his wing and teach him a few tricks. As it turns out, the guildmaster was delighted by the idea and claimed that his subordinate would surely feel the same. And with that being said, the matter had been settled. Back to the present, Kim Tae-jun revealed that he was shocked upon learning that our protagonist was, in fact, the legendary hunter. The C-rank then claimed that he might not be fit to raid with Pilsong and Seo Guangho. He then felt intimidated as the S-rank threatened to abandon him if he dragged them down. His dark glare earned him a correction from the old man. He even affirmed that the S-rank would be the one punished if anything happened to the C-rank. Tae-jun was also curious why they were attacking dungeons in the countryside. Seo Guangho also had a hard time understanding, as clearing such gates was anything but profitable. So the boomer reminded him that they needed to improve his image. With his bad name in the market, the S-rank would become a target for the association that could barely tolerate him. Yet the man was certain that no one would notice his efforts so far in the sticks. Pilsang affirmed that his sin was too big to be forgiven after one good deed. Yet then again they needed to help the villagers, as it would surely amount to something. Even after hearing this, the S-rank was still convinced that this was a waste of time. With that, the old man put an end to the conversation, as now was finally the time for action. And with that being said, the three hunters entered the gate. If you're on this later in the jungle-like dungeon, the party began roaming the map. Seo Guangho then quickly spotted something. It was none other than his distant cousins lurking in the trees. From the looks of it, these monsters seemed very hostile. Seo Guangho firmly gripped his weapon, and with that being said, he charged at the monkeys. The Neanderthal easily tore through the macaques. Kim Tae-jun was dumbfounded by this spectacle, and when asked about his reaction, he explained how amazed he was by the S-rank hunter. Pilsong asked the young one to focus on watching and learning. After all, despite his bad character, Seo Guangho's skills are quite remarkable. At that moment, the S rank urged his party to stop talking and help him already. Kim Tae-jun then expressed his curiosity regarding the relationship between Seo Guang-ho and the legendary hunter. So Pilsong explained how the S rank was simply making amends, as he had wronged him in the past. Our protagonist was a man of mercy who allowed a past enemy to earn his redemption, while this one was questioning his life choices. Sometime later, Kim Tae-jun declared that B-rank enemies might still be a little bit out of his capacity. Even so, the old man praised him for his performance, and claimed that, with his talent, he should become a B-rank hunter soon. As for Seo Guang-ho, he was quite annoyed. He who had slain a mountain of monkeys didn't understand why Tae-jun was being praised for only killing a few. So the old man reminded him that he had no right to compare himself to a B-rank hunter. Suddenly, the party heard a powerful roar. A new monster had arrived. With that, the giant monkey finally made his entrance. The hunters were relieved that the final boss finally showed up. The creature then let out a hostile scream. It then picked up a giant log, before throwing it at the humans. Seeing this, the hero launched the S rank at his oversized cousin. Seo Guang-ho was unable to get any rest, and so he decided to wrap things up quickly. The monster tried to attack him with its tail, as a minor inconvenience, and so he decided to take things a little more seriously. Shortly after the tail of the monkey was severed from its body, the creature began to scream in pain. Yet the predator wasn't done just yet. He wanted the creature to bite the dust already. The monkey screamed helplessly, and with that being said, he was slashed to pieces. The dungeon boss was finally defeated. The C rank was baffled by how easily Seo Guang-ho handled a B rank boss. He was then asked if he had learned anything. Kim Tae-jun explained that because of the huge power gap, he doubted that he could learn anything just by watching. But Pilseong reassured him that by spectating the S rank many times, he would eventually be able to pick up a few tricks along the way. As for this one, he was annoyed by the fact that he was forced to kill all of the monsters. He was even more irritated, as the message regarding the dungeon being conquered still hadn't appeared. Pilseong also found this strange, as with the boss dead, they should be able to get out by now. Only then did they notice something intriguing. Space itself was starting to crack. The hunters had a hard time believing this, as a gate had just opened inside of another dungeon. Kim Tae-jun was particularly intrigued, as he had never come across anything like this. The fact that this crack was no exit at all was the only thing the hunters were certain about. The old man then ordered the C rank to retreat back to Earth, while he went to check the anomaly out with Seo Guang-ho. Yet Kim Tae-jun insisted on tagging along, but our hero stopped him. This far outclassed the abilities of a C rank, as only the unknown lay beyond the breach. For that reason, Pilseong wanted the young man to go back and report their discovery to his guildmaster. At that moment, the S rank began to complain that he too should have a say in this. Yet when the master asked him if he had any problem with his plan, he quickly calmed down. Kim Tae-jun painfully realized that he would only be a liability once inside. The old man was happy to see that they could understand each other, and so the legendary hunter ordered Tae-jun to stand ready, in case they needed support. This one was ready to obey. The hunter even began praying that these two would return home safe and sound. A few moments later, inside the inner dungeon, the duo was immediately met with adversity. The hunter immediately dodged the attack of the giant monkey, before dicing him up shortly after. Guang-ho was annoyed by these persistent pests, and so he quickly beheaded the creature. The C-rank hunter didn't even break a sweat. He found the fact that the monsters attacked them as soon as they crossed the gate very frustrating. At that moment, a new opponent tried to take him from behind. This time around, our hero took care of the decapitation, and with that, the monster was handled swiftly. The C-rank then began to complain about how chaotic this place was, as every monster here was similar to the boss of the B-rank dungeon they had just cleared. He found this quite annoying, as the entrance had disappeared and the rank measurement had disappointed them. The old man then began to think of how B-ranks would have greatly struggled if they had entered the inner dungeon of an unknown rank. Guang-ho wanted to know if killing the boss would truly spawn an exit, yet our hero had no way of knowing this. And so as the big guy kept on complaining, the old man asked him how long he had been in this line of work. See, Guang-ho had been a hunter for about 5 years. Since the dungeon measurement system had appeared around this time, it was only natural for the S rank to be unfamiliar with raids on dungeons with mysterious ranks. Thus, Pilseong advised his partner to forget everything he knew, as all kinds of crazy stuff could happen inside a dungeon. The old man felt nostalgic, as it had been a long time since he had raided a dungeon without knowing its rank. At that moment, the hunters heard a sudden roar. A herd of giant monkeys had arrived at the scene. Continuously dealing with these monsters left Guang-ho quite tired. But as it turns out, the monkeys weren't alone this time. Something with wings lurked above the hunters' heads. A colossal flying macaque was now in sight, and from the looks of it, all the other monsters looked up to him. The hunters agreed that this creature was likely the dungeon boss. Only then did the creature spot the intruders, and so it began showing hostile behavior. Pilseong grew eager to face it in order to determine if it was truly the dungeon boss. With that, the winged primate ordered the attack, and all the monkeys charged in at once. Seeing how thrilled his partner was that all the monsters were coming at him at the same time, Pilseong reminded him to be wary at all times. With that, the hunters launched themselves at the beasts. Pilseong and Guang-ho immediately began butchering the creatures. The S rank took great pleasure in this carnage, yet it greatly angered the winged one, and so it decided to deploy its wings, before finally taking off from its rock. The creature then charged a powerful attack before unleashing a massive fireball. Guangho had no idea that the enemy had breath attacks, and thus the hunters dodged the incoming flames at the last second. As it turns out, the winged one had no problem killing its goons. Because of the fireball, the hunters were rid of the henchmen and could finally focus on their leader, who needed to be somehow pinned to the ground. The old man then started to look around. Only then did he find the perfect rock. Seeing this, Guangho jokingly asked the hero if he planned on throwing the stone at the monster. But as it turns out, this was Pilseong's exact plan, and so the 80-year-old braced himself and tossed the giant rock. The monster didn't even have enough time to dodge, and thus it was hit in the wing, making it scream in pain. Guangho was surprised as he didn't expect the old man to have a throwing skill. He was then shocked to learn that Pilseong didn't use an ability and simply threw the rock as hard as possible. This left him quite amazed as this old man's achievement was simply inhuman. The monster was enraged by this, which was immediately noticed by the hunters. The giant primate then charged at the human. This made it seem like a foolish beast in the eyes of the legendary hunter, as it was willingly giving up its air advantage. Pilseong was eager for the monster to come at him. Meanwhile, back on Earth, the guildmaster was informed by his subordinate that his master had been inside the dungeon for about 6 hours. For some reason, he felt uneasy. Yet as he began to wonder if he should go in himself, Kim Tae-jun noticed something. The shrinking gate was a sign that the dungeon had finally been conquered. Seeing this greatly relieved the man, yet as the gate was almost sealed, the hunters didn't spot any sign of Pilsen or his partner coming out of the dungeon. This was rather unexpected, and so as the gate turned into a small dot, the guildmaster's face went pale. No one was able to get out of the gate that had just disappeared. Later on, the S-rank sat there alone at the location of the gate that had disappeared, eagerly waiting for any news on those who had disappeared. Shortly after, Kim Tae-jun joined him, stating that he was unable to locate either Pilseong or Guangho. This left the man quite frustrated, and so he ordered the area to be searched once again. The guildmaster was worried sick about his master, who had just disappeared. A little earlier, inside the dungeon, the monster had had enough of the hunters, and so it decided to take them out at once. But little did Pilseong know that it was eagerly waiting for him to enter its range. And so, just as the primate was about to crush him, the protagonist made his move and sliced through its belly. And just like that, the giant flying ape was put down. The old man assumed that the dungeon was finally cleared. Guangho then approached Pilseong and praised him for his great performance. Our hero then got angry at the S-rank, who didn't even bother lending a hand while claiming that his assistance wasn't needed. The old man was frustrated by how lazy the younger generation had turned out to be. Only then did the hunters notice something behind them. Some kind of giant bluish feline had now appeared. This startled the hunters, who assumed that they had already killed the dungeon boss, and to their shock, a new threat appeared shortly after. The humans were startled by the giant toad's arrival. As Guangho asked the old man about these creatures, the latter angrily pointed out that he was just as clueless as him. Not even the legendary hunter had set foot in a dungeon that was so unpredictable. At that moment, the monsters began to show their fangs. Now back to back, Guangho blamed Pilseong for all of this mess. And so, as the hunters prepared themselves for the worst while the monsters charged ahead, they were surprised to see that they were attacking each other. Safe to say, the humans had no idea what was going on anymore. Pilseong was particularly intrigued by this messy realm. Only then did the humans feel a sharp pain in their ears. An unbearably loud noise came out of nowhere. And so, as they had a hard time processing this chaotic situation, their bodies began to fade. The system then declared that the dungeon had been cleared. With that, the hunters finally earned their rewards. Pilseong was particularly intrigued, as his prize turned out to be a blessing. This new power would allow him to become unfazed by the cold. The hunters then began to panic as they had almost been entirely pixelated. And with that being said, they disappeared from the hellish wasteland. Later on, in a snowy biome, someone started to wonder about their new location. The old man didn't know what to think of this, as he had just jumped from one odd place to another, and his partner was nowhere to be seen. He also realized that because of the blessing he had just received, he had become completely immune to the cold. This power felt more like a gift rather than a reward. Pilseong questioned if he had truly received this power by coincidence, and even began to wonder about its true nature. Only then did he spot something ahead. A yeti-like monster had appeared. Seeing the creature made the human wonder if he was truly outside of the dungeon. At that moment, the beast tried to attack him, but the old man simply kicked it in the face like it was an inconvenience. And so, as the creature went down, Pilseong claimed its level to be quite mediocre. Only then did he notice a rather odd sound. It was a human voice. Pilseong decided to walk towards it. A few moments later, he decided to take a quick peek at the situation. Our hero had stumbled upon a confrontation between humans and monsters. The hunters seemed to be speaking in some foreign language. Pilseong didn't expect to come across warriors from another country, and so, as one of them was attacked by the creatures, the rest of the party began to fear for their leader. The struggles of the Westerners immediately jumped out to our hero. After taking a deep breath, the team leader used all of her might in order to deal with the yeti in front of her. Only then was she startled by another creature trying to take her from the side. Yet just as it seemed like the lady was about to meet her doom, an unexpected savior stepped in. With a single slash, the monster was taken down. The old man who joined the battle wanted to help the foreigners. The team leader was intrigued by the Asian man and demanded his name. Yet the old man didn't understand what she said and urged her to speak Korean. This left the lady intrigued by the Korean. And so, as the Westerners questioned his presence on this land in their own language, the old Asian man was left quite frustrated. He began scolding the old ladies for simply standing there instead of assisting him. One of the hunters suggested to the team leader to accept the help of the man in order to slay the monsters. The one in charge agreed that they should focus on the beasts first, and so she finally made up her mind. The team leader ordered her men to assist the Korean. Pilsong was happy to see them cooperate with him. And just like that, the confrontation between man and monster took an unexpected turn. After a short while, the monsters were finally down. From the looks of it, the hunters didn't suffer any injuries. Yet then again, the foreigners began to wonder what should be done about the protagonist, and so they decided to speak to him. Since the dungeon entrance was a protected area, they demanded to know how the young man entered in the first place. Yet once again, the language barrier turned out to be a problem, as Pilsong was unable to understand what she said. The other side was also frustrated by this and found the situation quite suspicious. With that, the team leader approached the Korean. She offered to guide him towards the exit, seeing how the dungeon was no safe place for one to roam on his own. Unable to understand, the old man thought that the lady was asking for his help clearing the dungeon. And so as he offered his hand in order to show that he had accepted to help them, his gesture was misunderstood as gratitude. And with that being said, the two sides shook hands, with each having his own story in mind. With that being settled, the raid could now finally continue. The old man was quite fond of these ladies' spirit. A little later, the party finally arrived in front of a giant ice cave. Powers, one of the members, detected the dungeon boss inside. This earned her the praise of the team leader. Pilsong then appeared behind her, as he was quite intrigued by her unique skill. The angered lady quickly backed away, leaving him confused. The team leader urged her subordinate to not act so rashly. She also needed to speak to the old man. The team leader clarified that they found him quite suspicious, and so if he dared to make one single misstep, she wouldn't even think twice before killing him at once. Despite not understanding this, Pilsong sensed a warning that he should abide by. The team leader understood that her message was received. With that, she urged her subordinate to stay on high alert. The hunters were ordered to remain wary at all times, and so as they welcomed the order, the Korean remained unfazed. As one of the ladies asked about the location of the boss, the one with the radar ability pointed out that he was right ahead. This was rather intriguing, as his presence couldn't be detected. Only then did the protagonist feel alerted. He warned everyone to be careful, and before the team leader could even process this, the ground under their feet began to shake. Shortly after, it started to crack. Seeing this, the team leader ordered her subordinates to prepare themselves for the fall. And just like that, the footing of the party disappeared. The ladies screamed in horror. And just like that, they finally hit the ground. The one in charge decided to check on her team. From the looks of it, no one was injured. It didn't cross her mind that such a place could exist under the cave. Only then did the huntress feel an odd presence behind her. The dungeon boss was now staring the lady down. She was unable to see him coming, as she had been distracted by the fall. With that being said, the monster decided to attack her at once. The big yeti tried to crush the huntress. Her subordinates were left stunned, yet as the monster awaited the result of his strike, he was left quite shocked. She, who should have been human-paced, had resisted the attack. The creature didn't expect this, and so it decided to apply more force into its attack. The huntress was barely holding on and was about to crumble. At that moment, her teammates decided to support her, starting with the archer and her flame arrows. The warrior even charged at the creature. She unleashed a tempest of cuts and slashes upon it. Yet even after all of this, the ladies were left horrified. They had unleashed countless attacks upon the monster, and yet it wasn't even scratched. If this left them in a rather tough situation, at that moment the team leader was about to crack. Just as she assumed that she was about to meet her demise, an Asian decided to intervene. The old man asked for permission to personally kill the monster. Yet once again, the locals were unable to understand the language of the foreigner. Pilsong then assumed that he had been granted permission. The hunters were startled by this unexpected behavior. As for our protagonist, he calmly approached the beast. With his sword in hand, he decided to wrap things up quickly. Meanwhile, outside of the dungeon, a soldier eagerly waited in front of the gate. The man was getting worried, as Angela and her troop had been inside for a long time. As it turns out, the party had been raiding for 4 days straight. This made the man worry that the mission was a failure. Only then did he spot a change in the gate. Seeing how it was getting smaller, it was safe to assume that the dungeon had been cleared. Only then did the soldier spot a silhouette coming out of the portal. The man rushed to hug his beloved Angela, yet as he leaned in for a kiss, he was met with something odd rather than his delicate princess. The soldier had no idea who this buffoon was. At that moment, guns were immediately aimed at the intruder. Despite having no idea about his whereabouts, Pilsea was glad to be finally back on Earth. Only then did he notice that the officer who had tried to kiss him had now pointed a gun at him. Seeing how an unknown man from the east walked out of the gate, the soldier started to fear for Angela. Our hero then asked the man if he was an ally of the party that was inside, seeing how they were wearing the same color as him. Yet the man, who didn't understand Korean, demanded to know what happened to the hunters. The old man then got angry as he had just noticed that someone had pointed a gun at him out of the blue. The officer, trying to stand his ground, warned that he would use the gun if the Asian doesn't stay away. And with that being said, tension started to build up between the two men. Only then did the team leader come out of the portal. The officer was happy to see that Angela returned safe and sound. He then asked for her help arresting the unknown intruder. Only then did Angela call out Officer Ivan's name. This one was thrilled, as he was certain that the intruder would surely be apprehended with the help of the team leader. Yet before he could even realize it, he found himself pinned on the ground. Ivan then demanded to know why Angela had immobilized him, and upon hearing her claim that he should let go of his weapon in order to cling on to dear life, he was completely stunned. The huntress then apologized on behalf of Ivan and explained that his hostility was a normal reaction in front of an intruder. Pilseong declared that there was no need for Angela to go this far, as he was simply planning on giving the man a rough correction. The old man then addressed the one on the ground. Ivan was left horrified as the mystery man picked up his gun. He was unable to understand the Korean explaining that his weapon was useless against a hunter. Pilseong then crushed the gun in his hand. He then advised the high-ranking officer to mind his manners, as this type of behavior could endanger all of his subordinates. Yet since the advice was in Korean, the Westerners didn't understand it. In fact, they even thought that the Asian man was threatening to eliminate them if such an incident occurs again. Later on at the Russian military base, Pilseong sat alone in an interrogation room. The old man was getting impatient. In his eyes the wait seemed endless. Only then did someone cross his door. Someone intimidating, someone big. The man then began to stare down at our protagonist. Pilseong thought that he was in front of a brute, yet as he began to speak, Pilseong was left stunned. He had finally met someone who speaks his mother tongue. At that moment, the big man slammed his hands on the table. From the looks of it, he seemed to have a very important question to ask. He wanted to know if Pilseong likes idols. This turn of events caught Pilseong off guard. Out of nowhere, the man started to babble about how he was a big fan of certain K-pop groups and how he wishes to visit Korea. Only then did someone remind Gorbachev that they were here for serious matters. Thus, the man apologized to Major Romanov. Ivan then apologized for the delay, as he had a hard time finding a Korean translator. But thankfully, he found Lieutenant Sergei Gorbachev to fill in this role. And so, as the major stated his name, he introduced himself back and revealed that he was Korean. Ivan was greatly intrigued by Guak Pilseong. A few moments earlier, Ivan asked Angela for the reason she was protecting an intruder. And so the soldier started to explain how the dungeon turned out to be unexpectedly hard, and how the most intriguing part was the Korean man. Upon learning that the intruder had killed the boss with one shot, the major was left stunned. Since he doesn't seem hostile, it would be in the Russians' best interest not to get on his bad side and to focus on finding out his identity. Back to the present, Ivan tried to think of the best way to approach the situation, and thus he decided to be straightforward. The major wanted to know how a Korean man with a sword was able to secretly infiltrate their military zone. To top it all off, there was no official record of Guak Pilseong entering their country, and thus he declared that an international conflict could occur if our hero was unable to give a plausible explanation. At first, an uncomfortable silence settled in, but then the Korean decided to speak up. He asked the officer about their current whereabouts. This infuriated the officer, who demanded an answer to his question at once. So Pilseong revealed how, after an accident occurred inside a dungeon, he simply found himself in front of the Russian hunters. Yet the soldier had a hard time believing this, so the old man affirmed that he had told them the truth. With that, Pilseong asked about their current location once again. Despite still having suspicions, Ivan decided to entertain this question. It then came as a shock to our hero to learn that he was in the 8th containment zone of the former Russian Federation. He had no idea that the dungeon had taken him this far from his fatherland. After the death of the Russian president at the hands of monsters, when gates began appearing, the Russians were lost and unable to defend their large territory. Because of that, monsters had invaded a large portion of the motherland, with the military trying to liberate the conquered land. But because of the great losses it suffered, the country was now but a shadow of its former self. For that reason, the military had no choice but to be extremely wary of any intruder on their land. From the looks of it, Pilseong understood their situation. When suddenly Angela barged into the room looking for Ivan. From the looks of it, a problem had occurred. The huntress wasted no time and explained the entire situation. Meanwhile, the ground was shaking outside the building. The soldiers were left horrified. They were now under siege by a herd of monsters. A crisis was occurring in the city of Saragrad, as a huge battle broke out between the soldiers and the monsters. One of the soldiers warned the squad leader that they needed to fall back, as the enemy greatly outnumbered them. Only then did the man feel something lurking in the bushes. The soldiers were horrified as a giant horned wolf appeared. The hound then began to stare at the squad leader. Yet just as the creature was about to turn the man into its next meal, it was suddenly decapitated. And just like that, the giant wolf met its end with a single strike. The squad leader was left stunned. The man in front of him was none other than Major General Garov. All were overjoyed to see the S-rank hero of the motherland arrive on the battlefield. The Major General then informed the men that backup from the monster subjugation unit would arrive at any moment. He then made it clear that falling back wasn't an option. After all, holding the line was their only way to protect their families. The words of their hero immediately made the Russians regain their spirit. Back at the base, Angela informed the Major that the monster horde of Sector 12 was marching towards the west. She then made it clear that waiting any longer, it would mean that Saragrad and its 100,000 inhabitants would be in great danger. The major took a few seconds to analyze the situation, and with that, he decided to give his order to the lieutenant. All available hunters and troops were to regroup and march towards Sarograd. The man then turned towards their guest. He then ordered Angela to stay here and watch over him. The hunters started to scream at Even, claiming that it was madness to keep her at base when they were already lacking manpower, and so the major decided to make things clear for his lieutenant. He then imposed his order upon her by using his authority. And with that being said, Angela's superior walked out of the room. And while the lieutenant was left irritated, the major found himself perfectly calm. Even knew that what he did was wrong, yet he simply couldn't bear to see Angela endangering herself on the front lines any longer. At the same time, the huntress punched the table in frustration. She was well aware of Even's desire to protect her, yet his decision hurt her pride as a soldier. Meanwhile, Pilsong watched this scene in complete silence. Since the dispute was in Russian, he was unable to understand why they were fighting in the first place, and so he decided to ask for clarification. Angela then apologized for expressing her anger like that in front of him. Despite having no idea what had just happened, the Korean advised Angela to never obey orders blindly, as only those who could see the entire picture could ascend to higher peaks. Upon hearing this, the Russian lady, those who didn't understand a word, began to wonder why their guest was smirking like that. Angela, who had no intention of following Even's order, began to wonder what to do with the protagonist. And despite not knowing the limits of his abilities, she was certain that he could be an incredible ally on the front lines. And so despite how hard to believe his story was, the lieutenant decided to trust her hunch regarding Guak Pilsong. Meanwhile, on the battlefield, the soldiers were launching an all-out assault with their rifles. Their target seemed to be some kind of monster with a tough shell. They tried to relentlessly shower it with their bullets. At that moment, a ceasefire was ordered. And just as the troops started to wonder if they had dealt any damage, the creature freed itself from its shell. Even after countless rounds, the armadillo remained unscratched. The monster then decided to counterattack, and with that, it began tearing through the soldiers. Even the highest ranks seemed to have been injured. The monster then started to let out a dark aura as it slowly approached its prey. And with that being said, it launched itself at its target. But just as the man thought that he was about to meet his demise, someone arrived at the last moment to shield him from the monster. This arrival caught the monster off guard. Because of that, it failed to notice the other hunter in time. The armadillo was then hit with the skill Earth Strike. And so, after letting out its last scream, the monster finally took its last breath. Its lifeless corpse immediately fell to the ground. Upon seeing this, the soldier immediately realized that his saviors were from the monster subjugation unit. He was then approached by one of his comrades, Ivan, commander of the 4th Monster Subjugation Unit. The man then thanked him for saving his life. When asked about the Major General, the man explained that since their forces were so spread out, he had no way to tell his current location. The soldier then informed Ivan that a huge wave of monsters was approaching from the east. This left him horrified upon seeing it. The soldiers awaited the orders of their commander. Ivan had been hunting monsters for many years, yet never had he seen the beasts move in such large numbers. The most intriguing part was that the horde was made up of many species. Ivan started to feel uneasy. He felt as if all of these monsters were in fact running away from some kind of danger. Meanwhile, somewhere else on the map, at an unknown location, a fearsome titan was sharpening its fangs. Back to the battlefield. The soldiers did their best to deal with another armadillo. They tried to fire non-stop. Only then did they notice that they were almost out of magic stone bullets, so one of the men suggested switching to regular bullets. This smart comment earned him a punch to the helmet. It was common knowledge that the only material that could possibly damage monsters was magical stone. The ignorant soldier was then asked a question regarding the hunters. When asked what allows them to fight the beasts, he assumed that the main factor was their super strength, yet their physique was only part of the answer. Hunters are also able to wield weapons that contain high-grade magic stones. At that moment, the ignorant soldier understood something. He finally realized why hunters were referred to as those chosen by the divine. Meanwhile, somewhere else, a mammoth was running wild. The troops did their best while trying not to get crushed to death. This forced the support to use one of her spells. With that, the ground under the creature turned into mud. The mammoth found itself unable to move. The archer then seized this opportunity and attacked the beast. Each of her arrows fell like lightning upon the monster, yet the pain only made it angrier. Seeing this, the tank asked Sophie for some buffs. With that, the support began chanting her spells, enhancing the health, defense, and weapons of the vanguard. With that being said, the soldier launched herself at the giant animal. She then gathered all of her strength into her swing. And with that, the skilled berserker's fury was unleashed. In the blink of an eye, countless cuts were inflicted upon it. The mammoth then fell to the ground as a lifeless corpse. With that, the vanguard was relieved as this zone was finally cleared. Yet as the ground started to shake, she realized that she had spoken too soon. A new wave of monsters was now charging at the soldiers. There seemed to be no end to them. Thus, the vanguard turned to Major Romanov. Ivan realized that they lacked the necessary power to hold the line any longer, and that the upcoming damage would be unstoppable regardless of their intervention. And so, Ivan started to seriously think about retreating. Yet, as he was lost in his thoughts, he was snapped back to reality by an unknown noise. Ivan was horrified as a giant horned wolf charged at him. All soldiers were left horrified, but just as it seemed like the major was done for, a hammer wielder intervened at the last moment. Angela arrived just in time to save Ivan. The soldiers immediately rushed to their major. Ivan demanded to know why Angela was here. Only then did he notice the Asian man beside her. The major then started to scream at the lieutenant for bringing a suspicious outsider to the fight. Angela declared that Pilseong would be of great help to their cause, and that they should only focus on the enemy for now. And as she claimed that she would accept any punishment for disobeying him, Ivan was left stunned. The huntress then apologized, as she couldn't simply stay behind while the others fought. At that moment, the man screamed that they were fighting a losing battle. For that reason, he wanted to evacuate the citizens from the city as soon as possible. The Korean immediately understood that the man was thinking about surrendering. This made him sigh, as the major turned out to have a weak heart. Pilsin then urged Ivan to look at the fire burning in the eyes of his subordinates. Not a single one of his soldiers was ready to throw in the towel. Unlike Ivan, fear seemed to have no place in Angela's eyes. The protagonist then decided to make something clear. In his eyes, only when the leader surrenders will the battle truly be over, and thus Ivan needed to stay strong for the sake of his soldiers. The lieutenant offered to translate what Pilsin had just said, yet the old man affirmed that it wouldn't be necessary. From the looks of it, his message got through. With that being said, the hero went to hunt some monsters while urging Major Romanov to think well about his next move. At that moment, one of the soldiers decided to speak up. Angela declared that she would fight until the end regardless of his approval. She wanted to fulfill her duty towards her country and the people who had faith in her. And with that being said, the lieutenant began marching forward. As for Sergei, he seemed pretty concerned about his commander. These words made Ivan rethink his life choices until he finally made up his mind. The major then decided to address his subordinates. He wanted to apologize for his cowardice. Ivan had forgotten for a second that they couldn't just run from a battle, no matter how dire it may seem, and thus he declared that they would fight until victory was theirs. He then reminded everyone that they had a duty towards their motherland. All soldiers seemed to share his fire. The major then walked to the front, and with that being said, he ordered his soldiers to scream and march forward. All soldiers were now more eager than ever to free their conquered land. As for the protagonist, he was simply happy that their leader came back to his senses. Later on, Pilseong held his sword firmly. Two giant wolves attacked him at the same time. The old man resorted to his weapon enhancement, and with a single strike, he killed two birds with one stone. Meanwhile, the Russian hunters were taking care of an armadillo. Ivan ordered the troops to support their vanguards. The soldiers unleashed a barrage of bullets upon the beasts. This prevented them from taking the hunters by surprise. The major felt relieved as the tide appeared to be shifting in their favor. Yet he wasn't sure if this change was due to his troops being motivated or the unstoppable force fighting beside them. At some point, the wolves became too scared to attack the protagonist, when suddenly he heard something intriguing coming. A mammoth was attacking the foot soldiers. The troops did their best to evade the incoming trunk. Pilseong decided to quickly deal with this beast. He charged at it head first. The old man then cut it down with his sword, and with that, a relic of the past slayed another. The Russians were amazed by the mysterious Korean who was butchering all the beasts by himself. Angela was particularly intrigued by him. She found his efficiency in combat to be quite impressive. Despite his young looks, his technique showcased years of experience. As for Pilseong, he felt uneasy and prayed that his hunch was wrong. After countless efforts, the battle finally seemed to calm down. The vanguard informed the lieutenant that the monsters were almost fully wiped out. At the same time, Ivan rushed towards her. He was happy to inform her that the unit of the Major General was also able to hold the line. The Major was thrilled by the fact that they were winning without suffering many losses. Yet little did he know something was lurking behind him. But right before Ivan could become dog food, Pilseong saved him at the last moment. The monster went down with a single hit, as usual. And with that, Ivan escaped unharmed. Pilseong urged him to always remember that danger only strikes when one least expects it. The Major then expressed his gratitude toward the one who saved his life. He also wanted to apologize for his rude behavior before claiming that Pilseong was the main reason behind their victory. Only then did a chill run down his spine as the Korean claimed that the battle was still going on. The hero explained how strange it was to see all these different monsters running together, and that the term monster refers to all creatures that come out of dungeons. It was also important to note that humans see all monsters as a unified force, but in reality, it was very common for the different races of monsters to fight among each other. For that reason, it was rather strange to see all of these different species running together. At that moment, the conversation was interrupted by a sudden change in the weather, and while the soldiers were intrigued by the snow, Pilseong began to explain how he had experienced this scenario in the past. According to him, the only reason the monsters were behaving as such was to escape an apex predator. And so, as this one made his entrance, Angela's face immediately went pale. Pilseong's fear turned out to be true. A giant monster revealed itself. Upon seeing the giant ice dragon in front of them, the Russians froze in place, as none had stumbled upon such a disaster before. The men then demanded their leader's command. Yet Ivan couldn't make a decision, as they couldn't possibly face such a beast. At that moment, the Korean urged the Russians to evacuate the soldiers and the civilians. He then declared that regular guns and troops were useless against it. Thus, Ivan asked him what he had in mind. The protagonist simply smirked, as his plan was simply to take on the ice monster. At first, the Major claimed this to be suicide. Yet for some reason he didn't trust his own words. For some reason the man was convinced that Pilseong could take on the monster. This made our hero state that he would not disappoint the major's expectations. Ivan then decided to let the hero fight the creature and begged him to save the citizens. And with that being said, Guak Pilseong grew eager to take on the giant monstrosity. The entire area began to shake. The trees started to jiggle in their place, and then it came forward. The massive dragon that was as big as a mountain. Since the monster had its back turned, Angela decided to seize her chance. She asked the troops to brace themselves, and so the archers pulled their arrows. And as soon as the firing command was given, the munitions were launched toward the giant monster. And so as the arrows hit it, the creature simply turned toward its aggressors. Now came the turn of the magic unit to step in. They gathered all of their power in order to unleash one big fireball. The giant creature didn't have enough time to dodge, and just like that it was hit in the face. The dust cloud from the attack then began to dissipate. Angela was convinced that their attacks had no effect. But as it turns out, they did. The attacks had made the dragon even angrier. And with that being said, it unleashed a powerful blizzard roar. The hunters struggled in the presence of the cold wind. At that moment, the surroundings of the creature began to freeze over. One of the soldiers noticed the ice gathering around him. He then screamed in pain as he was placed in his cold coffin. The creature was absorbing heat at an exceptional rate. Seeing this, the lieutenant ordered all soldiers to stay away from the monster and its cold surroundings. The hunters now had no way to approach the monster and engage in close combat. At that moment, the beast used its dragon roar, which allowed it to unleash a powerful gust of freezing cold air. Yet Pilseong refused to back down. In fact, he immediately charged at the monster. At first, the dragon itself wasn't confused, but when the human challenged its power, it became quite angry. Angela urged the hero to stay back, feeling that he would freeze to death, but Pilseong wasn't worried about dragon breath. After all, he possessed cold resistance, which offered him complete protection from the freezing air. Upon seeing this, the Russians were left stunned. Our hero then began climbing on top of the dragon. He then managed to reach the perfect altitude. With that, the old man descended upon the reptile with his blade, and based on the dragon's reaction, the hit seemed to have caused some damage. Pilseong then mocked the beast for daring to cry when the battle had just barely started. Angela was unable to believe her own eyes. The Korean hunter was able to survive in the cold surroundings of the dragon. In fact, surviving was an understatement, as if he had conveniently gotten the perfect ability to counter this monster, which seemed too good to be true. Her suspicions regarding the Asian man grew more and more. After a barrage of attacks, the old man finally regained the ground. At that moment, the dragon tried to smash him with its claws, only for the 80-year-old to dodge just in time. Shortly after, our protagonist noticed something horrifying. The dragon seemed to be charging an attack. A powerful breath was coming Pilse's way. The hunter was dumbfounded, having realized that the dragon was waiting for him to evade. And with that being said, the ice breath was launched upon him. Yet just as it seemed like the legendary hunter was about to take some serious damage, an ardent rescuer flew to his rescue. Our hero was left stunned as the ice breath was countered with a fiery blade. The powerhouse then decided to check on the young man. Upon hearing the decorated warrior claim that he would help him, our relic was left stunned as he was speaking in his mother tongue. And so he decided to ask him about how he was proficient in Korean. Turns out the Major General had a Korean wife. The SS rank then brought up the report of Ivan, explaining how the Asian mysteriously spawned inside the dungeon. And before our hero could explain himself, he was stopped. The Major General clarified that their top priority now should be to take down the dragon. Guak Pilseong was thrilled by the logical old man before introducing himself. The Russian S-rank hunter known as Garov stated his name and his position as the High Commander of the Monster Subjugation Unit. The legendary hunter couldn't help but feel a sense of kinship towards the other old man. At that moment, the dragon interrupted the conversation of the elderly. The hunters immediately realized that the beast was frustrated after seeing its breath getting countered. Pilseong was happy that it was annoyed, and with his new teammate, he was growing eager to slay the ice dragon. Garov decided to make the first move. With his sword, he unleashed a powerful fire attack. The ice dragon immediately took some damage. At that moment, it tried to fight back using its dragon roar. The Major General was startled upon seeing himself getting frozen, and just like that, the human found himself at a disadvantage. Garov had never experienced such cold air, making it harder for him to fight. At that moment, our hero launched himself at the beast. He quickly hit it in the neck using his sword. The dragon was getting more and more pissed off by the pain. Pilseong then declared that he would take care of close combat and that he needed the Major General to support him from the rear. The general agreed to that plan. At first, the man was intrigued by our hero's ability to withstand the cold, but then he started to think about how this was a first for him. Garov, who always led the battle on the front lines, was now supporting from the back. The beast then decided to try another ice breath, yet our adored relic dodged the attack swiftly. He then called out the monster as it had already tried this trick once, and with that he attacked the dragon once again. Pilseong finally regained the ground, yet even after his efforts the dragon was still standing. Garov began to complain about how persistent the enemy was. Pilseong then brought up that the cold air around it had become much weaker. In other words, their attacks were starting to get to the monster. Pilseong then decided to share a Korean idiom with the general. It said that a tree that had been hit 9 times would fall on the 10th strike. The general laughed as it perfectly fit their situation. And with that being said, our protagonists rushed to give the 10th strike. At that moment, the Russian troops decided to back them up. With that, a new batch of arrows was launched, and a giant fireball was unleashed. The attacks then combined as if they were one. And with that being said, the monster was hit in the back. This time, their efforts made it scream in great agony. Pilsong seized the opportunity and attacked it from the front. This time, the monster didn't have any way to fight back. Our hero was relieved to have stumbled upon such trustworthy allies. Only then did he find something eye-catching on the dragon. It was a crack on the shell that could serve as a weak spot. Pilsong was thrilled by this, and with that being said, he launched himself at the dragon once again. The Major General decided to back him up, and so it successfully hit the face. Because of the fire, it failed to notice the protagonist getting close. With that being said, the legendary hunter decided to end the fight. He placed all of his strength in this one final attack. At that moment, something snapped, yet it wasn't the shell of the dragon. Pilsong's sword had broken under his own power, but luckily the general came in clutch. Garov tossed Pilsong his own great sword. Upon grabbing it, the hero could only describe it as a piece of art, and with that he promised not to disappoint. The legendary hunter attacked the dragon one last time. He put all of his strength into his new blade, and with the help of the great sword, the dragon was finally decapitated. And so as the hunter reached the ground, so did the severed head. Only then did the system notify them that the field boss had been slain. The Russian troops were left stunned. In fact, they could barely believe it. And so as the dungeon was cleared, the system gave a special gift to the one who slayed the boss. Because of that, Pilsong acquired the rare skill known as Dragon Slayer's Strike. Its title was certainly impressive. And with that, the dragons there began to wonder about the nature of his new ability. Sometime after the battle at a luxurious building, our hero sat there by the window, watching the soldiers on the ground. Ivan then apologized for making him wait. He explained how everyone was busy with the repairs after their recent battle. The major even claimed that they would forever be in his debt. Yet Pilsong declared that they could pay him back by simply sending him home. This intrigued the old man, who wanted him to stay. Ivan then immediately saluted the commander-in-chief. Garov claimed that the protagonist should stay longer in the motherland. After all, Russia was now facing a crisis, as monsters were running free in countless zones across the vast land. For that reason, they needed the help of great warriors, which is why the general offered to treat our hero like a king and compensate him if he decided to stay. And so when asked about his opinion regarding this proposition, the Korean didn't think twice before declining. This made the general wonder if money was the cause of this refusal or an attachment to the Korean soil. Pilsong revealed that he couldn't care less about greatness and simply wanted to settle some matters in Korea. Hearing this, the general realized that his hands were tied, and so he decided to pull out his trump card, claiming it to be an unrefusable offer. This greatly intrigued our protagonist, and with that being said, the general placed his offer on the table. In exchange for his aid, he offered to marry his daughter to our hero. He then presented him with a picture of his delicate flower, Alexandra Natasha. Pilsong was left dumbfounded as the general claimed that she took her good looks from him. Later on, the papers were finally complete. According to Ivan, Pilsong simply needed to head to the airport with these documents and he should be ready to go. The general urged him to reconsider. And as he pointed out once again that he was making a big sacrifice by giving him the hand of his daughter, Pilsong angrily refused once again. He then pitied the soldiers for having such an annoying superior. Only then did something come to the old man's mind. Pilsong had something to ask of Ivan. Later on, back at the Changchan Guild, the phone of the guildmaster started to buzz. He quickly picked up the phone and introduced himself to the unknown caller. Seokchan was then surprised to hear a familiar voice. The one on the other end of the line was none other than his master. He fell from his chair and demanded some explanations. And as the guildmaster pointed out how shocking the disappearance of the old man was, this one claimed that he couldn't properly explain it. Seokchan then offered to come and pick him up. Yet since he was far away, Pilsong declared that he would return by himself in order not to bother the busy guildmaster. Only then did this one declare that things had gotten much slower recently. Pilsong was confused, so the guildmaster revealed how the association had started to make some changes. After hearing this, the hero started to expect the worst. Since they were connected to the protagonist, both Northern Light and Changchan were forbidden from entering dungeons. The association was even double-checking every single detail to make sure that the guild got no chance to raid. This greatly irritated our protagonist, as guild management wasn't cheap. Since the milestones obtained from raiding were sold at high prices, they were the main source of income for guilds. Park Seokchan then apologized as he had no way of changing their current situation. Yet Pilsong knew that he wasn't to blame, as not even a large guild could easily contradict the association, which had full control over dungeon access. The general took this opportunity to make his proposition once again. Yet from the looks of it, this gave the old man an idea. Pilsong refused to let the association control him, and so he decided to quickly end the call. And just like that, he hung up on the guildmaster. When he turned back to the general thought that he was ready to accept his proposition. Yet, as it turns out, Pilsong had a favor to ask. Sometime later, in a cold abandoned zone, Park Seokchan's nipples started to freeze. The master called out the soft boy for daring to complain about the cold. After Pilsong's return, the guildmaster was unable to predict any of his movements. Never had he expected that the old man would drag him all the way to Russia. so Pilsong explained how, if they returned to Korea, the association would prevent them from entering dungeons. For that reason, he decided to make a mutual benefit deal with the Russians, who were lacking the necessary manpower to deal with their monster problems. At that moment, someone started to complain that it would have been better to send guild members. Young-hoon demanded to know why he and the Changchang guildmaster were the only ones Pilsong summoned. So the hero explained how they could avoid the eyes of the association by sticking to their small numbers, and thus the legendary hunter urged his companions to stop talking and focus on raiding. And just like that, the Koreans were forced to labor overseas. Only then did they hear a strange sound. Pilsong asked his companions to ready themselves. The monsters had finally shown themselves. As soon as a giant insect approached him, Pilsong wasted no time in cutting it down. Sokchan imbued his fist with a fire skill, and with that he began punching the monster's head clean off. Meanwhile, Young-hoon, with his little dagger, was found struggling. He was left blown away, as he didn't expect the legendary hunter and the other guildmaster to be this much more powerful than him. At that moment, an insect charged at him, only for it to receive a sword to the head. Pilsing asked the man to remain calm. He clarified that if Young-hoon truly wished to create the best guild, he couldn't let himself be intimidated by that much. The man found this to be quite frustrating, and so he decided to hold his ground. And just like that, Young-hoon got his first kill of the day. After some time, the last pest let out its last scream, before falling lifeless at the feet of the protagonist. Pilsing and Sekchan didn't even break a sweat, but Young-hoon was a different story. The old man immediately pointed his exhaustion out, but the man denied it, so Pilsing clarified to him that he didn't need to drain himself like that. At that moment, Young-hoon fully realized that he couldn't keep up with his party members, and began to question if he should be here in the first place. The legendary hunter immediately noticed his troubles. At that moment, Sekchan seemed to have found something. Our hero was left alarmed as he was guided towards a huge hole in the ground. The hunters were mostly sure that this was left behind by the boss itself. The hole appeared to be some kind of tunnel. With that, the party needed to think carefully about its next move. Pilsing suggested following the tunnel, certain that it would lead them to the boss. Seokchan, on the other hand, claimed this plan to be dangerous, as it might allow the enemy to take them by surprise. Then again, this was the only option ahead of them, and so Young-hoon volunteered to enter the tunnel. He claimed that such risky tasks should fall on him, since he was the most expendable member of the party, but Pilsing affirmed that he precisely couldn't give him this dangerous task. Being the weakest of the three, Young-hoon would have the smallest chances of survival in case of an ambush. For that reason, the team leader decided to enter the tunnel himself. He then tasked his teammates to scout their surroundings. And with that being said, the hero jumped into the deep hole. Young-hoon didn't know what to think about all of this. This made his colleague understand that he still hadn't grasped the situation. At first, the man thought that they didn't trust him enough, but it was then clarified that it wasn't the case, as Young-hoon always seemed to give himself the difficult tasks. That was a quality that Seokchan admired, claiming that it was the reason why many people had chosen him as their leader. The big one then claimed that his friend would understand everything in time, and with that being said, he went to check the surroundings. Young-hoon then found himself alone with his thoughts. A few moments later, as the dagger user was roaming the streets, there was something he was unable to get his mind off. The words of our hero regarding creating a force to rival the association were stuck in his head. Upon hearing them, Young-hoon became convinced that Pilsing would bring a new dawn to their world. Yet this wasn't his main concern. In fact, the man was worried that he wasn't fit to stand beside the legendary hunter, and so just as he was about to cry out his weakness, he noticed something nearby. A giant centipede rose from the ground. This creature seemed to be different from the others. Young-hoon immediately theorized that this was the worst monster. Seeing this, his first thought was to go and get help. Yet upon turning back, he didn't walk a single step. At that moment, Young-hoon made up his mind. And so as the giant centipede was minding its own business, it felt alerted as it noticed a hunter trying to take it from above. And before he could even react, the human was able to score a hit. Young-hoon was left annoyed by this. The monster had just withstood his finishing blow. With that being said, the hunter regained his footing. The anger of the boss started to grow by the second. Young-hoon was well aware that he had acted rashly, but the man had something to prove. At that moment, his determination knew no bounds, as he wanted to show himself that he was fit to walk beside Pilsing and Seokchan. But as the fight went on, the man found himself out of breath. The beast attacked him relentlessly. Yet up until now, he managed to dodge every strike. The hunter then climbed on top of the beast, and with that being said, he unleashed a tempest of slashes. The giant centipede screamed in pain. Yet from the looks of it, its attacker wasn't done just yet. Young-hoon decided to use one of his skills. Fire Blast was then activated, and with that being said, the hunter unleashed a mighty blow. Yet upon doing so, he was left quite stunned. The monster was able to block his attack. The beast then decided to launch a counterattack. It decided to attack by using its sharp legs. Young-hoon struggled to stay in one piece. The man judged the legs as quite irritating. He felt as if he was fighting a swordsman armed with 4 blades. Since the centipede was able to block all of his attacks using its legs, the hunter theorized that it was an A-rank boss. If that was the case, it meant that the legendary hunter and the other guild master could easily defeat it. This thought made him more determined than ever. Young-hoon then firmly held on to his blade. The man decided to remain faithful to himself and take down the monster at once. Neither man nor monster wanted to be the loser of this confrontation. The centipede started by launching its attacks. Yonghoon jumped into the air in order to dodge. His plan was to go for the blind spot of the legs that the monster couldn't defend. And with that being said, he launched himself at his opponent. At that moment, the dagger finally hit its target. The monster's insides were then burned using fire blast. This made it scream in great pain. The hunter was thrilled by this result, but from the looks of it, he celebrated too early. Before he could even react, the creature hit him with its tail. And with that being said, he was thrown into a wall. Yonghoon began to blame himself for getting distracted. With that, the monster was finally ready to savor its prey. The hunter felt as if his entire body had been broken and began to wonder if the centipede truly outclassed him. Back then, it came as a shock to Yonghoon. When he was asked to become the leader of the Grizzly Guild, Pilseong wondered if he was doubting himself. According to Yonghoon, the guild members who followed the S-rank Guangho surely wanted to obey the words of an A-rank like him. He also claimed that despite his uncertainty, he would give it a try. At that moment, the old man urged him to impose his leadership. He then recalled Yonghoon's dream to create the world's strongest guild. The old man also clarified that there was a limit to the power one can amass just by gathering people. But just as the A-rank was left intrigued by this, the legendary hunter suddenly pointed at him. Pilseong wanted Yonghoon to work on himself. Hearing this, the man firmly clarified that one could only become an S-rank by being comparable to, or even stronger than one. Among the 20 Korean S-rank hunters, Se Guangho, who was the weakest of the bunch, had a power level that far surpassed any A-rank. In fact, the only reason Yonghoon resorted to dirty methods to expand this guild was because he had given up on becoming an S-rank. But to his shock, the hero saw this as trivial. Realizing the confusion, Pilseong decided to clarify what he meant. In his eyes, the S-rank was nothing but a stupid social label, and that becoming an estray wasn't the only way for him to evolve. Pilseong then explained how the S-rank label only emerged a decade ago, unlike the essence of strength that had always existed. Thus, the only way for Yonghoon to achieve his dream was to become more powerful, by training relentlessly and vanquishing his fears. Pilseong was certain that Yonghoon would reach the top by doing so. And so, after undergoing his flashback, Yonghoon returned to his dire situation. The man refused to lose hope. He once again firmly held on to his dagger. Yonghoon then proceeded to get back up on his feet. The creature decided to end him at once. Yet the hunter was determined to hold his ground. In fact, he was waiting for the perfect opportunity. As soon as the monster tried to attack, he dodged and launched himself at it. Even so, the hunter didn't come out unscathed. But at that very moment, he couldn't care less about the pain. Yonghoon then channeled his firepower into his dagger. And with that being said, he stabbed one of its legs. It was at this moment that the monster knew that it had screwed up. Fire Blast was then activated. As a massive wave of heat was unleashed from the dagger, the leg of the centipede was blown to smithereens. With that being said, the hunter regained his footing. Yonghoon had a hard time standing back up. Only then did he notice that the monster in front of him was shaking to its core. The beast had realized that it had lost to him. And with that being said, it screamed in rage and agony. A mischievous grin then appeared on the hunter's smug face. The centipede was now truly angry. In fact, one could say it was enraged by its loss. The human began to brace himself for the worst. Yonghoon accepted his doom as he was unable to move his body. Yet to his shock, someone decided to step in. Yonghoon was then protected from its legs by a sharp sword. A new challenger for the centipede had appeared. Yonghoon didn't expect the legendary hunter to appear out of nowhere. When asked how he had found them, Pilseong explained to his colleague that he was attracted by the noise. Yonghoon felt ashamed as he got rescued by Pilseong in the end. Yet to his surprise, the old man gave him praise. The legendary hunter was happy to see that his teammate had fought a strong monster without backing down. Yonghoon felt flattered by these words. The old man urged him to not act recklessly, as he had his whole life to become stronger. At that moment, the centipede rudely interrupted this conversation. Pilseong asked his friend to not worry about it and let him handle the boss. The exhausted one had no problem with this. With that being said, the insect charged at the protagonist. Its sharp legs were tearing through the ground itself. But the beast was confused, as its opponent was nowhere to be seen. Its intrigue turned to shock as it then found him above its head. The hero then came down with a powerful slash. And just like that, the centipede lost 2 more legs. After seeing this, the A-rank hunter was left amazed. Pilseong had quickly and precisely hit the weak spot of the legs without breaking a sweat. Yonghoon judged the man's fighting power and skill as immaculate. The man couldn't help but be amazed by the power of the legendary hunter. It didn't take the monster long to realize that it was at a disadvantage, and thus it started to run in the other direction. The monster was trying to run away. Yonghoon was alarmed by this, yet Pilseong had no intent of letting it escape. At that moment, his blade began to shine with a bright blue flame. This unexpected scene caught the A-rank off guard. A few moments later, Sochan started to look for the old man. Only then did this one appear behind him. Upon noticing the injured one, the man rushed to help him. Sochan even offered to act as support for Yonghoon. The Changchang Guildmaster wondered if his teammates had fought the boss upon hearing battle sounds. Pilseong confirmed that they did. The man then noticed something truly intriguing. He had just realized that the worst monster was in front of him. Sochan was also left confused as it was frozen in ice. It then came as a shock to him to learn that this was a skill that the old man had newly acquired. But the man had a hard time believing that. The legendary hunter then decided to put an end to this conversation, as they still had many monsters to kill. The exhausted Sokshan sighed, but at that moment Young-hoon declared that he finally understood why he looked up to the old man. In fact, he couldn't help but compare him to a mountain. Young-hoon also wanted to become a better hunter by walking behind him. Sokshan was happy to hear this. At that moment, the old man urged them to hurry up. In fact, he began complaining that the youngsters of today weren't fast enough. A few days later, at the Hunter Association, a lady roamed the corridors. The woman kept on humming quietly until finally she reached her lab. Upon entering, she joyfully greeted her colleague. The researcher was thrilled by how positive Si-young had been in the last few days, and the lady was embarrassed, thinking that her good mood had gone unnoticed. The happy Sumrank began to think of how 2 months had already passed since the legendary hunter disappeared inside the dungeon. One could say she was even relieved by the disappearance of this annoyance. The lady then began to think about those who chose to follow the one who disappeared. In fact, she was eager to teach them a lesson for daring to oppose the association. At that moment, the scientist stumbled upon something while looking at his phone. Upon reading it, he rushed to his colleague. The researcher thought that Seon-yang should see this, and so upon taking a look at the phone, the blood in her veins completely froze. She then began to boil with rage, and out of frustration she crushed the phone. And so, as the researcher began to cry over his device, the huntress started to wonder how they ended up in this critical situation. A little earlier, at the Russian embassy in Korea, a press conference was organized. All eyes were on the Russian ambassador to Korea, Viktor Pavlovich. The man began by explaining how one of their biggest cities had recently faced a major crisis. As soon as he pointed out that the city was saved by brave Korean hunters, the press began to talk among themselves in intrigue. And so the ambassador decided to reveal their country's heroes, who were none other than Park Seok-shin and Ko Yong-hoon. At that moment, everyone focused on the hunters. Yong-hoon felt guilty for stealing the achievement of the old man, but his colleague reassured him that the protagonist wasn't one to pursue the spotlight. The ambassador then unveiled a new system in order to reward the bravery of the Koreans. To put it simply, it would allow Korean hunters to raid freely in Russia. Upon hearing this, the entire room was left shocked. As for the guildmaster, he recalled a previous conversation. He was left quite stunned when his old master wanted to return to the fatherland. Pilseong then declared that Garov had finished negotiating with his superiors. The major general left and claimed that with the exploits of Pilseong and his peers, he didn't have to do a lot of convincing. Sipchon then asked about the nature of these negotiations. It then came as a shock to him to learn that it was about a new system that would allow Korean hunters on Russian land. In fact, he was left particularly stunned, as this move goes far beyond running away from the association in order to make a living. Pilseong predicted that this would make a huge force in Korea. Back to the present, the guildmaster couldn't help but smile. His master's prediction turned out to be right. One journalist then asked the ambassador if the system would also include hunters that aren't part of the Northern Lights or Changchan. The ambassador confirmed, as he stated that in the past, heavy regulations would be placed on any foreign hunter who wanted to raid in the motherland. Yet Russia wanted to create a special permit for the hunters of Korea. This made the same journalist curious about the nature of the permit. To sum it up, the permit was some kind of work visa where the hosting country would provide domestic security and safety to the Koreans. The press doubted that there was need for such permits, as their country had a large number of dungeons. Viktor Pavlovich was well aware of the ancient dungeon managing system in this country. Yet based on what he had heard, it also became harder for hunters to raid, as gate management was getting stricter. The ambassador then swallowed his pride and confessed that they lacked the necessary manpower to deal with the countless dungeons in their vast land. And so for that reason they needed the help of the Korean hunters. Victor promised that his country would purchase the looted dungeon items and impose reasonable fees on the hunters so that everyone could be happy. But when asked if the Korean Hunter Association had agreed to this system, the ambassador revealed that it didn't. Since the association wasn't a government organization, he claimed that there was no need to negotiate with it. The implication of these words greatly troubled the journalists. Young-hoon couldn't even begin to imagine the wrath of the association that awaited them. Yet Seok-shan was happy, as he knew that the influence of the association would diminish because of its many haters who would raid in Russia. He expected no less from the old man, who was able to turn his accidental border crossing into a national opportunity. Young-hoon then realized that Pil-song was nowhere to be seen, so a colleague explained to him how the old man had excused himself. Meanwhile, at a hospital, Seo Guangho read the articles about him being injured, which led to the re-evaluation of the S-rank standards. The man was infuriated by this, and threw his phone in frustration. At that moment, someone knocked at his door. Guangho screamed that he wanted to be left alone, as visits were forbidden. Yet as the door was opened, he immediately adopted a hostile and rude behavior. But his anger was then quickly calmed down upon seeing that the one at his door was Pil-song. Guangho's attitude immediately changed as he started to apologize. When asked for the reason behind this visit, Pil-song claimed that he simply wanted to check on him, since he was hospitalized. Shortly after, the old man began to tend to the wounded. He then asked the young one about his condition. Guangho simply declared that things could have been worse for him, seeing how he had landed in an A-rank dungeon. Pilsung also wanted to know if anything weird happened, so the SSS rank revealed how he received some kind of blessing. And when asked about the nature of this buff, he revealed how it was a blessing of indestructibility that prevents all injuries. Pilsung was greatly intrigued by this. This made him curious about how an indestructible man ended up in the hospital, and upon learning that it was because the man had almost starved to death, he almost couldn't believe it, as it was too stupid to be true. Pilsung then asked the man if he had shared his last experience with anyone, but Guanho had no one to listen to him. Shockingly, it turns out that this man had no friends. Guanho then asked the old man if he too woke up in a different dungeon. He was then shocked to learn that the protagonist had spawned in Russia. Pilsung confirmed that he had woken up in a foreign dungeon. Our hero also noticed that the S rank wasn't thrilled about the fact that he didn't stay there, and so as he decided to confront him about it, this one denied everything. Only then did someone knock on the door. In order to dodge the conversation, Guanho rushed to welcome the visitor. Yet as soon as he opened the door, the S rank was left shocked. His visitor was surprised by his welcoming energy. As for Guanho, he couldn't believe his own eyes. The one in front of him was the president of the association, Lim Taowen. The S rank was caught off guard. He was particularly startled as an unspoken tension began to rise in the room. The two elders who hadn't seen each other in months then proceeded to greet each other. Taowen then urged the S rank to let them have the room, and as he tried to argue that this was his hospital room, the president was forced to ask politely for a second time, and thus Guanho cracked. Later on, as the patient was pouting outside of his own chamber, the president asked his old companion about his whereabouts for the last decade. Pilsung revealed that he had retired to the mountains. Taowen also wanted to know why Pilsung left all those years ago. He theorized that it had something to do with this particular incident, and so he urged the elder to stop blaming himself. Yet the old man insisted that the only way for him to break the cycle of death was to leave. Taowen then explained how he and the rest went through hard times after the hero had disappeared, after creating a base for the association. In fact, the desertion of Pilsung forced their organization to face countless difficulties. Because of that, he was forced to step up as the new head of the association. Pilsung claimed that he was well aware of their struggles, yet Taowen affirmed that he wasn't. The president then demanded to know why the legendary hunter was opposing the association, when he could easily claim his chair in order to change what he dislikes. Pilsung clarified that this was not how he operates. Taowen then pointed out something important. No one would have minded the legendary hunter becoming the president in his place. Yet Pilsung insisted that this didn't mean he was the best option, just because no one would oppose it. The man was then irritated by the fact that this one still had the same high and righteous attitude, and so he demanded to know if Pilsung truly came back to take down the association. But as the old man claimed that no wrong should be left uncorrected, his words cut deep into the heart of the president. Thus, the one with the cane claimed that just because there was something upsetting him, it didn't mean that it was their fault. Pilsung then asked Taowen if he couldn't see the flaws of the association, and so this one clarified that at the end of the day he was still the head of the organization. At that moment, Pilsung was unable to recognize the Taowen that he knew and blamed it on his new title. Yet the president forbade him from speaking so carelessly, as he had no idea what they had to endure in the past 10 years. After this interaction, Taowen became convinced that his old comrade wasn't fit to become the president. In fact, he claimed that it might have been for the best that these responsibilities fell on him. Taowen then affirmed that he would be forced to make a move if Pilsung troubled the association any longer. The president gave his last warning to an old friend, and just like that, he finally left the room. Guangho, who was caught off guard by this sudden visit, asked about its purpose, and upon hearing Pilsung state that his old friend was here to give him advice, his face lit up, thinking that their war with the association finally came to an end. Yet upon hearing the old man confess that he was eager to give it the correction it deserved, he realized that his suffering was far from over. Pilsung then asked Guangho to come with him. The SSS rank could practically smell a new mess coming his way. Later on at the Hunter Association, a masked individual infiltrated the building. As Guangho had a hard time understanding why they were in the enemy's territory, the old man revealed that they were here to register new members for the new guild. Upon learning that the old man wanted to create a guild of his own, Guangho was left utterly shocked. This greatly intrigued him, as Pilsung already had the Northern Lights and Changshan under his command. As it turns out, the elder wanted to create a new guild to serve him, so that the association would leave his friends alone. He also wanted Guangho to sign up with him. Since Pilsung had no idea how to manage a guild, he needed the help of a capable S rank who was also an experienced guildmaster. Guangho immediately realized that this invitation was not exactly a polite request, and with that being said, Pilsung rushed to create his guild. Yet upon learning that a guild needed to have at least 3 members to be registered, he was left utterly shocked. Guangho found it hilarious that Pilsung didn't even know about the requirements. The old man then blamed him for not telling him sooner, yet Guangho clarified that Pilsung had barely told him anything since this entire mess started. And so, as the elder began to wonder where they could find themselves a 3rd member, the youngster suggested forcing anyone here to sign up with them. This nasty idea almost earned him another beating from the elder. Only then did Pilsung overhear someone making a fuss. One of the hunters seemed particularly pissed. Baik Sengyu couldn't accept the fact that he was asked to leave his guild. This was particularly frustrating for him, seeing how much he had given it. Sang-yuk blamed his misery on the mysterious hunter who prevented him from passing his promotion exam. And so, as he promised himself to beat this hunter the next time he saw him, his greatest fear suddenly appeared, leaving him startled. The shocked Sang-yuk didn't understand why Pilsong was approaching him, when suddenly this one asked him if he was in between guilds at the moment. And so, as the cause of his misery invited him to his guild, the man was left utterly speechless. And so, as the two men were now face to face, Sang-yuk demanded to know if Pilsong meant what he said. The old man confirmed it while pointing out how Sang-yuk was just kicked out of his. Hearing this, the hunter decided to clarify that he was the one who chose to leave his guild. The old man then asked the young one if he wanted to accept his offer, but Sang-yuk wanted to know more about the guild first, wondering if it was one of the big shots. Yet to his shock, it turned out that he was invited to a guild that was yet to be created. This caught him off guard. Pilsong explained how he wanted to create a guild with his friend, and that he needed one more hunter to be able to register. Sang-yuk was left disappointed, as he would think twice before joining one of the top 10 guilds, let alone a nameless one. And with that, he declined the request and decided to go on his way. Yet just as our heroes were about to find someone else, the man suddenly stopped. After further consideration, Sang-yuk decided to give it a shot, yet he insisted on checking the guild standards first. Pilsong immediately realized that he was being tested. Sang-yuk was well aware of our hero's power, yet knew nothing about his companion. For that reason, he wanted to test the might of this one in a sparring match. And just like that, tension began to rise between the two hunters. Later on, in the sparring room, the old man realized that he hadn't been there for a while. Guangho wondered if fighting a mere B rank was mandatory, so Pilsong clarified that Sang-yuk simply wanted to test his skills. Even so, the Seikiji rank's pride wouldn't allow him to fight someone that he outclassed by far. His pride then quickly left the chat as Pilsong offered to fight him instead. Meanwhile, Sang-yuk began to think about all of this. He was well aware of how powerful the hero was and had no choice but to admit that Pilsong was leagues above him. Yet his revenge wasn't impossible. Sang-yuk wanted to defeat the hero's friend in order to make it harder for him to create his guild. Guangyu didn't like the way he was being looked at. And so, with that being said, both parties agreed to start the match. Pilsong urged Guangyu to hold his punches against the B rank. And so, as Sang-yuk braced himself, his opponent didn't even bother taking a fighting stance. The B rank was displeased by this. And so, he urged the masked one to pull out his weapon. Yet his opponent claimed that he didn't need any fancy equipment to fight him. Sang-yuk mocked him by claiming that he wanted to pin his defeat on his lack of gear. Yet as the mask gave a mocking response, the B rank was left infuriated. And so, he charged at his opponent at once. The hunter aimed for the face, but the spear was met with some kind of barrier, which left its wielder stunned. The spearman then quickly backed away. He didn't expect his opponent to block his attack. The masked one retained his composure. Yet underneath the mask, Guangyu was furious since he was told his opponent was a B rank. Yet the blow he just blocked could only be delivered by someone that was A rank or higher. The old man spectated in silence. Only then did two hunters passing by recognize Sang-yuk. The hero overheard them describe his future member as someone stuck at B rank, since the association despised him and kept failing his promotion. They also talked about how Sang-yuk's attitude made him unapproachable, which is why he was getting kicked out of his own guild. The hunters then began to wonder about the opponent of the spearman. Seeing how solid his defense was, they realized that he was the real deal. Meanwhile, Sang-yuk found himself struggling. As his opponent asked him if he had anything left in stock, he affirmed that he did. During the last promotion exam, Sang-yuk acted recklessly, yet now he was determined not to commit the same mistake once again. With that being said, the B rank charged ahead, yet his opponent didn't even budge. Only then did Sang-yuk disappear. Guangyu was shocked as he was unable to spot him anywhere. Only then did this one charge at him from the back. Sang-yuk then attacked using his Ahar sphere. And just as the B rank thought that he was finally able to deal some damage, cracks began to form on his blade. And just like that, the spear broke. Sang-yuk couldn't believe it. Guangyu had no choice but to compliment the B rank's move. Things would have been much more dire for him if it wasn't for the blessing that gave him an indestructible body. Sang-yuk still had a hard time understanding why his weapon was destroyed. His opponent then asked him if he was finally out of tricks, and with that he began approaching him. He then unmasked himself and declared that Sang-yuk's performance was clearly worthy of an A rank, and that he would have been in a tough spot hadn't it been for his blessing. Sang-yuk immediately recognized his opponent. Guangyu then pointed out how the B rank wanted to test his abilities, and thus he grew eager to give him a taste of his true power. Now that the face of his opponent was unveiled, Sang-yuk realized that the odds truly weren't in his favor. The spectating hunters quickly recognized the SS rank hunter. And so, with that being said, Guangyu's turn to attack finally arrived, and thus he braced himself before charging at his opponent at full speed. Guangyu was eager to throw a punch. It didn't take Sang-yuk long to realize that this strike could be fatal. Suddenly someone grabbed the bear, before casually tossing him aside. And just like that, the indestructible man hit the ground. Before he could even stand up, Guangyu suddenly found a shoe in his face. Pilseong reminded the man that he had ordered him to pull back his punches. The SS rank tried to argue that Sang-yuk had irritated him, but upon seeing how angry the old man was, he immediately apologized. Sang-yuk had a hard time processing the situation. A mighty S rank hunter had been casually tossed around and was now getting stomped. and as he realized that he would have been done for without Pilseong's help, he decided to check on him. The spectators then began to talk about how it was only natural for Sang-yuk to lose, as he was up against an S rank, yet all attention shifted towards the one who easily threw him away. With that, Pilseong declared that this must have concluded the test, but when asked if he was truly B rank, the legendary hunter reminded Sang-yuk that he had seen him at the exam. Sang-yuk then assumed that the guild master would be the S rank, so he was surprised to learn that Pilseong would assume the seat and that Gwangho would act as the guild manager. Pilseong then asked the other B rank if he had any problem with this, making him deny everything. The spearman knew very well that not everyone could block an S-rank strike. This raised many questions in his head regarding our protagonist. And so, with that being said, Sang-yuk finally accepted to join the guild. Pilseong was thrilled to hear this and claimed that they should forget all of their bad history together. Sang-yuk thought the same, and so with a third member in his guild, the future guild master rushed to register it. Yet before that, Sang-yuk seemed to have something to say. He wanted to know if their guild had a name. Later on at Changchong, Xiaochong was buried in the documents, until he finally let go of the paper. The guildmaster was exhausted from all the work that piled up after their agreement with Russia. This made him think of how he hadn't talked to his master in a while. Sang-yuk prayed that Pilseong wasn't causing any more trouble. At that moment, someone knocked on his door. A startled Kim Tae-jun then entered the room shortly after. From the looks of it, he had something urgent to say. The guildmaster was then asked to turn on the news. Meanwhile, a huge crowd in the media had gathered around a certain gate. One of the hunters had a hard time understanding what the commotion was about. He was then surprised to learn that the mischievous S-ranker was going to raid the dungeon with a new guild. This was rather intriguing, as Gwangho, who disbanded his guild, announced that he was going to keep a low profile. For that reason, everyone was intrigued by the fact that he had created a new guild. Only then did the reporters notice him, and thus all rushed to him with their questions. The media wanted to know why the S-rank created a new guild after disbanding his old one because of the events at the broadcasting station. Gwangho began by clarifying that the incident in question wasn't related to the grisly disbandment. He also declared that he wasn't the guild creator, but a simple manager, which shocked everyone. This made everyone believe that this new guild was created by another S-rank hunter. Seeing this, Gwangho pointed the journalist to the actual guildmaster, and with that, Gwangho Pilseong introduced himself as the head of the new Yuil guild. Everyone was intrigued as the name Gwangho Pilseong belonged to an 80-year-old, yet the one in front of them seemed pretty young. Only then did a journalist recall this funky individual. He recognized our hero as the hunter who jumped from D rank to B rank. At first, no one was able to think of a plausible reason that would make an S rank like Gwangho serve a B rank. Then people quickly theorized that the S rank was using the young man as a facade to escape his bad name. At that moment, one reporter decided to ask Pilseong something. He wanted to know if anyone had forced him to become the guild master in order to keep the troubled S rank out of the spotlight. Gwangho was quickly stopped before he could give a piece of his mind. Pilseong confirmed that no one forced him to create Yupol, and that Gwangho was truly a manager. At that moment, the hero was asked why he decided to create his own guild. The old man thought that the answer was obvious, and thus he firmly affirmed that he had to create Yupol because the association was pure garbage. This statement stunned everyone at the scene. As the legendary hunter claimed that his guild would overthrow the current association, everyone froze in place with the sole exception of Seiyu Gwangho, who was getting used to the nonsense. Sometime later, as the association president was busy with work, someone entered his office. Someone frustrated. Sang-yuk wished to speak with the president. Taewon agreed to give her some of his time. The huntress wanted to know if he had heard the news. She then informed the president that Gwang Pilseong had openly created a guild in the hope of overthrowing their organization. In fact, she wanted to know if the president was going to leave him be. This made Taewon wonder about the answer that Sang-yuk wanted to hear. And so, as the lady reminded him that it was his duty as president to act, Taewon decided to dismiss her with no response. Seong agreed to leave. She also made it very clear that the association had no regard for the past bond between him and their enemy. The huntress even threatened to personally deal with the problem if the president didn't make a move, and thus the S-rank left the office while urging Taewon not to try and stop her. At that moment, Taewon didn't know what to think. Meanwhile, somewhere else at the association base, all began to mockingly gossip about the head of Yulwol, who wanted to oppose the association. Some even claimed that he became full of himself after directly going from D rank to B rank. Sang-yuk then approached the guildmaster, wanting to know if he meant what he said. He was annoyed by the fact that their guild became disgustingly famous as their master, declared that he wanted to oppose the organization on live TV. Yet Pilseong stated that the answer to his question was obvious. Sang-yuk still had a hard time processing that their newly born small guild had just declared war on the association. So the hero explained that no one from the association would try to come after them as long as they were in the spotlight. Yet as the spearman began to state that the organization would never take them seriously, someone recognized him. From the looks of it, the man seemed to be an old acquaintance. Sang-yuk didn't expect to meet his senior, Sang-gi here. The man immediately pointed out how the spearman was rumored to have enlisted in a new guild, yet he didn't expect him to be in the one that became a hot topic. At that moment, another person with a dark aura arrived. This one greeted the B rank with a smug face. Sang-yuk was infuriated upon seeing that this individual remained in the guild. Song-yu was truly sad that the B rank was forced to leave the guild because of Hunmin. Yet as the guildmaster, he was unable to ditch such a valuable asset. Song-yu couldn't believe that the master chose to let Hunmin stay after everything he had told him about. At that moment, the old man barged into the conversation. Song-yu apologized as he didn't notice Song-yuk's friend. Lee Song-yu then introduced himself as the master of the Million Guild that the spearman was a part of. The man had seen his old guild member by coincidence and thought to come and greet him. Meanwhile, Hunmin began to stare down Sang-yuk, who was boiling with rage. Having noticed the bad mood of his old friend, the guildmaster decided to take his leave. And just like that, the two of them left the scene. This left Sang-yuk quite frustrated. Pilsong immediately realized that this man still had a soft spot for his former guild, but the tsundere immediately denied the accusations. At that moment, Gwangho arrived with the dungeon entry permit. He didn't understand why he was stuck doing such lousy tasks. With that being said, Pilsong and his men rushed to the dungeon. Gwangho was annoyed as usual. As for Sang-yuk, his thoughts were in complete shambles. Later on, in front of the portal, a rather unwelcoming atmosphere installed itself. Everyone started to stare at our hero and his party. Sang-yuk was then intrigued as to why they were tackling an A-rank dungeon instead of a B-rank one. As in his eyes, since they were B-rank, they should enter dungeons that fit their label. Sang-yuk pointed out how the other hunters didn't want them here, so the old man asked the young one not to bother himself with the opinions of the others. One of the hunters then approached Xiao Guangho and asked if they should enter immediately since everyone had arrived. Yet something didn't click with him, as Pilseong walked ahead, claiming that they should enter at once. The old man was then intrigued as he was stopped from entering. Pilseong reminded the one in front of him that it was a hunter's job to enter dungeons, so this one made sure to remind him that he had no right to enter an A-rank one, seeing how he was an S-rank. Pilseong was then accused of defying the pecking order and using an S-rank to carry him to victory. And with that being said, this hunter demanded that the highest-ranking individual lead the way. After hearing this, our hero didn't utter a word, and yet his reaction said it all. Guangho realized that his guild master was now angry. Pilseong then asked the hunter if he truly valued rank so much. This one claimed this to be a dumb question. He reminded the old man that nothing was more important to hunters than their ranks, which made Sang-hyuk realize something. As he recalled how he had spoken words similar to these before, the spearman felt quite ashamed of himself. Pilseong then asked if anyone else opposed their entry. This made the hunters murmur. The rest of the hunters stood behind him. From the looks of it, no one wanted to accept the B ranks into the dungeon, and so with that being said, Pilseong decided to force them to welcome his guild. As our hero claimed that he wanted to teach them a lesson, the A ranks smirked, as this implied that he wanted to fight them. At that moment, the Cedric decided to intervene. He made it very clear that his guildmates were to enter the dungeon with him, and that this was non-negotiable. But the hunter tried to argue that they couldn't afford to take B ranks with them in a dangerous A-rank dungeon. Hearing this, Guangho threatened to drop out if they kept complaining, knowing very well that the dungeon would be much harder without him. The A-ranks found this to be quite unfair. Pilseong declared that they would be held accountable for their own actions before urging the party to enter the dungeon. And with that being said, the A-ranks had no choice but to obey. Sang-yuk observed the situation in silence. He was worried that the raid was going to be a complete mess, since a wedge had already been driven into the middle of the group. Later on, in the jungle-like dungeon, the party quietly roamed the map. The A-rank hunters seemed tired. Seeing this, the annoying one rushed to the S-rank and suggested they take some rest. Guangho immediately turned to his master for instructions. Pilseong immediately mocked the pathetic hunters for being out of breath after a short hike, and so as he went scouting, he ordered the rest of the party to stay on guard, even while resting. The A-ranks had a hard time tolerating someone with an inferior label, bossing them around. In fact, they were eager to see the protagonist fight a monster, so that he could finally know his place. The annoying one was certain that things would be different if the S-rank wasn't here. With that, the hunters began to wonder why Guangho joined Yuil, as he didn't seem wealthy enough to buy him out. Yet one of them seemed to be dealing with other problems. That particular hunter was struck with a stomachache. It didn't take him long to realize that he must have eaten something bad. With that being said, he decided to address the one next to him. The man wanted the other hunter and the rest of the party to know that he needed to excuse himself for an emergency. With that, Curly Hair urged his companion not to tarry any longer. And with that being said, the man rushed to answer nature's call. But little did he know, the one he spoke to had some bad intentions. After some time had passed, Pilseong found it quite intriguing that they still hadn't stumbled upon any monsters. This made him realize that they weren't dealing with mindless beasts, which is why they needed to remain cautious. Meanwhile, as the party was taking some rest, some hunters theorized that the presence of B-rankers upset the dungeon, which is why monsters weren't appearing. At that moment, the scout returned, while pointing out how the party already had plenty of rest before ordering them to start walking. The A-ranks had a hard time dealing with this, and just like that, the party went on its way. Yet Curly Hair didn't warn the rest about the one who excused himself. Meanwhile, somewhere else in the jungle, the hunter returned to the spot after vanquishing his stomachache, but only then did he notice something alarming. The man spotted no human activity. It didn't take him long to realize that the party had left without him, and so he started to wonder if it would be best to try and rejoin them or wait for the dungeon to be conquered, as moving would be risky. Yet upon hearing the creepy sounds of the jungle, The hunter made up his mind and decided to go look for them. Back to the party, Se Kwang Ho approached his guildmaster. He informed him that after counting heads, he noticed that they were missing a man. Our hero began to scream at his S rank for not noticing that sooner, which forced him to apologize. The missing hunter was someone called Yoon Dae-jung from the Perfect Black Guild, and with that, the bear asked the legendary hunter about his plan. Not even an A rank could hold his own in a high-level dungeon if left alone. Pilsong then pointed out how Kwang Ho himself almost lost his life in an A rank dungeon, making him claim that he was caught off guard. Our hero then decided to take a serious stance and claim that they needed to find the missing hunter at once. At that moment, the arrogant one came in, wondering if Pilsang truly planned on splitting the team for the sake of the search. He then insisted that it would be too risky to form small groups in such a dangerous dungeon, so the legendary hunter reassured him that he would go in alone. The A rank started to laugh at the B rank for saying such a thing, claiming that would be for the best to conquer the dungeon quickly. Yet Pilsang feared that they wouldn't clear it in time, which is why they needed to find the missing one immediately. Only then did Kwang Ho volunteer himself to go retrieve Yoon Dae-jung. This shocked the annoying one, as it would mean that the party would be alone and stuck with 2 B ranks. In fact, he was scared to have a cheap death because of their weakness. Yet to his intrigue, Kwang Ho claimed that with his guildmaster around, even suicide would be impossible. With that being said, the S rank urged the hunters to follow his orders, leaving this one quite frustrated. Pilsang then instructed his guild member to tend to the wounds of the missing one first, before returning him to the party. And with that being said, the S rank went on his way. Pilsang declared that they should keep walking as well, yet to his shock, the A ranks refused to move. For them, there was no need to listen to the B ranks, since Kwang Ho wasn't around. The hunters then called out how they made it very clear that Pilsang and Sang-yuk weren't welcomed on this raid. And just like that, the B ranks found themselves surrounded. Their supposed allies affirmed that they needed to abandon the raid if they failed to prove themselves to them. Sang-yuk immediately turned to his guildmaster, as all of a sudden they found themselves in a tough situation. The annoying one recalled the words of our protagonist regarding how he wanted to teach them a lesson, and it just so happened that he had a sudden thirst for knowledge. Seeing how they were outnumbered, Sang-yuk realized that they were in a tough situation. Now thinking that they had the upper edge, the annoying one known as Lee Bak-hun decided to take command of the party since the S rank was gone. And despite his desire to kick the B ranks out of the team, he was generous enough to decide to keep them around if they agreed to follow his orders. Pilsang asked the man if he was anything special for acting so high and mighty. And so with that being said, as the annoying one stated his name once again, Sang-yuk realized that it seemed familiar. Lee Bak-hun was the guildmaster of Moonlight. The spearman was shocked to see that the old man did not know about them. Since its few members were all A-rank hunters, Moonlight was able to become number 13 in Korea, with their leader being an S-rank candidate. Lee Bak-hun was thrilled to see that his name preceded him. The guildmaster also recognized the infamous B rank. According to the rumors, Sang-yuk's abilities were on par with A ranks. He then proceeded to claim the rumor to be fake, since the B rank chose to follow Pilsang. Bak-hun then claimed that people would obviously follow him since the S rank was gone. Before asking the B rank about his decision, Pilsang deduced that the man wanted to be the leader, simply because he was the strongest. And as this one proudly confirmed, our heroes decided that it was one more reason for him to take command. Hearing this made the Moonlight Master think that the B rank had gotten full of himself after spending too much time with Kwang Ho. Pilsang claimed this to be the perfect chance to teach the man a lesson. Seeing how this was implying a contest of strength, Bak-hun warned the old man that he might get injured inside a dungeon. Yet the elder wasn't worried about this. And with that being said, the B rank launched himself forward. He then went for a powerful jab, only to stop right before his fist could connect. Pilsang promised not to harm the young man. This infuriated Bak-hun, as it meant that the B rank was rejecting his kindness. The other A ranks were forced to step in and beg the man to stay calm. With that, he demanded to be unhanded at once. The lady urged him not to do anything rash, fearing the wrath of the S rank, but the guildmaster reminded them that they needed to defend their honor. And so, as he firmly grasped his blade, the other hunters were left horrified. Only then did he plant his sword into the ground. Fermiwant wasn't one to raise his sword against an immature child, and so with no weapon in hand, he had no choice but to let his fists do the talking. And with that being said, he launched himself at our hero, who remained unfazed. Pilseong then managed to disappear. This left his opponent speechless. Only then did he notice something quickly coming his way. Yet once again, Pilseong stopped himself right before impact. As the B rank smirked, the entire party was left shocked. Fermiwant wanted to know if he still needed to prove himself any further. The guildmaster knew very well that Pilseong chose to spare him from a direct hit. In fact, the man couldn't take it any longer, and thus he decided to regain his sword. Fermiwant couldn't stand the thought of being underestimated. And with that being said, he charged at our hero with his sword in hand. As for Pilseong, he was eager to teach the brat a lesson. Meanwhile, somewhere else in the forest, Yoon Dae-jung kept searching for his party. At this point, he began doubting his choice. Only then did he notice something moving nearby. The hunter's first thought was that this was a rescuer, and thus he immediately rushed towards the movement. But just as he seemed happy to see another human, he was stunned to find himself in front of a 3-foot-tall pigeon. Yoon Dae-jung had stumbled upon a monster. This creature was far from friendly. Its first instinct was to jump back and launch its feathers at the hunter. This one was able to dodge and protect his vital points, yet he didn't come out unscathed, as he was hit in the knee. The confrontation seemed unavoidable. Yoon blamed himself for mistaking the monster for a rescuer. The man decided not to run away, seeing how the monster was alone, and thus he decided to kill it before it could call backup. And with that, he attacked with his lightning chain. At that moment, the giant pigeon was fried from the inside, and just like that, a well-done bird fell to the ground. This greatly relieved the victor. Yet just as he was about to escape the scene, 3 more creepy pigeons appeared from behind the bushes. Yoon was horrified to learn that these creatures move in packs, and from the looks of it, the group of pigeons seemed quite hungry. Meanwhile, back to the fight between hunters, Pilseong asked his opponent if he truly wished to keep this up. The A ranks were blown away. Lee Bacon had a hard time catching his breath. In fact, he didn't even manage to scratch his opponent. At that moment, the guildmaster accused the protagonist of cheating, but Pilseong claimed that there was no trick that he could have possibly pulled. Lee Bacon then affirmed that a B rank like him couldn't possibly dominate an A rank, and for that reason the annoying one was certain that the old man was able to cheat somehow. With that, Pilseong decided to put an end to the conversation. The legendary hunter then resorted to his Dragon Slayer skill, which froze the opponent in place, and so our hero took a fighting stance. He also ordered Lee Bacon not to move. The man immediately realized what would happen to him if this skill connected with his body. And with that being said, Pilseong unleashed a freezing slash. Lee Bacon tried to beg for his life, only to then quickly realize that he wasn't the target in the first place. And while the young one was about to panic because of what was lurking at his back, the elder retained his composure. And so, as the overgrown pigeons crumbled in the ice, Lee Bacon fell to the ground, still startled by the creatures he didn't detect right behind him. At that moment, the other hunters rushed to check on him. As for our hero, he calmly approached the Moonlight Master. He wanted to know if this one still thought so highly of ranks. Lee Bacon didn't know what to say. Meanwhile, elsewhere in the dungeon, Yoon Dae-ju ran as fast as he could, but to his horror, the speed of the birds was no joke. He was able to evade a fatal injury once again. Yet this didn't mean that he was spared from the bruises. The hunter then charged his hand with lightning. He then managed to hit the creature with all of his might. The creepy thing was fried from the inside, and so, as it fell to the ground, the hunter decided to resume his escape. Yet upon tilting his head, he found a claw near his face. The human's shoulder had been grabbed, and with that, the other pigeon got a hold of him. Yoon Han was unable to free himself from the painful claws. In fact, he was at the complete mercy of the bird. At that moment, the man began to wonder if he was truly about to meet his demise, when suddenly, a savior arrived. The pigeon was beheaded in the blink of an eye. The A rank watched in disbelief. Guangko then asked the man if he was injured anywhere. He was surprised to see the S rank hunter show up. Yoon Han was then asked to stand up. He was then called out for getting lost in a dungeon despite being an A rank, which created problems for the entire party. The man apologized while clarifying that he simply had to answer nature's sudden call. Yet, to his shock, Yoon Han was then scolded for not informing anyone about his emergency. So he revealed that he did tell a hunter in the party, and that he almost lost it upon returning and realizing that everyone had left. This immediately intrigued the S rank. Guangko then theorized that the hunter in question kept his mouth shut on purpose. Yoon Han was horrified as his savior claimed that the other hunter must have wanted him out of the picture. He couldn't understand this, as he had never met anyone in the party before. Yet, as Guangko claimed that they needed to confront the culprit, determination lit in the eyes of the injured one. The S rank then declared that they needed to get back quickly in order to not incur the wrath of the elder. The A rank had no idea who Guangko was referring to, and so the bear sighed. He then declared that they had a stubborn elder on their team. Shortly after, the Moonlight Master ordered everyone to form a line. And so, after finishing counting heads, the man informed his expedition leader that everyone was ready. Pilseong asked everyone to prepare themselves, as they were to encounter the boss soon. The old man was quite happy with how quick and efficient these youngsters were. At that moment, his subordinate decided to talk to him in private. Sang-yuk wanted to know who their hero really was. After seeing how easily Pilseong dominated Lee Bae-hoon, he finally understood why even an S rank chose to follow him. This intrigued him, as the guildmaster could have obtained a much higher rank if he didn't goof around at the evaluation. And yet, Pilseong was still stuck at B rank, as he claimed them to be trivial, but the spearman affirmed that rank wasn't the main indicator of a hunter's skills. This made Pilseong bring up how Sang-yuk is on par with A rank hunters despite being B rank. The protagonist then clarified that rank was nothing but a label that the association imposed, and so the only way for Sang-yuk to stop being a pawn for the organization was to stop caring about their standards. And with that being said, the team leader resumed his way. From the looks of it, the spearman had a lot to think about. Later on, in a more humid area of the jungle, the hunters were getting worried as the fog was starting to become dense. Only then did our hero notice something alarming, and so he ordered the party to halt. Pilseong then warned them about the incoming danger. With that, the A ranks were left horrified. At that moment, a giant pigeon appeared and immediately jumped at the humans. The creature then started to throw its own feathers. Yet, the hunters were successfully able to block all of them. Pilseong ordered the men to stay calm and maintain formation. Suddenly, another pigeon tried to take Sengyuk from the side. The spearman immediately blocked the incoming claw. To get the pigeon off of him, Sengyuk then decided to resort to his skills. And so, with a quick slash, the pigeon was decapitated. Ba Han then began bracing himself, and with that, a monster was sliced in half. Only then did the hunters notice that there were more monsters lurking around, and so Pilsong urged them not to panic. Only then did he notice something. That something had huge razor-sharp claws. Its expression was devoid of mercy. At that moment, a giant chicken made its entrance. Pilsong immediately recognized it as the boss, and with that being said, the creature let out a horrifying roar. Pilsong took a few moments to think. After careful consideration, he decided to take the monster on his own. The chicken immediately sensed the danger, and thus it decided to gain some altitude and unleash a powerful attack. Yet, it wouldn't even faze the legendary hunter. Pilsong continued to counter every slash while still being able to advance. The boss then felt alarmed. After all, the hero was able to close the distance between them, and with that being said, he decided to back further away. Our hero was annoyed by the speed of the monster, and so he decided to put an end to this at once. And just like that, he began overpowering the chicken. The rest of the party was shocked to see him take on an A-rank boss alone. At that moment, the chicken charged a powerful attack, before firing a terrifying breath. Because of its power, the legendary hero had no choice but to dodge. Yet as soon as he regained his footing, Pilsong noticed something intriguing under him. Some kind of black goo had begun to cover his body. The protagonist was confused, as this matter was restricting his movements. The chicken refused to waste such a good opportunity. As it began charging an attack, the old man realized that he was in a tough situation. And just like that, the boss unleashed a powerful ray of energy. Upon seeing this, all hunters were left horrified for their leader. All hunters except one. Curly Hair was thrilled to see the legendary hunter step into his trap while fighting the boss. The hunter didn't do this out of personal spite, as he was simply following orders. At that moment, the chicken waited to see the remains of its prey. Only then was it left horrified. Pilsong had been underestimated. Such a weak attack couldn't have possibly damaged him. The monster noticed something incoming. As for the hunter, he decided to end the fight at once. And so he charged headfirst at the creature. With a single slash, the beast was decapitated. And just like that, the powerful A-rank boss was turned into a KFC bucket. Lee Baek-hun had never witnessed anyone killing such a creature on his own. The protagonist then took a short moment to catch his breath. And so after conquering this dungeon, he decided to go back to Earth. Later on, as the exit finally showed itself, the party finally exited the dungeon. Lee Baek-hun thanked Pilsace, as he was the main reason the raid was successful. The man then decided to address another matter. The traitor had finally been caught. As it turns out, one of Baek-hun's guild members turned out to be a spy for the association. This made the Moonlight Master apologize for not noticing it sooner. Even so, he still could understand why the association would do something like that. Pilsing explained that they simply wanted to cause them trouble. He explained how the association feared his guild. For that reason, they tried to set up an accident inside the dungeon, which would then be pinned on Guangho to tarnish the name of Yu-ul. The Moonlight Master recalled seeing our hero announce on TV that he wanted to oppose the association. He was well aware that those people were never a righteous organization, yet he didn't expect them to use such shameless measures, and thus Baek Guangho decided to make his guild take the association to court. But Pilsian clarified that this would also make them a target. Our hero even stated that the man doesn't need to involve himself in the incident, yet there was something that was within his power. Later on, in a brand new building, Taejun was amazed by this new guild office. Pilsian didn't know how to respond to this excitement, and when asked why he was acting like this, the B-rank simply claimed that he wanted to see the hero after learning about his new guild. He was disappointed that nobody told him, as he was certain that he could have been of help. Yet as the old man pointed out that he shouldn't ask someone from another guild for help, Taejun offered to switch guilds. But only then did someone hear this conversation. Taejun was horrified as a terrifying presence lurked behind him. That person was none other than his own guild master. Sikchan made it very clear to Taejun that he can quit their guild anytime he wants. Taejun tried to claim that he was simply messing around. Under the judging stare, the man tried his best to maintain his composure, until he finally cracked and rushed to his guild master, apologizing. Taejun then promised to die as a member of Changchan. Seeing this, the Cedric couldn't help but smile. Seok-chan reassured his employee that he was just messing around. With that, the man was left greatly relieved, yet the master seemed to have more to say. Seok-chan then declared that he doesn't appreciate his employee doing visits while still on the clock, and thus, the young man bid everyone farewell, before rushing back to work. Upon seeing this, the old man asked his old friend to go easy on his employees. Yet as it turns out, Seok-chan simply wanted Taejun out of the room so that they could talk more comfortably. The man then demanded to know what the old man Eni had asked of the Moonlight Master, and as it turns out, he wanted him to spread a rumor. This greatly surprised Seok-chan. The rumor regarded a new S-rank entering the spotlight, and when asked who he was exactly talking about, Pilshin confirmed that he was referring to himself. Seok-chan didn't expect this. Guangho then proceeded to make a questionable comment, which immediately triggered the Changchan Guildmaster. The two hunters seemed to be at each other's necks. Since the association still wanted the protagonist out of the picture, their dogs would keep seeing him as prey because he is a B rank. Yet things would become different once he achieved the highest rank. In fact, the only reason the association was having trouble dealing with Guangho was because he was an S rank. Pilsung couldn't care less about the ranking system. Yet this was the only way to protect those around him. Sokshan recognized the usual logic of his master. Guangho declared that the enemy wouldn't just let him obtain strength, as they might create a stupid criterion to stop his promotion. Sokshan then pointed out that none of the current S ranks would be worthy of the title if his master couldn't meet the new criteria, and as he implied that the weakest of them would certainly lose his status first, number 20 confronted him about this insinuation. Since the association might try to tamper with his promotion, Pilsung needed someone who was familiar with their thinking process. Sokshan began to wonder who this someone might be, and at that moment, someone walked into the room. Sanghyuk had finally shown himself. Upon entering, he immediately introduced himself to the guildmaster of Changshan. Pilsung probably declared that this young man knew the ways of the association very well. As for this, he couldn't help but feel uneasy about it. Later that night, at the association's quarters, the doors of the lab were shut. Someone inside was surfing the web. From the looks of it, the lady seemed frustrated. As it turns out, everyone was fussing about the mysterious B rank opposing the association, who carried an entire A rank raid on his own. The huntress was biting her nails in frustration. She had a hard time believing that one old man could create her so many problems. Only then did someone enter her facility. The lady approached the scientist calmly. From the looks of it, she wanted to talk. Sokshan immediately recognized this individual, as it was none other than Hunter Chung Yirim. After letting out a small smirk, the blonde one felt flattered that Sokshan recognized her, but the scientist claimed this to only be natural, seeing how this lady was the fourth strongest S rank in the country. Yirim was the only daughter of the Sokyo group, the association's biggest magic stone buyer. Because of the group's prestigious support, the hunter was able to become S rank number 4, and safe to say that this immediately got to her head. Sokshan then demanded to know the reason behind this visit. This made Yirim realize that no one had told her yet, and so she shocked the scientist by revealing how she was the new member of the Hunter Association. In fact, the blonde one was simply here to introduce herself. Sokshan claimed to be flattered by this attention. Upon arriving, the newest member realized that most of her colleagues were some old men. For that reason, since the scientist was described as the flower of the association, she was hoping that the two of them could become friends. Yet Sokshan claimed this to be hilarious. Yirim then decided to reveal a rumor she heard before arriving. The rumor regarded someone who greatly irritated Sokshan. The individual in question was none other than the young hunter, who became famous for one thing: overthrowing the association. Yet from what Yirim had heard, this young man was the legendary hunter who disappeared a decade ago. Sokshan wasn't surprised to see the Sokshan group aware of the association's confidential intel. It was then pointed out how Taewon and Pilsung used to be allies. For that reason, some association members were worried that the president might not deal properly with the rising threat. From the looks of it, the new members seemed to be more knowledgeable about the insides of the organization than Sokshan Young herself. Yirim happily claimed that she had her contacts, seeing how the association and her group were close. With that, the scientist urged the newcomer to stop beating around the bush. And with that, Yirim offered to rid Sokshan of the problematic hunter. Yet the scientist didn't understand why the newcomer was telling her such a thing. Yirim realized that Seonyong wanted to know what's in it for her. Thus, she claimed that they should stick together since they were both association members. Yirim was actually hoping that Seonyong would repay her the favor someday. This offer seemed rather tempting. At that moment, the scientist decided to address the elephant in the room and demanded to know who he was. That person was the S-rank hunter, Kaina Han, who was also a new association member. Seonyong wanted to know if he also belonged to the Seonyong group, so Yirim revealed how he was her assistant before joining the association. Seonyong immediately compared him to a knight protecting a princess, but after careful consideration, she felt like he was more of a babysitter. This comment immediately got on the nerve of the princess. She quickly realized that her sudden visit had upset the scientist, and thus she decided to take her leave. Yet before going, she urged Seonyong to keep in mind that she had offered her a helping hand, and with that being said, the lady left the room. Seonyong seemed to have a lot to think about. She had a hard time believing that Chung Yirim was now her colleague. In fact, she was certain that there was a big scheme behind it. The next day at a cafe, Sangyuk was enjoying a drink in solitude. He couldn't help but be lost in his thoughts. A little earlier, after unveiling the methods of the association to our hero and his friends, Sangyuk seemed to have something to ask. He wanted to know the nature of the relationship between his master and the master of Chungchan. This made Sungchan realize that the old man didn't fill the young one in on the details, so Pilsung reminded him that his story was barely believable, and that they had a lot going on recently. Thus, the SES rank started by bringing up the legendary hunter who disappeared a decade ago. At that moment, Sungyuk started to connect the dots. Seeing this, Sungchan confirmed his doubts. The one in front of them was none other than the legendary hunter himself. Back to the present, the young man tried to process all of this. If his master was truly the legendary Pilsung, it only made sense how even SES rank hunters bowed to him. The story of an old man suddenly gaining his youth was barely plausible. yet it was the only story that brought everything together. Sangyong then realized that he had gotten himself into a big mess. He then began to think of how he was currently in the guild of the legendary hunter. In fact, he even began wondering if he shouldn't quit immediately. Only then did someone recognize him. From the looks of it, these two seemed to be acquaintances of his. Sangyong immediately recognized Minseok and Bamsu, when suddenly he was grabbed by the shirt. One of the two was infuriated, and started to wish that Sangyong was never here. Sangyong didn't understand what was happening. Only then did the man start to blame him for something. And from the looks of it, the problem at hand didn't seem small at all. With that, Sangyong found himself in quite the pickle. At that moment, he decided to not take this disrespect any longer, and quickly made the man let go of him. Sangyong then ordered them to explain the sudden behavior. His old friends then accused him of being a traitor for leaving the guild in such a state, but the spearman affirmed that he couldn't care less about the guild after they had replaced him with Choi Hun-min. His old friends urged him to have some decency. The guild members were enraged, as they'd blamed the current state of their guild master on the traitor. At that moment, the one with brown hair calmed down his boyfriend. It was now his turn to speak. As it turns out, the guild master didn't want Sangyok to leave, yet the B rank stated that this was their fault, listing someone like Hun-min in their ranks. Yet to his shock, it turned out that he was the main reason Hun-min was brought into the guild in the first place. After all, it was he who wanted stronger hunters in the guild while complaining about the weakness of his comrades. And so for that reason, Seonyong decided to enlist in A rank, and that hunter turned out to be Choi Hun-min. At first, Hun-min's power allowed their guild to rise through the ranks and earn a name for itself. Because of that, all looked forward to what seemed to be a bright future. But Sankyuk mocked his old friends for trusting someone like that, and as it turns out, his suspicions were right. Hun-min had never cared about the Millions Guild. The A rank revealed his true face shortly after the departure of the spearman. Hun-min would then go on to force anyone who opposed him to leave the guild. Shortly after, the guild began to dance in the palm of his hand. Just like that, Hun-min acquired more power than Sankyu within the guild, making him a dominating shadow guildmaster. The A rank was now trying to kick out the founding members of the Millions Guild, which would leave Sankyu completely defenseless. Sankyuk was happy to see that they finally realized his value. He then claimed that it was their loss for not trying to prevent him from leaving. The brown-haired hunter affirmed that he had regrets, and when asked to elaborate, he claimed that he regretted not banishing Sankyuk from their ranks sooner. The guild master had high hopes for him, but this one kept complaining about their level, and even threatened to leave them. Because of that, Sankyu was forced to bring in someone like Choi Hun-min without fully thinking about the consequences first. And so, as it was claimed that it would have been better for the guild if it had never crossed paths with Sankyuk, this one didn't know what to say. And with that being said, the two hunters decided to stop wasting their time. This disappointed the silver-haired one, as he had more to say. At that moment, his colleague stopped walking. This one had no choice but to recognize the spearman's skills as a hunter. Yet he should also ask himself if Hun-min was truly at fault for him leaving without anyone trying to stop him. It was then pointed out how the B rank entered a new guild, and so his friends wished him luck there. As the two hunters left, Sankyuk was greatly troubled by this interaction. Later, at the Millions Guild, a gloomy atmosphere settled in the meeting hall. The monthly guild performance had been reviewed, and from the looks of it, the Millions Guild's performance was deteriorating. The one who called this meeting then stopped talking, and with that, the A-rank Choi Hun-min demanded an explanation. One of the men explained to him how they had lost a lot of members recently. Some of them were the B ranks that were the backbone of their guild, and so, as it was pointed out that a worse performance was inevitable, the man became frustrated. Hun-min urged the hunters to stop making excuses, as according to him, those who left the guild were simply unnecessary extras. He then affirmed to everyone that these people were preventing their guild from progressing. Choi Hun-min then took a deep breath. He wanted to know if anyone wanted to complain about his methods. At that moment, all hunters felt a shiver running down their spines. The guild master then placed the blame on himself regarding this bad performance, and none of the other hunters dared to confront him with the truth. Hun-min then declared that he had big plans for the guild. He then affirmed to everyone that the only way for the Millions Guild to thrive was for them to follow him blindly, and from the looks of it, no one dared to oppose this order. Shortly after, someone entered the room. The founding members apologized for being late. Hun-min then called out Min-sok and Beom-sik for being unable to arrive in time. He then smirked as he claimed that he could give them favorable treatment if they kept acting this way, and thus, the hunters claimed that they would be more careful. At that moment, someone in the hunter's back pocket started to buzz. Hun-min decided to put an end to this meeting, and with that being said, he made his leave. Upon exiting the room, he answered the phone. He affirmed to the other end of the line that the plan was going smoothly, and from the looks of it, they would be able to claim their rewards soon. Hun-min then affirmed that he wouldn't disappoint. Sometime later, inside of a dungeon, giant moss-like monsters appeared in front of the hunters. At first, it seemed like the spearman was about to struggle, yet he then quickly launched himself at the monsters. Sankyuk started by evading an incoming hit before descending upon its mouth with his blade. Pilseong was part of this raid as well. With a single stroke of his sword, the monster was split in half. The rest of the party was left speechless. If they had a hard time understanding that the two of them were dominating the A-rank dungeon. In fact, they even began to wonder about who they truly were. Shortly after, the raid ended with a victory, and everyone returned to Earth safely. Sang-yuk was happy to have made it out alive. Pilseong pointed out how he was starting to get a grip on A-rank dungeons. Sang-yuk gave all credit for his progress to his guild master. This left him quite pleased. The promotion exam would take place in less than a month. There was a fat chance that the association would try to delay the promotion of our heroes. In fact, according to the protagonist, the association could use this exam to try and go for their lives. Yet regardless of the difficulties, they needed to prove their skills. At that moment, Sang-yuk started to doubt that he could succeed, but his master affirmed that he would. After all of his skills were on par with A-rank hunters. Sang-yuk then recalled how his old friend had previously blamed him for Choi Hunmin entering the guild, which left him infuriated. And so he decided to show them by becoming an A-rank himself. In fact, he was eager to show them that it was a bad decision to let him leave the guild. At that moment, our hero was called elsewhere. Pilseong claimed that he wouldn't be long, and with that, the spearman was left alone. He was then approached by someone. From the looks of it, this young hunter knew him very well. Yet, to this one's shock, Sang-yuk didn't seem to remember him. The hunter introduced himself as Park Jahan and as an ex-member of the Falcon Guild. The two of them had raided a dungeon together before. Sang-yuk then asked Jahan what he wanted to talk about, but to his shock, the young hunter brought up the name of Choi Hunmin. Jahan then pointed out how the man was now a member of Million, just like Sang-yuk, so the spearman clarified that he had left this guild a long time ago. Sang-yuk then demanded to know why Jahan decided to bring this up. As it turns out, the hunter wanted to inform the spearman of Hunmin's real face. As it turns out, that person was a guild hunter. Sang-yuk was unfamiliar with this ominous term. Guild hunters were parasites that joined guilds in order to chop off their original members to take control of them for the sake of selling them off. Sang-yuk found this horrible. It turned out a handful of guilds had already fallen to Hunmin's scam, and the Falcon Guild was one of them. Just recently, Jihun noticed the Vermilion Master hanging out with the guild hunter. From the looks of it, Hunmin had set his sights on his guild. Yet then again, since Sang-yuk wasn't a member of Million anymore, this matter didn't concern him. With that being said, Jihun bid the spearman farewell while urging him to stay wary of the guild hunter. After that, Sang-yuk began to think of how the Million Guild was in danger. At that moment, the guild master approached the absent-minded one. Only then was the spearman snapped back to reality. Pilseong noticed that his subordinate was in his own world and asked him if there was anything wrong, only for him to deny it. At that moment, Sang-yuk made an important decision. But just as it seemed like he was about to tell our hero the entire truth, he suddenly ran away, claiming that he needed to take care of something urgently. Pilseong found this to be quite suspicious. Later that day, around sunset, at the Million Guild, as he walked down the hall, everyone stared at him with infringement. The members had a hard time understanding why their old colleague was in their headquarters, when suddenly someone blocked his way. The founding member demanded an explanation, so Sang-yuk claimed that he needed to see the guildmaster. Yet the one with brown hair refused to let the outsider do as he pleased. The spearman was annoyed by this and pushed his old friend to the side, when all of a sudden he heard a familiar voice. That person was none other than Choi Hunmin. The guild hunter demanded to know what Sang-yuk was doing here, and upon learning that the spearman was here to meet with the guild master, Hunmin declared that he needed to make an appointment first, and ordered him to quietly exit the guild. Sang-yuk decided to see Sang-yuk anyway, when suddenly, he found a knife pointed at his face. Hunmin declared that if the B rank kept acting up, he would have no choice but to drive him out by force. In fact, he even threatened to embarrass the spearman in front of everyone. And so, as the evil guild hunter had him on the edge of his knife, Sang-yuk found himself in a critical situation. So the video ends here. If you don't want to miss the next part, activate the notification bell, and see you next time on Tob's channel.